Welcome to Audiobook Dynasty.
One Piece, Alucard the Immortal. Chapter 1, Dracula d Alucard. Chapter 1, Dracula d Alucard. See calendar 1494. Under the world government's control, the average strength of the Marines now surpassed that of pirate factions. Major Marine branches were continuously being established, expanding, and training in an orderly fashion. While this still couldn't stop countless men from setting sail, no single individual had yet emerged, no one capable of directly confronting the Marines head-on. Just a few months prior, a pirate crew burst onto the scene, swiftly dominating one of the four seas, the East Blue, before entering the Grand Line. Even in the place known as the Pirate Graveyard, they thrived. That pirate crew's name was the Roger Pirates? What a godforsaken place. On a desolate island in the North Blue, a cold-faced young man with blood-red eyes stood by the shore. His hair was notably long, at least for a man, and his grimy clothes indicated he had been alone for a long time, without fresh changes. The boy's name was Drake, but here, he had a new name, Dracula d Alucard. He was 14.5 years old. The Dracula family, once renowned wealthy proprietors of this island, had been annihilated many years ago for resisting the Vinsmoke family, a ruling power in the North Blue. The last remaining bloodline managed to escape but suffered a cruel fate, leaving only Alucard behind. But that was before Drake transmigrated. He didn't know why he fell asleep on his desk after playing games for too long, only to wake up in a dilapidated castle as a 4-year-old child. However, from the notes left by his body's father, Dracula d Nicholas, Alucard understood that the Dracula family's destruction was due to the D in their name. Ostensibly, they were North Blue nobility, wiped out long ago by the dominant Vinsmoke family, turning their kingdom into an isolated island. Young Alucard had only survived by being hidden beneath the floorboards of the basement. Now, he was the sole survivor on the island. Alucard walked into the dilapidated castle in the center of the isolated island. Its windows were shattered, the main door was rotten, and the iron railings were rusted, clear signs of long disuse. This was the place Alucard had lived for 10 years since his transmigration. Roar! Just as Alucard was about to step inside the castle's main entrance, a colossal wild boar suddenly burst out of the nearby forest. If someone from Earth saw this creature, they'd surely wet their pants. It wasn't just a regular wild boar, it had the body of an elephant. Bang! Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Looking again, the wild boar let out a pained shriek. One of its eyes now shot out, blood streaming down. Alucard, holding a white handgun, faced the gate, but the muzzle of his gun was perfectly aimed at the gigantic boar. White gun casual, nearly 13 mm caliber, equipped with rapid-fire rounds. Alucard sneered, continuing to pull the trigger. Bang, 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 bang. Sparks continuously erupted from the white gun's muzzle. Countless bullets fired in rapid succession, turning the boar's face into a honeycomb in less than 10 seconds. Ding! Defeated wild boar. Acquired item, none. Acquired special ability, none. A voice sounded in Alucard's ear, a common occurrence for him by now. The undying, unkillable system had granted him his current strength, the transmigrator's cheat that awakened 6 years ago. The white gun, casual, in Alucard's hand was something he obtained through the system. This island had far more dangerous animals than the elephant-sized boar he just faced. For 10 years, Alucard had to constantly fight them to survive. Previously, after battling these beasts, he would receive certain special rewards, but as his level increased, the rewards disappeared. There was only one reason: the beasts here were now too low level for him. Alucard had sequentially gained 3 abilities: physical enhancement, white gun casual, and vampire physique. He also possessed a very peculiar ability, thermal vision. Vampire physique granted him the power of absolute regeneration. He would never die as long as his heart remained intact, and any injury would heal rapidly. Undying, unkillable, that's what the system meant, right? The name Dracula also carries the meaning of a vampire, a cycle of cause and effect, perhaps. Alucard remembered that thermal vision wasn't originally one of Alucard's abilities. It belonged to another well-known immortal from a different world, Alex Mercer. Through special cells in the eyes, one could instantly locate targets within a city and roughly gauge their strength based on their internal thermal structure. When Alucard awakened thermal vision, he understood. While his primary powers were those of the vampire Alucard, he also possessed abilities from numerous other immortals. Alex's black light virus abilities were proof enough. However, 2 months ago, Alucard noticed that no matter what kind of animal he killed on the island, it was extremely difficult to gain any rewards. The system's explanation was level mismatch, meaning this island could no longer contain him. Gaya gaya. The cry of a seagull drifted overhead. Alucard looked up. It was a news coup, a bird that flew across the seas, selling newspapers, the primary source of information for pirates and ordinary people in this world to learn about other events. In recent years, Alucard had also killed several pirates who mistakenly ventured onto the island, confiscating their money and acquiring a good sum. However, since there was nowhere to spend money on this isolated island, he mostly used it to buy newspapers. Of course, the money spent on newspapers was so little that it would last him a lifetime. Chapter 2, The Fleeing Pirate Crew. After cooking and eating the wild boar he had just killed, Alucard, as usual, bought a newspaper from the news coup. The moment his system awakened, he fully understood that this was the world of One Piece. However, he only truly pinpointed the exact year the year before last, when Gold Roger's name began appearing in the newspapers. Even then, Roger was an exceptionally powerful pirate, but he hadn't yet earned the title of Pirate King. Still, from the face on the newspaper, Alucard could tell that the day he'd be sent to the execution platform wouldn't be far off. Therefore, Alucard could confirm that it was now a few years before the execution. As for whether Roger had an incurable disease, Alucard didn't know. Today's newspaper reported that the Roger pirates had defeated another great pirate with a bounty exceeding 10 million berries. Alucard was already tired of such news. Unlike the contention of 100 schools era of Luffy's time, the four emperors hadn't fully emerged, and the Marines weren't at their peak. It wasn't like later generations, where royalty, celestial dragons, the 7 warlords, the 4 emperors, the Marines, and the Revolutionary Army, countless factions, all rose to prominence. Currently, the Marine side was dominated by Garp, Sengoku, Zephyr, Kong, Tsuru, and others. There were even fewer powerful pirates. Names like Whitebeard, Roger, Charlotte, Red, and Shiki almost exclusively monopolized all pirate news. Others simply couldn't catch up, no matter how hard they tried. It's about time I set sail myself. Alucard tossed the newspaper into the bonfire and clapped his hands together. He didn't know his current strength level, but he yearned to find out. Recalling the mundane days of his previous life, punching in and out of work, a decade of battling in the wilderness had completely reshaped his character. Isn't this world much better? He couldn't spend his entire life as a savage on this island. Since he was here, he intended to cause a real stir. Oh, what's that? Standing on the isolated island's shore, Alucard suddenly spotted a ship slowly approaching in the distance. The skull Jolly Roger clearly indicated the identity of its crew, pirates. Unfortunately, this was a desolate island. Generally, pirates had no reason to approach it, even though it was once a kingdom. It had since been removed from the map. Come closer, come closer. Alucard eagerly repeated these words. When the ship was about half a mile away, his body suddenly transformed into countless bats, flying toward the pirate ship. Bat transformation was another ability he'd gained from the system. However, Alucard hadn't yet mastered this technique. The duration he could remain as bats, and the distance he could fly, was only about a mile. The system would unlock new abilities based on skill proficiency. On the pirate ship, the navigator cried out upon seeing a swarm of bats descending, causing a dozen or so crew members to rush over and watch. Countless bats landed on their ship's deck, slowly forming into a youth of about 15 years old. Who are you, kid? Pirates generally didn't have good tempers, and Alucard was undeniably an intruder. Someone immediately roared at him. Who's your captain? Alucard's voice, though coming from a youth, was as deep and resonant as a man in his 20s. Ha ha. Did you just come here without even recognizing our Jolly Roger? Such courage? Truly commendable courage. Indeed, kid, you've got guts. Nearly 20 pirates burst into laughter. About half a minute later, a fierce-looking black man, over 2 meters tall, emerged from the ship's cabin. He carried a huge spear on his back. They say spearmen have terrible luck, and it seemed to be true. The first enemy he officially encountered after setting sail was a spearman. Halter Bahad? My bounty is 35 million berries. The tall man's face was cold, but a hint of pride showed when he announced his name and bounty. Alucard's pupils narrowed, and the corner of his mouth curved slightly. So that's it, a great pirate with a bounty over 30 million? Even in the North Blue, considered the strongest of the 4 seas, he was undoubtedly among the top ranks. This wasn't the great pirate era of later times. Pirates with bounties over 10 million were already formidable figures. Bahad, in Luffy's era, would probably be worth over 100 million berries. Why? Hearing Alucard's question, Bahad froze. He then heard the other continue. As a pirate with such a high bounty, why do you remain in one of the 4 seas and not venture into the Grand Line? Bahad's expression stiffened, and his crew members also looked uncomfortable. They couldn't very well admit that the Roger pirates had scared them so much they were forced to flee back to the North Blue, could they? I don't need to tell you. Bahad forced himself to calm down, speaking coldly. Your eyes tell me you're afraid, Alucard said flatly. You're running from something. Shut up. Bahad, enraged and humiliated, launched a punch with a terrifying force that no one in Alucard's previous world could match. Thud. Alucard used the back of his left hand as a shield, deflecting Bahad's heavy punch. Chapter 3, Alucard's combat style. Crack, crack, crack. Alucard's bones audibly cracked. Undoubtedly, a great pirate with a 35 million berry bounty was not to be underestimated. However, earlier, when Alucard had questioned him, he'd seen hesitation and fear in Bahad's eyes. Why would a pirate with such a high bounty show such an expression? It greatly intrigued him. Bang! Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Blood spurted from the right side of Bahad's face. Without anyone noticing, Alucard now held another gun, a large white pistol made of entirely different material than ordinary handguns. Captain! Someone cried out in alarm. Just as they were about to help, Alucard violently shoved Bahad's body away, spinning and continuously spraying bullets at the surrounding men. Bang, bang, bang! Gunshots echoed incessantly, and pirate after pirate fell. Bahad finally pulled the weapon from his back, folding it in half. It wasn't a spear, but dual blades? A rare weapon indeed. Ha! Bahad roared, slashing downwards, tearing open most of Alucard's neck. The sight sent shivers down the spines of even these battle-hardened pirates. If Alucard's head had just fallen to the ground, it would have been one thing, but Bahad hadn't completely severed it. Only a thin layer of skin at the back of his neck connected his head to his body. His head was almost entirely detached, slumped backward, with a final, chilling smile frozen on his face. 2 seconds later, that almost decapitated corpse began to chuckle, to the disbelief of everyone present. The pirates standing behind Alucard felt a cold shiver. The head, which should have been completely severed, wore a maniacal expression. Laughing, he was laughing, his lips twitching, muscles spasming. Undoubtedly, he was still alive. His head was cut off, and he was still alive? However, these were pirates whose captain had a bounty of over 30 million berries. Their shock lasted only a moment before they gradually regained their composure, beginning to speculate why Alucard was still alive. Everyone reached the same conclusion, a devil fruit. Suddenly, bats, appearing from nowhere, swarmed into the wound between Alucard's neck and head. In less than 10 seconds, these bats acted like a miraculous bomb, completely reattaching Alucard's body. Alucard suddenly raised his gun and fired a bang. Bahad quickly used his dual blades to block. When the bullet was deflected, the powerful impact forced Bahad to stumble back several steps. Yet, Alucard's attack hadn't ended. Bullet after bullet, fired in continuous succession? It seemed limitless. Help the captain! One of the crew members roared, and the remaining few quickly grabbed their weapons and charged at Alucard. Alucard's movements were utterly devoid of flair or wasted effort, with no hint of evasion. After dodging the first man's katana attack, he pointed the white gun in his other hand at the opponent's forehead and fired a bullet. Bang! One down. No bullets were aimed at him, so Bahad immediately charged into counterattack, plunging a blade into Alucard's windpipe. However, as blood gushed from Alucard's throat, Bahad, who thought it was finally over, felt something cold press against his stomach. Checkmate. Alucard laughed maniacally, the two words emerging deeply from his punctured windpipe. Bahad swiftly reacted but was still hit by a bullet, his body lurching. Oh, you were hit by a bullet from this gun and didn't fall. You can still stand. That's quite rare. As he spoke, Alucard suddenly felt a surge of killing intent from behind, aiming directly for his heart. Not good. Can't let them cut my heart. Alucard shifted his gun to his other shoulder, firing a shot over his back at the enemy. Bang! A bullet to the forehead, another man gone. Hooray! Bahad roared, charging again. Seeing this, Alucard used his handgun as a close-quarters weapon, clashing it against Bahad's blade, sparking. Humph! Alucard suddenly raised his foot and kicked at his opponent. Bahad quickly brought one hand down, blocking Alucard's kick with his knife-wielding elbow. This kid, his strength is beyond imagination. Bahad thought in surprise. He'd seen how tall and thin this guy was, never expecting such power. Suddenly, Alucard released the gun in his hand. For a moment, due to inertia, Bahad overapplied force, his blade sliding down Alucard's body. The sharp knife carved a massive wound from his shoulder to his abdomen, critically wounding him. Meanwhile, after releasing the gun, Alucard thrust that same hand into Bahad's body, impaling him completely. From behind, one could see Alucard's hand emerging from Bahad's back, a bloody hand clutching something that was still faintly pulsing Bahad's heart. Answer my question before you die. Chapter 4, The era needs more madness. Roger. I fear him. After his heart was ripped out, Bahad managed to utter this, then his body collapsed vertically, sprawling onto the ship's deck, unable to rise again. A second later, Alucard forcefully crushed the heart in his hand. Instantly, blood splattered, a significant amount of flesh and blood spraying onto Alucard's face. When Alucard licked Bahad's blood from his face with his tongue, the undying, unkillable system's voice resounded in his mind. Ding! Defeated enemy, Halter Bahad. Ability development progress. Mature vampire physique, 30%. Bat Shadow, 110%. Weapon, Casual, 70%. Blacklight Virus LV1, 80%. These three were currently the key points for Alucard's ability development. The development of Bat Shadow had already exceeded 100%, meaning this ability could evolve. Alucard merely thought about it, and immediately, Bat Shadow began to evolve, like a skill tree, branching out into a new ability. Form change, Hidden Shadow. Skill description, can change one's body form, turning into a shadow to perform dodges, attacks, and other actions. As Hidden Shadow awakened, the development progress reset to 10%. However, Alucard wasn't surprised by the new ability's awakening. He had just gained a deeper understanding of this world, of this era. He recalled a line spoken by Shiki the Golden Lion in the original story. Only Whitebeard and Roger were worthy of his recognition. Everyone else was useless, undeserving of the title pirate. Today, Alucard finally understood what Shiki meant. In this era, a 35 million berry bounty, even in the first half of the Grand Line, was enough to make one a dominant force. Yet, because of Roger, they were scared back to the four seas, content to be petty tyrants in a small corner. The sorrow of this era, an utterly boring era, with pirates who were all just trash. Roger was about to kick off the Great Pirate Era, and Alucard understood much more now. Yes, this era should be far more insane. Alucard walked to the ship's helm. He knew nothing about navigation, but he was confident that within the four seas, there was no sea king he couldn't handle. For now, he would let the ship drift freely. The four seas didn't have the erratic and unpredictable weather changes of the Grand Line, and Alucard, having lived on an isolated island for 10 years, could still roughly predict the weather. While not as skilled as a professional navigator, it was entirely sufficient for the normal weather of the four seas. Days later, Alucard's ship drifted into a new sea area, entering the waters of a town. He could see some fishing boats around. Flevance, a country known as the White Town, boasting a pristine, fairytale-like white appearance. Pirate ship. Upon seeing an unfamiliar ship slowly approaching the dock, and then spotting the Jolly Roger, a fisherman immediately cried out in alarm. Regardless of the era, pirates were always a feared presence among residents. 2 fishing boats had already spotted the flag of the Bahad pirates. Get the Den Mushy. Immediately notify the people in town to quickly call the Marines. An old fisherman quickly called his apprentice, telling him to grab a Den Mushy so they could contact the Marines and have them dispatch early. Hello, Marines? We've spotted a pirate ship in the waters. Yes, it's heading towards the town's west dock. At that speed, it'll reach shore in less than half an hour. The old fisherman spoke while vigorously pulling the controls of his fishing boat, trying his best to get away from the pirate ship. What's the pirate ship's mark? Asked the Marine on the other end of the Den Mushy. The old fisherman carefully re-examined the features of the Jolly Roger and said, a skull. The 2 bones behind it seem to be 2 guns, the kind that looks very similar to the long spears we use for fishing. 2 crossbones replaced with guns? The communicator immediately thought of someone upon hearing this, Halter Bahad, a pirate with one of the highest bounties in the North Blue, known for wielding a large spear. His bounty was among the highest in the North Blue. Immediately assemble the men. Inform Captain Julius. We have a major situation. The communicator hung up the Den Mushy and quickly relayed the message. Upon hearing it was Bahad's pirate cruise ship, the Marines, who had seemed lethargic moments before, instantly became energized. It seemed it would be a tough battle. 20 minutes later, over 200 Marine soldiers were assembled at Flevance's west dock. Cannons were already set up on the pier, ready for action. 5 minutes later, a pirate ship slowly entered their line of sight. A Marine officer picked up his binoculars, identified the flying pirate flag, and exclaimed, no mistake. It's the Bahad pirates. Their captain has a 35 million berry bounty. He's the great pirate who retreated from the Grand Line back to the North Blue 2 months ago after being defeated by Gold Roger. Julius, one of the highest-ranking Marine officers present, heard this, his expression solemn. He raised his hand and commanded, cannons, prepare, fire when the ship enters firing range. Mature vampire physique, grants abilities far exceeding those of ordinary humans, including superhuman speed and strength. It allows for rapid regeneration, and as long as the heart remains intact, the user cannot be killed. The vampire physique also possesses the powerful ability to continuously evolve. https://ph.pinterest.com/pin/7187464217832750021. Chapter 5, The Shocked Captain. The moment the Bahad pirates' ship entered the cannon's firing range, Captain Julius, one of the highest-ranking Marine commanders here, roared, fire. Boom, boom, boom. Sparks erupted from the muzzles of 3 large cannons simultaneously, and 3 dark cannonballs hurtled towards the pirate ship. Humph. Alucard, who was controlling the ship's helm, sneered. In an instant, he moved to the bow, facing the 3 cannonballs. He pulled out his white gun casual and fired repeatedly. Bang, bang, bang. As the owner's abilities grew stronger, so did its power. The cannonballs exploded in midair, but this scene didn't surprise Julius. It was to be expected. If a great pirate with a bounty over 30 million could be so easily killed by cannons, he'd suspect it was a fake. Suddenly, the pirate ship accelerated. Using cannons at such close range carried the risk of splashback. Julius took a step back and waved his hand, shouting, "Rifle squad, prepare." Immediately, the rifle team, carrying rifles over a meter long, stepped forward, knelt, and aimed at various points on the pirate ship. The moment a figure appeared, they were to take them down immediately. When everyone saw the shadow at the bow, someone immediately opened fire. It hit. A marksman shouted excitedly. He had seen with his own eyes his bullet hit a pirate standing at the bow, blowing his head apart. Not yet, Julius said gravely. Those who were still cheering looked again. The pirate, whose head should have been blown apart, stood eerily upright despite the headshot, his head tilted backward. Now, it slowly turned back around. Next, a horrifying scene unfolded. A boy, about 15 years old, was biting a bullet with his teeth, his face contorted in a ferocious expression as he stared at them. Biting a bullet with his teeth? What incredible reflexes! Julius realized the problem and quickly asked his adjutant beside him, who is that young man from the Bahad pirates? As a top bounty pirate in the North Blue, Bahad's movements had always been closely monitored by the Marines. Julius remembered all intelligence, including any new members joining his pirate crew, but he had no recollection of this young man. If that were the case, then who was he? Was he a new recruit? The Marine officer nearby pulled out a stack of wanted posters from somewhere. After quickly flipping through them, he turned to his superior and reported, "Report. He's not on any of the Bahad pirates' wanted posters. Could he be a new recruit?" This thought surfaced in Julius's mind. He never believed the young man at the bow had the strength to kill Bahad. He looked only about 15, and while geniuses weren't unheard of on the Grand Line, such individuals weren't easy to stumble upon. But unfortunately, he had stumbled upon one. Marines. Alucard looked at the group of soldiers dressed in blue and white below, instantly recognizing their identity. Although this world had many factions, it could broadly be divided into two main forces, the Marines and pirates. You're taking me for a member of that pirate crew? Don't make me laugh. Alucard tossed the putrid corpse he was holding overboard. The Marines below flinched as a foul-smelling corpse was thrown from the ship. Then came the second, and the third. Due to the previous battle, many had fallen into the sea, only 7 bodies remained in total. This is. Julius began to inspect the corpses. It was already autumn, and the weather was cold, so the bodies hadn't decomposed too quickly, and their faces were still recognizable. However, the stench was truly unbearable. This is. Halter Bahad's corpse. The Marine officer exclaimed in shock, immediately drawing everyone's attention. Julius looked closely, the height, facial features, and distinguishing marks. After a careful comparison, he realized it was indeed him. A great pirate with a 35 million berry bounty had actually been killed. With that realization, Julius turned his head to look back at the pirate ship. Alucard had already jumped from the bow, landing on the dock. Are you a pirate hunter? Julius asked gravely. Give me the bounty. Alucard's single sentence made everything clear. He didn't admit to being a pirate hunter, but claiming the bounty was an easy take. Why not? Julius frowned tightly. After glancing at his subordinates, he shouted, fall back. You, what's your name? As his subordinates began preparing to return to camp, Julius asked Alucard with a serious expression. Alucard. For a man like him, whose subordinates had dared to shoot at him moments ago, Alucard had no pleasant words to offer. His immortal body couldn't yet survive without food and drink, so he still needed money. Moreover, Alucard was a thorough hedonist, so he greatly desired wealth. 10 years of living like a savage was truly unbearable. Chapter 6, The World Government is Short on Cash? Flavance, North Blue. 80 years ago, a special ore called amber lead was discovered in this town. It could be used for tableware, seasonings, even cosmetics. This unique resource quickly made Flavance a renowned and prosperous town. Julius, for his part, had straightforwardly handed over the 55 million berries to Alucard. Welcome back next time. At the entrance of a clothing store, a waitress enthusiastically bowed to Alucard's retreating back. His recent purchases had earned her a hefty sum. Alucard had now shed his grimy, tattered clothes, donning a blood-red robe and a wide-brimmed formal hat that almost entirely covered his shoulders. Walking along the street, Alucard couldn't help but glance at his reflection in a jewelry shop window. Though his face still held a hint of youthfulness, this was truly Alucard, wasn't it? If you're not in a hurry to leave, wait here for a while. Some interesting figures will arrive. Alucard recalled Julius's words to him as he left the Marine branch with his bounty. He didn't have mind-reading abilities, but he could infer Julius's intentions. At the very least, it wasn't a hostile invitation to ambush him with reinforcements. Interesting. I'll wait a few days then. Alucard wandered through the streets, frequenting various hotels in Flavance over the past few days, all while testing his abilities. He discovered a problem through his thermal vision. Some people in this town harbored peculiar, microscopic toxins within their bodies. It wasn't obvious yet, as this poison was latent. In other words, you wouldn't notice it at first. By the time you did, it would be severe enough to be fatal. Besides tracking enemies, thermal vision could also reveal differences between individuals and ordinary people. Alucard used this ability to discern the distinctions between those who were poisoned and those who were not. This was poisoning, and the source of the poison. Alucard held a piece of white stone in his hand. This was the so-called amber lead, which could be used to create many everyday products. The more frequently a person came into contact with it, the more easily they would be poisoned. Indeed, most of the poisoned individuals, Alucard observed out of curiosity, were workers who had long toiled in the mines, responsible for excavating amber lead. At this rate, in perhaps 10 years or so, the poison will spread to an uncontrollable degree. Alucard chuckled, crushing the amber lead in his hand into powder. He had no intention of being a savior. Besides, Flavance, already blinded by the profits from amber lead, wouldn't listen to such warnings, would it? Beneath Alucard's feet was the very quarry where amber lead was mined. Many people inside were already poisoned, though it hadn't yet manifested. Soon enough, they would likely die because of this stuff. Hold on, the price of this material must be reduced by another 20%. Alucard, just about to leave, suddenly heard an argument from another side below. He turned to see a group of men in suits arguing with a group of commoners dressed as workers. 20% is too much. It won't even cover the mining costs. On the workers' side, a ragged foreman anxiously waved his hands. Right now, the amber lead is already overmined, and finding more resources is getting harder and harder. If you reduce the price by another 20%, we won't even be able to afford food. On the suit-clad men's side, the leader, a man in a black trench coat with an ill-intentioned demeanor, sneered. Are you perhaps unaware that we have authority authorized by the world government? Do you intend to defy the government? Amber lead could be used to create special weapons, so the world government had invested heavily in its acquisition. The man before them, Maswick, was responsible for handling this matter for the government. Purchasing amber lead in large quantities was big business. With such a massive sum of money at stake, Maswick immediately harbored his own selfish motives. This was a golden opportunity for him to get rich. The vast amount of money allocated by the government meant that if he could just drive down the price slightly here, he could pocket a huge commission. For this reason, he was now demanding a 20% reduction in the price of amber lead. This utterly terrified the workers of Flavance. Although amber lead sold for a high price, excavating it was time-consuming and labor-intensive. Originally, they earned a decent sum, but Maswick's demand for a 20% reduction would completely strip them of their profits, forcing them to operate at a loss. However, if they tried to resist, the other party could simply invoke the name of the world government, leaving them to simmer in silent resentment. This is for the sake of world peace. The government's finances are tight lately, and purchasing large amounts of amber lead is also for peace. You should understand the government's difficulties. Maswick spoke righteously, making Alucard above him chuckle involuntarily. The world government having tight finances, this was truly the funniest joke he'd heard since arriving in this world. The already quiet atmosphere. Chapter 7, The Intruding Strongman. The world government really has to be this way, don't they? It just wouldn't do otherwise, would it? Alucard held his hands out flat, his words causing everyone present to change their expressions. Though he spoke somewhat indirectly, who couldn't tell he was mocking the government? Maswick gave a cold laugh and quickly walked in front of Alucard. Although Alucard's body was still young, he already possessed a surprisingly tall stature. However, in the bizarre world of One Piece, where people commonly stood 2 or 3 meters tall, Alucard's height was only slightly remarkable. Dare to slander the world government? Do you know what crime you've committed? Maswick stood barely a meter from Alucard, staring directly into his eyes as he spoke. I hope you'll enlighten me, Alucard said with a smile. Maswick snapped his fingers, and his subordinates, from the same department, pulled rifles hidden in their suits. These weapons were several grades higher than the marine rifles seen earlier at the dock. Bang, 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 bang. Gunshots rang out, countless bullets striking Alucard's body. Maswick, standing only a meter away, remained perfectly calm, even smiling at the sight. This showed he was well accustomed to such events. The firing continued for over 10 seconds, until Alucard's body was riddled with holes. The miners, witnessing this, gaped in shock, unable to speak. After a long moment, one miner, a towel wrapped around his head, turned and knelt, unable to stop himself from vomiting. Bulwark. 1, 2, 3, over half of the miners couldn't bear the sight and turned to retch. This death was too chilling, the entire body was full of holes, not a single piece of intact skin remaining. This is the consequence of defying the government. This person just now severely slandered the government and has been executed. Maswick shouted, making many miners frown internally. Regardless of the specifics, was a single sentence really enough to warrant this? Maswick turned and waved his hand, bury the trash. Suddenly, the government agents all showed shocked expressions. One of them yelled, Officer Maswick? Behind you. Maswick heard this and instinctively turned to look. The moment he turned, something cold pressed against his forehead. The corpse held a large white gun in its hand, its muzzle aimed directly at his forehead. The man whose entire body had been ripped apart was actually still able to raise a gun? No, was he even alive? Maswick, farewell. Alucard bared a fanged grin. Just as he was about to pull the trigger under Maswick's shocked gaze, he suddenly felt a huge force push his arm away. Alucard used this immense force to spin, regain his balance, and circle back to his original position. Standing before him was a colossal figure, about 3 meters tall. Though he didn't know who this person was, they had certainly interrupted his shot. Bang, bang, bang. Alucard fired without hesitation, but the opponent simply extended an arm. In an instant, that arm turned completely black, blocking the bullets that could easily pierce even an elephant. Impressive. Alucard couldn't help but praise him. Until now, whether animal or human, this was the first being capable of blocking casual's bullets head-on. At the same time, both men clearly saw each other's appearance. The one who stopped Alucard's attack was a powerfully built man, with a purple buzz cut and a massive, 3-meter-tall physique, appearing to be around 50 years old, with bulging muscles indicating explosive power. He wore a marine coat? A marine? So strong? Even without using thermal vision, Alucard could feel it. This guy was truly powerful. Completely different from the low-level opponents he'd faced before. Alucard formed his left hand into a hand blade and powerfully chopped downwards at the opponent, who met him with a punch. A brutal fighting style. A hand blade and a fist. The two collided, creating a massive concussive force that sent those around them staggering backward. Maswick was already on the ground, paralyzed with fear. Crack, crack, crack. Alucard's left hand began to make bone-shattering sounds. However, he didn't fear pain. Instead, he put his full strength into attacking his opponent. What a crazed fighting style! Was he willing to lose that hand? The marine across from him was startled by Alucard's frantic behavior, but then armament haki enveloped his fist, overpowering Alucard. Boom! Alucard was struck by the haki-enhanced punch, slamming into the stone wall of the quarry behind him, deeply embedding himself in the rock. The shattered rock and resulting dust momentarily obscured everyone's vision. About 5 seconds later, the large man suddenly felt a sense of danger. He looked down and saw Alucard appear from his own shadow, a head and a gun emerging. Due to the discussion, combined with the echo in the mine, meant Alucard's laughter was immediately heard by everyone. Alucard grinned, baring his fangs. Checkmate. Chapter 8, Gaining a Wound on Zephyr. Bang! A bullet struck the large man's body, drawing blood. Even with his incredible offensive and defensive capabilities, those were only active when he was in a controlled or vigilant state. This was akin to a ninja in Naruto. No matter how strong they became through training, if they were asleep and completely unguarded, a fruit knife could send them to the afterlife. But if they covered their body with chakra, they could become immune to blades and bullets. This large man had believed Alucard was already thrown far away, so for a brief moment, he relaxed his guard, completely unaware that Alucard would appear in his shadow. Alucard seized that instant of laxity to fire a bullet that struck his body. However, it must be said that the bodies of people in this world defy common sense. A casual bullet, capable of easily piercing even elephants and sea kings, struck this large man, yet remarkably, it failed to penetrate his body. This spoke volumes about how supremely he had honed his physique. Ding! Defeated a Fleet Admiral level powerhouse, Zephyr, 1 wound. Ability development progress. Mature vampire physique, 45%. Bat Shadow, mature 20%. Weapon, Casual LV3, 105%. Blacklight Virus LV1, 110%. Hidden Shadow LV1, 5%. Alucard hadn't expected that simply inflicting 1 wound on his opponent would push 2 of his abilities to their limits, further highlighting the terrifying nature of the man before him. Alucard suddenly recalled, Zephyr, wasn't he that Marine Admiral? One of the iconic figures of the Marines, a top-tier powerhouse of the era. Having recognized his opponent, Alucard grinned. So that's it, that's why? No wonder fighting him yielded so much experience. This time, it was just 1 wound. If he were to kill Zephyr, the experience gain would probably be insane. Chief Instructor Zephyr. At that moment, countless Marines, no less than 300 of them, stood around the stone quarry. In front of these regular Marines stood a man as tall and formidable as Zephyr himself. He jumped to Zephyr's side, examining his wound. Cousin, lend me an ice blade, Zephyr said coldly. With a flick of the young man's hand, a small, fruit knife-sized blade of ice mist condensed into his palm and was handed to Zephyr. An ice fruit user. The future Marine Admiral, cousin. Zephyr took the ice blade, pulled open his collar, and sharply cut into the wound on his shoulder. To the disbelief of the world government employees, he used that ice blade to pry out the bullet. Seeing this, Cousin quickly raised his hand and froze Zephyr's wound to prevent infection. At this point, Maswick popped up again, yelling at the surrounding people. After insulting the government, this kid wounded Chief Instructor Zephyr? Eliminate him immediately? Eliminate him. Zephyr turned and glared at Maswick. The killing intent honed from countless battlefields was something a mere profiteering government stooge couldn't possibly withstand. Maswick immediately stumbled backward, falling onto his backside. Are you the pirate hunter Julius spoke of, the one who took down the 35 million berry bounty pirate? Zephyr turned and asked Alucard. Pirate hunter, interpret it as you wish. Alucard shrugged, a strange smile on his face. He glanced at the large marine contingent surrounding them. It seemed a continued fight was impossible for now. I'm going back to sleep. I still need my afternoon nap. Alucard turned to leave, but several marines immediately blocked his path. Many had witnessed the young man's fight with Zephyr. Wait, let him go. Zephyr's cold command made the soldiers blocking Alucard's path look at him in surprise. A few seconds later, they stepped back, clearing a path for Alucard. Tell me your name, pirate hunter, Zephyr said, pulling his collar back to cover his wound. Dracula de Alucard. Alucard left his name. Cousin took one last look at Alucard's retreating back, then turned and asked lazily, how should we handle this? Don't worry, I need to resolve this matter here first. Zephyr walked up to Maswick, who was sprawled on the ground. When Zephyr's shadow fell over him, like an immovable mountain, the awe-inspiring presence he radiated left Maswick speechless with fear. Although the government usually paid little mind to the Marines' opinions, if they were to weigh him and Zephyr on a scale, Maswick wouldn't even leave a speck of dust behind. I need you to thoroughly explain the full sequence of events to me, Executive Maswick. Of course, it's fine if you want to lie. I will investigate each and every resident here individually. Zephyr was originally the instructor for Cousin's current class of Marine students, tasked with escorting Maswick to purchase amber lead on behalf of the world government, then returning. This was their practical training mission. Zephyr hadn't paid much attention to the amber lead purchase itself. However, when the Marine captain of this branch mentioned a pirate hunter, only around 15 years old, had taken down a 35 million berry bounty pirate here, it piqued Zephyr's interest. Alucard's actions during this period had already been observed by the Marines, so Zephyr easily found out Alucard was at the mining site. He came to investigate, and unexpectedly, he stumbled upon this scene, leading to everything that just transpired. Chapter 9, Insane Leveling. Alucard bought an identical outfit, plus a spare, from the same clothing store. Under the stunned gaze of the staff, he returned to his hotel room. His fight with Zephyr had been painful, but also incredibly exhilarating. Wasn't it? Like playing a video game, if given the choice between constantly one-shotting enemies or constantly getting beaten, Alucard would rather choose the latter. He'd prefer to clash with opponents far stronger than himself than waste time on trash. Though not pleasant, Zephyr was truly the strongest opponent he'd encountered so far. Just wounding him once during their skirmish had led to such exaggerated evolution. Ability development progress. Mature vampire physique, 45%. Bat shadow, mature 20%. Weapon, casual LV3, 105%. Blacklight virus LV1, 110%. Hidden shadow LV1, 5%. He gained 2 ability upgrades in one go. Blacklight virus increased to LV2, now at 10% progress, and simultaneously awakened a new skill, Clawed Iron Hands. Alucard's physical attributes like mastery, speed, and agility primarily stemmed from the Blacklight virus. This meant that whenever the Blacklight virus leveled up, his overall physical attributes also strengthened. His weapon, Casual, finally advanced from LV3 to LV4, which wasn't surprising, as it was the most frequently used ability. However, what truly intrigued Alucard was another matter. His other gun, Jackal, had yet to awaken. Compared to Casual, Jackal possessed even greater offensive power. And unlike the original Alucard, the current Alucard had the power of continuous evolution, and he eagerly anticipated how strong his powers could ultimately become. That Kuzan, dressed in plain clothes, made it impossible to guess his rank. It seems I truly arrived too early. I really want to get to the Grand Line quickly. Alucard stored his gun in his shadow. After awakening the hidden shadow skill, he could store things in his shadow at will. Frankly, he was very curious, could his shadow even store living beings? Speaking of which, was Julius's interesting event referring to this? Alucard suddenly remembered. Before he was about to leave Flavance, Marine Julius had held him back, saying something interesting was about to happen. He was probably referring to Zephyr's arrival. Alright, it's time to prepare to set sail. At the very least, I need to get some provisions. Alucard didn't need food. Ever since he awakened his vampire physique 2 years ago on the isolated island, his only dietary requirement was blood, though animal blood was truly unpalatable. However, Alucard had a liking for wine. In his previous life, his old man was a wine enthusiast, and Alucard had picked up a bit. While he couldn't compare to a professional sommelier, it didn't hinder his appreciation for good wine. The bounty from Bahad's head, a hefty 35 million, was now nearly half spent by Alucard, indicating his lavish spending habits. He couldn't help it. After being cooped up on that isolated island for so long, finally entering civilization meant he naturally wanted to enjoy himself thoroughly. Walking on the streets, Alucard felt it was highly likely he'd be wanted soon, having wounded Marine Admiral Zephyr. That was certainly enough to put him on the wanted list. Actually, whether Marine or pirate, it didn't matter. In this world, a place where so many monsters lived, without strength, nowhere was truly safe. Therefore, whether he became a pirate or not, it didn't significantly affect Alucard. Inside the Marine branch in Flavance, after interrogating Maswick and learning the full story, Zephyr reported the incident to Fleet Admiral Kong, then sat on a sofa, looking displeased. He had no interest in government dealings, believing that the civil matters belonged to the government and military matters to the Marines, with both sides ideally keeping out of each other's way. But he never expected that his rare intervention in government affairs would lead to such a mess, infuriating Zephyr. Zephyr-sensei. Zephyr's third chief student, Kuzan, walked in from outside, holding a photo Alucard's. Kuzan placed the photo on the table in front of Zephyr and said, Dracula d Alucard. If we're issuing a wanted poster, use this photo. Should I report it? When Zephyr was communicating with Kong via Den Mushi earlier, Kuzan had been waiting on the other side. He noticed that Zephyr hadn't reported Alucard's incident and found it very strange. Kuzan, you go test him. See if there's a chance to recruit that kid. Zephyr tore the photo directly in half. Kuzan was momentarily stunned. After 2 seconds, he waved his hand and said, wait, I'm not good at this sort of thing. Why don't you go yourself, sensei? Chapter 10, They really want to dissect you. After pressuring Kuzan to go out and test Alucard, Zephyr called Julius over. The results of Julius's punishment were in 6 months' pay gone, and his position temporarily suspended. Upon learning that Julius had blindly opened fire without properly observing the Bahad pirates' situation, Zephyr had inwardly given the man a failing grade. As the Marine Chief Instructor, Zephyr was famously strict throughout the entire Marine organization. Before using cannons to bombard a pirate ship, one had to first confirm whether there were any civilian hostages on board before initiating bombardment. Of course, this troublesome rule was only adhered to by Zephyr, known as the no-killing admiral. Many of his students, now influential figures in the Marines like Sakazuki or Borsellino, were of a different disposition. They wouldn't care if there were hostages on board, they'd just blast away to kill. This was like a school rule against dating. The rule was indeed written there, but how many people actually followed it? One could only say Julius was unlucky to run into Zephyr. He had no choice but to accept his punishment. Based on your observations, that guy possesses reflexes strong enough to bite bullets, correct? Yes. Hearing Zephyr's question, Julius quickly nodded in affirmation. Zephyr crossed his arms, recalling his battle with Alucard. He possessed an immortal body that could rapidly recover from any attack, primarily fought with a giant pistol and martial arts, and could even dive into shadows, a very peculiar ability. His estimated combat level was not inferior to a vice admiral, especially his fearless and insane combat techniques, which even Sakazuki, the most aggressive among Zephyr's students, could hardly match. At least Sakazuki would still dodge, while Alucard simply didn't evade at all. Attack, just attacking like his life depended on it. Zephyr had never witnessed such a fighting style before. Excuse me, can we talk for a bit? On a street in Flavance, Kuzan found Alucard standing in front of a wine specialty shop, gazing at the wines on display. He proactively approached him to greet him, but from his hesitant tone, it was clear he wasn't good at this sort of thing. Alucard heard him, turned, and watched him for a long time. Alucard, nearly 15 years old, already stood over 180 centimeters tall, but he still seemed small compared to Kuzan's 250 centimeters. However, Alucard didn't care at all, as being that tall simply didn't fit his aesthetic. Sure, but you're paying. Alucard pointed towards the wine shop, making Kuzan's mouth twitch. The dazzling array of wines inside looked very expensive. Kuzan drew out the sound, hesitating for a long moment. Remembering Zephyr's order, he ultimately resigned himself to his fate. Might as well bleed a little. After sitting opposite each other at a table in the wine shop, Alucard took the prestigious wine list handed to him by a sommelier. After rapidly checking off several items, he returned the list. Pack all of these up and send them over to me. And this person, pack him too. With that, Alucard pointed at Kuzan again. Damn it. Kuzan cursed inwardly. He had originally intended to pay for some himself, but now it seemed he should apply for military funds instead of spending his own money. Half a minute later, seeing that Kuzan still hadn't spoken, Alucard said nothing more, just waited. He figured he'd leave once the server had packed up the wine. Another minute passed before Kuzan finally gathered his thoughts and said, "Oh, right, let me introduce myself first. I'm Rear Admiral Kuzan from Marine Headquarters, currently serving as an aide under Zephyr-sensei." Since he was the one treating, Alucard still gave Kuzan enough face. Dracula D. Alucard. No particular status. There was no need to mention his identity as a prince of a ruined country. Your fighting style against Zephyr-sensei earlier was truly impressive. An automatic healing ability, could it be immortality? More than recruiting Alucard into the Marines, Kuzan was more interested in the terrifying regeneration Alucard had displayed. Alucard crossed his arms, a grin splitting his face. Ignorance. Nothing truly immortal exists in this world. Alucard, with his vampire physique, would not die as long as his heart remained intact. Combined with the Blacklight virus's ability to rapidly heal external wounds, even if an attack hit his heart, as long as it wasn't a certain level of attack, it still couldn't kill Alucard. However, even he could not truly be called immortal. But this was merely the Alucard from the original story. Alucard himself eagerly awaited whether the undying, unkillable system could enable him to achieve true immortality. That's a pity. But if some government scientists knew, they might be very keen to dissect you. If he didn't understand Kuzan's personality, Alucard would genuinely think this guy was mocking him. Alucard chuckled, then said, "Why exactly are you looking for me? Just tell me plainly now. It's great you're so straightforward." Kuzan clapped his hands. Zephyr-sensei thinks you're a talented individual. He wants to know if you've considered joining the Marines. Chapter 11, For myself, for pleasure. Join the Marines? Don't make me laugh. Alucard crossed his legs, his hands clasped over his knees. I don't have a single shred of justice in my heart. While for Alucard, any place was much the same, compared to the Marines with their endless rules and regulations, he'd rather drift across the seas alone. I thought as much. A real shame. Kuzan had no intention of pressing the issue, not only because he wasn't good at it, but also because he could tell from every angle that Alucard's mind was made up. It was impossible to change his opinion. Excuse me, esteemed customer, thank you for waiting. Here are the 22 different bottles of wine you ordered. The total comes to 5.4 million berries. We've rounded it down for you. Just then, two waiters, one on each side, placed a large wooden crate on the floor beside Alucard and Kuzan's table. One waiter looked intently at Kuzan, his meaning clear, pay up. Kuzan's face immediately contorted as if he'd eaten something foul. You can get the money from your town's Marine branch later. Kuzan pointed to the Marine symbol on his cap, indicating his identity. The Marine's influence was vast. Hearing Kuzan's words, someone immediately left, seemingly to get the money from the branch. Whoosh. Suddenly, the shadow beneath Alucard's feet rapidly expanded, dyeing the pale marble black. In an instant, the ground became like a black hole, sucking the wooden crate containing over 20 bottles of wine into it. Approximately 5 seconds later, the crate was completely swallowed, and the shadow returned to Alucard's feet. A devil fruit user. The waiters were surprised, but didn't scream exaggeratedly. After all, the North Blue was the strongest of the 4 seas. Even ordinary citizens had some understanding of things like devil fruits and knew that many pirates and marines possessed incredible abilities. Arera. What a convenient ability. Kuzan exclaimed, quite astonished by the sight. May I ask one more question? Kuzan continued. What? A sharp glint flashed beneath the sunglasses. What is your purpose for setting sail? Do you simply want to be a pirate hunter and earn money with your skills, or do you intend to become a pirate, like Roger or Whitebeard, aiming to conquer the Grand Line? Even if he couldn't recruit him into the Marines, Kuzan at least wanted to understand what kind of person Alucard was, or from his words, discern what path he might take in the future. Why did you join the Marines? Alucard countered. To thoroughly uphold justice. Kuzan gave a serious yet strangely nonsensical answer. Alucard grinned. I'm not like you. How are you different? People live for themselves. I live for myself, for my own joy, my own survival, my own life. In other words, I don't pursue justice. I pursue only one thing, pleasure. Alucard's objective was that simple. Simply put, it was to make himself feel good. Leaving the island was for this reason, fighting was for this reason, and sitting here talking with Kuzan was for this reason. For himself, for the feeling of pleasure. You're a terrifying individual. I think I should request a special unit just to watch you. Although Alucard wasn't famous yet, and his encounter with Zephyr here was purely coincidental, Kuzan still felt that Alucard would become extraordinary in the future. Alucard stood up. It's rare to encounter a Logia-type devil fruit user. Let's have a fight, Marine Rear Admiral. Era a fight? I'm really not motivated. Let's just forget it. Kuzan scratched the back of his head. When it came to this sort of thing, he still adopted the policy of avoiding it if possible. However, before he could finish speaking, Kuzan felt something press against his throat. To outsiders, it looked as if Alucard had pulled out a gun and was pointing its muzzle directly at Kuzan's throat. Hey, kid, don't do anything too extreme, now. Kuzan drawled, and as he finished speaking, his body began to turn to ice. Alucard found that the muzzle of his casual was already covered in a layer of ice, blocking the opening. Alucard whistled, then suddenly grinned. How interesting? All right, come on, Marine Rear Admiral. Arera, this is such a hassle. Kuzan stood up and stretched lazily. He wasn't in a hurry because he didn't sense any killing intent from Alucard. Now, he was certain that Alucard's words were true. He acted for fun, for pleasure. This was the principle the man named Alucard lived by. Among the 3 rarest devil fruits, the Logia type, Alucard had long wanted to see one firsthand. Could his attacks actually harm them? This counts as a failed recruitment attempt, a little something to take back to Zephyr-sensei, Kuzan thought. The two quickly walked towards the east port, leaving the wine shop staff to finally let out a huge sigh of relief and collapse onto the floor. Chapter 12, A Fight Without Reason. Is it okay to fight out here? After they reached the east coast, Kuzan pointed towards the distant sea. If they fought in town, Zephyr-sensei would chew him out. So he chose the one tactic he was best at back in military camp. Hurry up, Alucard said, spreading his hands to indicate he had no objections. Kuzan plunged a hand into the ocean, and a chilling aura emanated from him. Ice Age. The power of the ice fruit manifested, freezing the sea for several kilometers. This wasn't Kuzan's future ultimate technique, Ice Age, which could freeze an entire sea region, or even several, in one go. The current range of only a few kilometers indicated that Kuzan's strength was still far from what it would be in Luffy's era. Given that hardly anyone passed through here, Kuzan chose this location for their battle. As the two stood on the ice, Kuzan tilted his head slightly. May I ask one last question? Why are you so determined to fight me? Is it to test the power of a Logia-type devil fruit? Why? I've made it quite clear, haven't I? I fight for my mood, to experience pleasure. Right now, I want to fight you. There's no deeper reason. Alucard's mind was precisely that simple. He didn't possess Kuzan or Zephyr's dedication to justice, nor did he have Roger's grand ambition of seeking the world's truth and conquering the Grand Line. He lived for his mood, for himself. Whatever would make him happy in the moment, he would do. It was that simple, yet also that insane. Then, here I come. Kuzan raised a single hand, his palm facing Alucard, releasing a chilling aura that condensed into a solid projectile, shooting forward rapidly. Ice time capsule. Ice if I get caught, my body will freeze. In that case, let's test the upgraded Casual's power first. Through his battle with Zephyr, Casual had upgraded from level 3 to level 4. This fight with Kuzan was a perfect opportunity to test its new strength. Bang! A shot fired, shattering the freezing projectile and piercing Kuzan's abdomen, leaving a small hole. However, not a single drop of blood fell. Around the hole, ice enveloped the wound, and it quickly recovered. Although Kuzan was unharmed, he was still startled by the gun's power. Was that truly just a gun? Not even a cannon seemed to possess such destructive force. Elementalization, huh? As expected, Logia types are tough opponents. Less than a second after Alucard spoke, he had already rushed in front of Kuzan. This time, he didn't use Casual, but attacked directly with his hand. It didn't turn black, nor did I sense any haki. Kuzan thought to himself. He hadn't felt the presence of armament haki, the natural enemy of Logia users. But, why? This sense of danger is telling me that if I don't block this attack, I'll be in a very dangerous situation. Battle instinct made Kuzan bring both hands up to block Alucard's fist. With a heavy impact, Alucard's overall physical abilities, speed, strength, agility, and reflexes had all been further enhanced due to the previous evolution of the Blacklight virus. The immense force sent Kuzan staggering back over a dozen paces. He had already activated his elementalization, yet the punch didn't pass through his body but struck him solidly. This meant that, like armament haki, he possessed the power to bypass elementalization and attack a Logia user's physical body. But if it's not armament haki, then what kind of power is it? Generally speaking, the only powers that could hit a Logia's body besides armament haki would be other Logia abilities. Kuzan didn't know what Alucard's power was, but knowing that his opponent had the ability to bypass elementalization was enough. He had to be wary. Partisan. The elemental Kuzan crossed his arms to form an X shape. The cold air around his body condensed into spear shapes, rushing forward. Oh, looking for a long-range fight. Alucard pulled out Kajal and fired 2 rapid shots, shattering the partisan into ice shards. Kuzan, however, continued to press the attack, constantly releasing partisan. In his mind, bullets couldn't harm him, and Alucard would surely run out eventually. However, after Alucard fired a dozen shots, Kuzan found it strange. What the hell, this is a pistol, not a machine gun, right? Hasn't he run out of rounds yet? Alucard continuously closed in on Kuzan. 3 of the rapidly fired partisan had already pierced Alucard's body. Kuzan, too, had been hit repeatedly by bullets, but due to his elementalization, he was unharmed. Alucard, on the other hand, was injured, and severely so. 3 ice spears pierced his body. But for Alucard, injury was meaningless. When Alucard grabbed an ice spear with his free left hand, he turned and threw it back at Kuzan. Kuzan's brow furrowed, his gaze drawn to it. When his eyes flickered back, barely half a second later, Alucard had vanished from his original spot. Could it be? Chapter 13, The Unpredictable Man. Although Kuzan hadn't witnessed the entire battle between Zephyr and Alucard at the mining site, he had seen the latter half clearly, especially the moment Alucard emerged from Zephyr's shadow and shot him, which remained vividly in his memory. So, the instant Alucard vanished, Kuzan, recalling that scene, immediately turned to look at the shadow beneath his own feet. However, he was ultimately a fraction too slow. A figure darted out at extreme speed, punching Kuzan directly in the face, sending his tall body flying. Ugh! Kuzan let out a muffled grunt, his body skidding across the ice for dozens of meters. It almost reminds me of Garp-san's punches. Kuzan rubbed the spot where he'd been hit. Alucard didn't possess observation haki or armament haki. His own abilities were enough to compensate for all of it. His blacklight virus-infused body allowed him to touch Logia-type users, and thermal vision gave him control over everything within a city's range. Observation haki could be said to perceive auras and predict enemy attacks through them, and thermal vision was a similar tool. The blacklight virus, of course, needed no further explanation. As its level increased, his body's overall capabilities strengthened. Ice blade. Kuzan's right hand condensed a weapon with a twisted shape, but clearly still a blade. Under the enhancement of ice aura, he instantly rushed towards Alucard. Bang! Sparks flew, but immediately vanished due to the ice aura. The scene shifted as sword and gun clashed. Both their weapons vibrated slightly. This stalemate lasted for 5 seconds before Alucard's strength increased, reversing the pressure on Kuzan. Boom! Alucard's left hand attacked with a powerful wind pressure. Kuzan's eyes narrowed, shifting to the right as he tried to raise his hand to block the strike. But as Kuzan moved to defend, he suddenly realized that Alucard's left hand had somehow produced a blade. When did he pull out a blade? Kuzan was puzzled. He had been watching Alucard's movements intently and hadn't seen him assume a stance to draw a sword. If so, where did that curved blade in his hand come from? After taking a punch from Alucard, Kuzan knew he possessed a method to attack his physical body despite not having armament haki. Given that, it would be foolish to simply stand there like he was fighting a third-rate pirate and let the blade hit him. Ice ball. Kuzan's right hand released a chilling aura, instantly freezing the surrounding air. Alucard's blade, which was about to strike Kuzan's shoulder, was temporarily halted by the freezing. A chance. Kicking Alucard's arm away, the blade flew from Alucard's grasp. Kuzan abruptly turned and thrust his ice blade anew. The opponent's body possessed the ability to automatically recover no matter how many times it was injured. In that case, the only option was to attack a vital point in one swift strike. Kuzan's fighting style was somewhat similar to Zephyr's. While not reaching the exaggerated degree of no-killing, he often had a habit of holding back during fights. It was precisely because of this that when he aimed this attack at Alucard's heart, he slightly misaligned it. Bang! Suddenly, the immense shockwave from a bullet knocked the ice blade from Kuzan's hand, forcefully halting his attack. Tisk, a step too slow. Kuzan thought to himself. Nice try, Rear Admiral, but I'm still faster. The blade, mutated and condensed from the blacklight virus, was once again in Alucard's hand. Alucard had no intention of taking Kuzan's life. This curved blade merely pierced Kuzan's right shoulder. Splurge! The sound of a blade entering flesh echoed. Half of the curved blade sank into Kuzan's shoulder. After being struck, Kuzan took several steps back, then pulled the blade out without hesitation, temporarily freezing the wound with ice. He looked at the blade. Alucard had used a weapon without armament haki had actually cut him. Just as Kuzan prepared to attack again, Alucard suddenly lowered his gun, shrugging with a smile. I'm done fighting. Huh. Kuzan's expression instantly became like a husky's. What did he mean? The fight had just begun? Alucard turned and walked towards the sea, speaking with his back to Kuzan. Neither of our strengths has reached its peak. If we were to go for the kill now, it would lose a lot of fun. Besides, while I enjoy fighting, I have no reason to kill you. This battle, let's keep it in reserve for now. Alucard enjoyed fighting, but he wasn't a psychotic killer. To be precise, it was still the same. He lived according to his desires. If he didn't want to fight anymore, he simply didn't want to fight. It was that simple. Fun, what a vile character. Kuzin twisted his shoulder. The wound was deep, and even with the ice, he would still need medical attention back at base. But his main focus was now on Alucard. His assessment of him was complete. A man with a simple goal, yet also a complex and unpredictable individual. From the perspective of a Marine, he didn't want the Marines to gain another enemy. Chapter 14, No Such Thing as Immortality. Ability Development Progress. Mature Vampire Physique, 52%. Bat Shadow, Mature 27%. Weapon, Casual LV4, 9%. Blacklight Virus LV2, 16%. Hidden Shadow LV1, 9%. Compared to the development value gained from the previous battle with Zephyr, the gain from the fight with Kuzin was pitifully small. However, in Alucard's 6 years since his system awakened, this was actually quite fast, proving Kuzin's capabilities. This was considered an above-average speed. One must remember that in the months before he left that isolated island, he'd gone through over 100 battles and gained no development value at all, which was truly despair-inducing. The battle with Zephyr was almost like an overleveled fight, as if a beginner from the starter village had slain a final boss, which was why he gained such an exaggerated amount of development. Kuzin, afterward, was a normal enemy, and the growth rate of development value naturally normalized. After fighting Kuzin, Alucard didn't return to the inn. Instead, he boarded the Bahad pirate's ship. By now, the original pirate flag was gone. Alucard hadn't thought about his own emblem yet, so he simply had a plain white sail hoisted up. In this world, ships were primarily sailing vessels, needing sails to move. Without them, they couldn't travel. I haven't been out for long, and I've already met so many interesting people. I'm really looking forward to the future. Alucard exhaled deeply as he boarded the ship and departed. However, as Alucard sailed away, several Marines suddenly emerged from a corner of the port. Seeing Alucard leave, one immediately reported, "The target has departed. Report the news to Chief Instructor Zephyr at once." Though he wasn't recruited, I've managed to gauge a bit of his abilities. Back at the Marine branch in Flavance, Kuzin recounted his battle with Alucard to Zephyr and presented his personal analysis of Alucard's abilities. Immortal, that's the most fitting word to describe this Alucard. No matter how severe the injury, even his head or throat can regenerate rapidly. He possesses some power that isn't armament hacky, yet can still strike a Logia user's physical body. He's proficient with a pistol that seems to have virtually unlimited firepower. Of course, I can't confirm if it's truly unlimited or if I simply didn't notice him reloading. Kuzin habitually scratched the back of his head before continuing. However, Immortal might be a bit of an overstatement. During my repeated attacks, I noticed he consistently blocked attacks aimed at his heart. It's highly probable that's his weakness. His heart. Zephyr nodded. Indeed, there were many regeneration-type devil fruits, but to call someone immortal was perhaps too much. Having a single weakness, no matter how small, was enough to reassure Zephyr and his men. Based on the abilities he's shown, I can't discern which devil fruit power he uses, but that's not a critically important question. Now, go investigate this kid's background. Zephyr wasn't particularly interested in whether Alucard was a devil fruit user, or what specific fruit he'd eaten. In his view, no matter the enemy's ability, if they were an enemy, they were to be crushed and defeated. Dracula d Alucard. Kuzin stroked his chin as he walked towards his room, muttering, D. 10 minutes after Kuzin left, several patrol Marines entered. They saluted Zephyr loudly, then gave a detailed report of what they had witnessed at the harbor. He's already left? No matter. Notify the Marines in the nearby sea regions to keep a close watch, Zephyr commanded with a wave of his hand. A guy like that, if he got a bounty, it should be at least 50 million berries, right? Zephyr thought to himself. In this era, 50 million was already a bounty figure worth serious attention. Notify Sengoku and Fleet Admiral Kong. Zephyr had personally handled Maswick's affair. Although he usually didn't concern himself with such matters, once he did, and discovered these government rats, he would absolutely suppress them. Thanks to Zephyr's intervention, Alucard wasn't given a bounty for now, but it likely wouldn't be long before he was. Sailing ships were typically made of wood, even marine warships were primarily wooden with steel as a supplement. After several days of sailing, Alucard's ship was in disarray. The damage mainly came not from enemies, but from sea kings lurking beneath the surface. Alucard had slain countless of them, but each battle was torturous for the ship. Generally, both pirate crews and marines would have someone specifically monitoring the sea to avoid sea kings. Now, Alucard's ship was on the verge of collapsing. He either had to find a new one or repair this one. As he saw a gaping hole in the ship's deck plugged with a bizarre, reddish, lumpy substance, an idea sparked in Alucard's mind. Chapter 15, Blacklight Virus Experiment. The blacklight virus can actually form a viral web from the user's hand. When solidified, it resembles congealed scarlet wax. When controlled, it can infect others. The substance currently plugging the ship's hole is the result of infected corpses from Alucard's previous blacklight virus battle, solidifying their blood after lying there for too long. The blacklight virus isn't as contagious as the vampire virus. Once infected by the vampire virus, an individual can turn into a ghoul, while virgins can become vampires, though this requires Alucard's direct blood. Ghouls can turn enemies into new ghouls with a single bite, leading to unlimited, unchecked proliferation. If not stopped promptly, it would undoubtedly create a bioarmy. However, vampire blood can only be used on humans. The blacklight virus, on the other hand, is less contagious than vampire blood. Specifically, infection with the blacklight virus carries an extremely high mortality rate. However, those who survive the blacklight virus infection can gain significantly greater power, far surpassing ghouls. The power of the blacklight virus isn't limited to humans, animals, or birds. Infected individuals can even evolve by devouring other organisms. In truth, saying the blacklight virus isn't very contagious isn't entirely accurate. It's more precise to say that those infected by the vampire virus are guaranteed to become ghouls, while those infected by the blacklight virus are far more likely to die than to transform into horrifying, alien monsters. So far, only pirates have been infected with the blacklight virus, and all have died. Alucard suddenly had a thought. This is the world of One Piece, and sea kings are the apex predators of the animal kingdom. What would happen if the blacklight virus were introduced into a sea king? Would it die on the spot? Or would it transform into a new type of alien monster? The thought sparked Alucard's interest. It was his style to immediately act and experiment whenever an intriguing idea struck him. Alucard left the helm and walked to the bow. Using the blacklight virus, he formed a small bladed hand and sliced open the palm of his other hand. Immediately, blood began to flow into the sea. Some sea kings are attracted to blood, a trait shared with many animals, though there are also a significant number of exceptions. About 5 minutes later, Alucard saw numerous triangular fins rapidly moving on the sea surface around the ship. Sharks. What? No sea kings, just you pathetic things. Alucard was somewhat disappointed. While sharks were indeed fierce animals in his original world, here, they were merely at the bottom of the food chain, prey for sea kings. Alucard had no interest in experimenting on such weaklings. But since you've delivered yourselves, you'll make good bait. He pulled out his white cajole and fired a volley into the sea below. The exaggerated splashes might make an unknowing observer think it was cannon fire. Soon, shark blood dyed that section of the sea crimson. Alucard returned to a lounge chair on the deck, pulled out a bottle of red wine from his hidden shadow, poured it into a nearby wine glass, and began to slowly savor it. About 20 minutes later, Alucard's thermal vision finally detected a large creature rushing towards him. From the thermal vision, its size was roughly equivalent to a skyscraper. Such an exaggerated size in a single sea region was enough to qualify it as a lord-level sea king. It seemed his luck was good. It hadn't been long before such an excellent experimental subject presented itself. Finally, when it was about 200 meters from Alucard's ship, a dark shadow burst from beneath the waves. Giant waves surged across the nearby sea. It was an enormous, red-eyed, long fish with a blue body, white belly, and a silvery white sword-like snout. This truly was the world of One Piece, where anything was possible, including such bizarre creatures. But only they might be able to withstand the power of the blacklight virus. All right, come at me with that sword on your mouth, experiment subject. Alucard roared. The giant marlin seemed to sense Alucard's provocation and rushed forward at an incredible speed. Many animals in this world were freaks, and this giant marlin was an example. It wasn't just a fish, it was a water cheetah. Come. Alucard leaped into the air, dodging the attack from the marlin's sword-like snout. He formed his right hand into a blade and plunged it into the marlin's side, carving a massive wound over 10 meters long on its body. He injected the blacklight virus into the marlin's body, ensuring it wasn't a fatal blow. Alucard wanted to observe closely how such a high-level monster could withstand the blacklight virus's consumption. The blacklight virus isn't highly contagious, but once it enters a body, its spread is no joke. After activating his thermal vision, Alucard could discern the marlin's physical condition even submerged in the water. Starting from the wound, the blacklight virus was rapidly spreading. The giant marlin thrashed violently in the ocean due to the intense pain caused by the blacklight virus within its body, creating waves. The instant it burst from the sea, Alucard saw them, red, lava-like fissure patterns spreading out from the wound. That was undeniable proof of blacklight virus infection. So, had it succeeded? P.S. For the settings, the blacklight virus's theme is Devour, while the vampire theme is Undying. I hope everyone enjoys it. Chapter 16, don't you think it's interesting? Boom, boom, boom. The giant marlin, infected by the blacklight virus, thrashed violently in agony, twisting its body in unbearable pain and struggle. Alucard waited for the moment the virus-induced torment subsided. He wanted to see if a beast of this magnitude could endure it. But unfortunately, after a few minutes, its body covered in the blood-red patterns of the blacklight virus infection, the blue and white marlin couldn't survive. It floated on the surface, dead. The first blacklight virus infection experiment, failure. Pathetic creature. Can't even handle this level. Seeing the giant marlin dead, a flicker of disappointment crossed Alucard's face. He settled back into his chair and sailed away. Spotting the massive food floating on the sea, large carnivorous birds, resembling vultures, began to descend upon the giant marlin. The blacklight virus infection was generally imperceptible. With their sharp beaks, they tore open the marlin's belly, ripping at its skin and devouring its fresh meat. However, after consuming the meat, some of the vultures died midway. These were infected but couldn't withstand the effects of the blacklight virus and perished. Some, though feeling abnormalities in their bodies, managed to fly away alive. These were the lucky ones, not severely infected. Alucard wasn't in a hurry to complete the blacklight virus experiment. To be precise, this was just a small game, a form of entertainment. Success was good, but failure meant no real loss. The journey was still long. Wasn't it better to just enjoy it slowly? What kind of ship is that? In a certain sea region of the North Blue, a navigator from a pirate crew stood on the lookout at the top of the mast, observing a ship slowly sailing in the distance through his telescope. Its sails bore no markings. Normally, such a ship would just be a civilian vessel. What caught his attention was how utterly dilapidated it was. There were countless holes in its hull, and even the sails, which provided the ship's main propulsion, were riddled with holes. If it were night, it would perfectly embody a ghost ship. Captain, 2 kilometers away, there's an unmarked, broken ship. I estimate it's a wreck left behind after being attacked by other pirates, the navigator shouted down to the crew below. The pirates below, who had been drinking and chatting idly, immediately looked in the direction he indicated. Indeed, a dark speck was slowly passing by in the distance. The captain twisted his neck, saying coldly, "It got ransacked but didn't sink, meaning there's likely still someone or something special on board. Men, full speed ahead, loot everything on that ship." Alucard sat in his chair, letting the ship drift slowly with the sea breeze. This was his preferred state most of the time, and it often attracted many suicidal pirates. Regardless of whether it was a rotting ship, if they saw a ship, they'd try to plunder it. That's what pirates did. Rumble? It was the sound of a ship approaching. Alucard could hear it. Looking to the left, a large ship with a massive scar on its right cheek and a skull emblem was rushing towards him. To plunder, you naturally couldn't just blast the ship with cannons. Unlike battles with the Marines, pirates typically used various methods to board the enemy ship, kill everyone, steal the treasures, and then blow up the ship. Marines, on the other hand, would usually just open fire with cannons directly on pirates. However, Alucard's dilapidated ship had its advantages. Pirates would mistake it for an abandoned vessel and wouldn't open fire, while Marines wouldn't randomly fire because there was no pirate skull mark on the flag. Frankly, cannon battles were incredibly boring. Since this ship allowed him to avoid dull cannon engagements, Alucard rather liked it. When the ship was less than 20 meters from Alucard's, countless figures from the opposing vessel swung over on grappling ropes, like monkeys in a jungle. This was indeed the method most pirates used to board enemy ships. Bang, bang, bang. Alucard drew his gun and shot the grappling ropes, causing many pirates who hadn't yet swung across, caught between the two ships, to fall directly into the sea. "There's someone on board." Captain Suthies roared a warning. He leaped, jumping directly onto Alucard's ship without a rope. As a captain, he certainly possessed that much skill. Suthies turned his head and saw a young man sitting in a chair on the deck, holding a gun in one hand, his legs crossed, watching him with a half-smile. "It's just a kid." Alucard looked mature for his age, but he still seemed to be only 17 or 18. Compared to the 40-something Suthies, he could indeed be called a kid. "Isn't it interesting?" Alucard ignored Suthies' address and asked abruptly. "Huh." Suthies was stunned, momentarily unsure what Alucard meant by the question. Using a ghost ship as bait to lure foolish pirates, then killing them all. "It's like a cat, before eating a mouse, we'll play with it until it's too exhausted to move. Don't you find that very interesting?" Alucard grinned. "You bastard." Suthies' eyes widened. He now understood Alucard's objective. So, from the very beginning, he had intended to lure them in? Chapter 17, You Only Deserve to Be Dog Food? Thud, thud, thud. Footsteps landed, and soon, Suthies' subordinates formed a circle around Alucard, who remained seated in the center. "Captain, it seems there's only this one person on the ship," a subordinate whispered into Suthies' ear. "I know. This guy deliberately lured us here." Suthies' face was grim. To remain so calm in this situation, he was either an overwhelmingly powerful expert or an idiot. In that case, he'd test him first. "Kill him." Suthies waved his hand, and countless subordinates swarmed forward, armed with katanas, axes, bayonets, all sorts of weapons. Splash! Blood exploded like fireworks. Alucard's body was pierced by countless blades, yet he maintained his cross-legged posture, hands clasped over his knees, blood dripping from his lips, but still smiling. "We did it, huh?" Suthies' men were about to cheer when suddenly, a laugh that sounded like it came from hell echoed in their ears. "Ha, ha, ha." Suddenly, a blonde pirate who had impaled Alucard with a katana felt something pressing against his forehead. Before he could look up to see what it was, he heard a bang, and his skull burst open. To the stunned gaze of everyone, Alucard, whose body was pierced by at least 5 weapons, stood up from his chair as if nothing had happened. He turned abruptly, his gun muzzle sweeping past the eyes of the other pirates surrounding him, one by one. Bang, 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 bang. Impossible. Is he immortal? Suthies was a relatively well-known pirate in the North Blue, but he had never seen a monster that could sustain such grievous injuries and still stand up to fight as if unharmed. Caliber nearly 13 millimeters, equipped with specially consecrated silver bullets. Alucard used the virus to force the blades embedded in his body out. He cocked casual, a grin curving his lips. "No one survives after taking a shot from this." "Captain, I think I remember, a pirate hunter who's recently become quite famous in the North Blue." At this moment, beside Suthies, a short but extremely bizarre individual, who used a giant hammer as a weapon, swallowed hard, his face filled with dread. The pirate hunter who annihilated the Bahad pirates, possesses an unkillable ability, and uses a large white pistol. Hearing the name Bahad pirates in the North Blue was like immediately thinking of Garp when someone mentioned the Marines. Bahad was practically a representative figure among North Blue pirates. Rumors of his death had gradually spread, but the identity of his killer remained unknown. Unkillable, white pistol, isn't that this guy right in front of me? What are you doing? Alucard suddenly spoke, the enemy is right in front of you. What should you do now? You should sever my head, dig out my heart, end my life? If you don't do that, you don't deserve to be called pirates. This guy. Suthi's tongue began to tremble. If this person truly was the one who killed Bahad, then he was absolutely no match. Alucard clearly caught the fear on Suthi's face. Alucard, who had been filled with excitement moments ago, now showed deep disappointment, his eyes widening slightly as he spoke with resentment. That look just now, were you afraid? Are you really afraid? Suthi's couldn't help but take a step back, but hearing Alucard's words and with so many subordinates present, how could he, as captain, lose face? So Suthi's forcefully stepped forward, feigning toughness. Don't be ridiculous. I'm Suthi's Kurazaya? How could I possibly be afraid? Then why aren't you attacking faster? You, wild dog. Alucard's aura suddenly erupted. In less than a blink of an eye, he vanished from his spot. Suddenly, Suthi's felt a strange sensation behind him, as if something had appeared there. When Suthi's and his men mustered the courage to look back, they saw Alucard staring them down with his distinctive vampire red eyes. Monster? This was the unanimous thought of every member of the Suthi's pirates. However, Alucard's face showed intense disgust. No doubt about it. There are too many useless pirates from before the Great Pirate era. It's necessary to clean them up. Alucard lashed out with a kick, sending Suthi's flying to crash into the cabin door at the back of the ship. He stuck to the wall like Machi for a few seconds before slowly sliding down. Alucard walked slowly, step by step, towards Suthi's. There were still over a dozen of Suthi's subordinate pirates present, but whether from fear or knowing the immense disparity in their strength, they chose not to attack or support their captain in this moment of great crisis. Suthi's struggled to get up from the deck, but Alucard stood before him like a towering mountain. Please spare me. Suthi's stammered, his voice trembling. But this plea only made Alucard feel another surge of disgust. You pathetic creature, you only deserve to be dog food. Alucard grinned maniacally. This pirate, named Suthi's, was destined for a terrible end. Chapter 18, The Pirate's Nightmare. North Blue, within a certain sea region. Another pirate who ran back from the Grand Line, scared senseless by the Roger pirates. Do you really call yourselves pirates, you lot? The great pirate, Punk Luxard, with a bounty of 66 million berries, was now cowering in the furthest corner of his pirate ship. Under the cloak of night, Alucard seemed like an ancient beast, poised to devour him. Please spare me? You don't understand the terror of the Roger pirates, that's why you speak like that. Punk desperately yelled. This was the second time he had experienced complete despair since becoming a pirate. The first was a month ago in the Grand Line, delivered by Roger, the captain of the Roger pirates. Alucard paused, then his expression grew even colder and more disgusted. Click. Casual was cocked. Bang bang bang. With 3 consecutive shots, the great pirate with a 66 million berry bounty was reduced to a bloody pulp. A bunch of spineless wretches. Disgusting. Alucard holstered his gun, leaped back onto his ghost ship, and continued to sail away. He was heading towards the Grand Line at a very slow pace. Alucard wasn't deliberately rushing to the Grand Line. Most of the time, he would leisurely recline in his chair, letting the ship drift slowly with the currents. As long as he wasn't heading back the way he came, Alucard didn't much care about the direction of travel. In summary, while other pirates headed straight for the Grand Line at top speed, Alucard took winding, often roundabout routes. If he had followed a normal sailing course, he would have entered the Grand Line long ago. 1 week later, Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Kuzan handed a bounty poster to Admiral Sengoku, then clasped his hands behind his head. He took care of another one, but this time he didn't collect the bounty. He just left the body on Punk's ship. The North Blue Marines found him. The Marines were now closely monitoring Alucard's movements. Whenever Alucard passed through an area, they would dispatch a small team to trace his route, of course, when resources allowed. This time, the great pirate, Punk Luxard, with a bounty of 66 million berries, was practically pulverized, with only half his skull remaining, which was discovered by the searching Marines. Was it a hard-fought victory, or an overwhelming one? Admiral Sengoku asked, his voice low. Kuzan crossed his legs. That question is pointless. He's immortal. No, he possesses self-regeneration. No injury can stay on him. After speaking, Kuzan picked up his coat, preparing to leave. That guy is an extremely dangerous individual. Sengoku took a sip of tea. You don't need to tell me that. The pirate's nightmare, Alucard. A terrifying pirate hunter recently renowned in the North Blue. It is said that no prey he targets ever escapes. His distinguishing marks are an oversized white pistol and various abilities. Estimated strength, elite vice admiral. Threat level, comparable to an admiral. Such high praise, and it even came from Zephyr. Knock knock. A knock sounded, followed by the voice of Sengoku's old friend, Vice Admiral Tsuru, the Marine Staff Officer. It's me. After Sengoku let Tsuru in, he put down Alucard's file and asked, what is it? The genius scientist, Vegapunk's team, has been confirmed to be taken in by the world government as part of its scientific institution, but a man named Vinsmoke Judge has escaped. Regarding this man, the government seems intent on concealing his actions and waiting for the right moment to deal with him secretly, Suru said, sitting on the sofa Kuzan had just occupied. That guy who researched with Vegapunk? We definitely need to be wary. He's not the type to bow down to anyone, not even the world government. Saying this, Sengoku stroked his beard, then added, if that's the case, they're not even issuing a bounty. Judge and Vegapunk were conducting illegal life research. If Judge wasn't joining the government, he should have been eliminated immediately because he knew too much. Sengoku was also very familiar with the government's way of operating. Precisely because he knows too much, the government cannot let the world know of his existence. Tsuru's brows furrowed. After a moment of silence between them, Tsuru spoke first. Where do you think that guy is most likely hiding? Sengoku thought for a few seconds, then said, I think it's the North Blue. As a former royalty who once dominated the strongest of the four seas, the North Blue, he's likely retreated to his old lair, waiting for an opportunity. Tsuru shook her head. But I don't quite think so. His intellect would allow him to foresee that we would thoroughly search the North Blue. I think the Grand Line is more likely. Saying this, Tsuru stood up. However, this matter isn't worth further discussion. The government will handle it personally. My main focus is on Roger. Be careful, you'll probably be sent out soon. Sengoku crossed his arms and let out a cold snort. Garp must be itching for a fight too, huh? He gets ridiculously excited every time he hears Roger's name. Chapter 19, North Blue Kingdoms. The North Blue, as the strongest of the four seas, wasn't just because its pirates were generally the most powerful, but also because it was a fertile ground for cultivating strong individuals. Just as the Grand Line in later eras was divided by the three great powers, the seven warlords of the sea, the four emperors, and the marines, the current North Blue was governed by four major powers, or rather, four kingdoms. These four nations were in constant conflict, much like the Warring States period described in Alucard's past life. Currently, two pairs of these four kingdoms were locked in confrontation, with the Herald Kingdom and the Joris Kingdom being one such warring pair. The Herald Kingdom currently held the advantage. They coveted a special plant abundant in the Joris Kingdom, called Frost Vine, a plant with a crystalline, ice diamond-like body. Of course, mere ornamental value wasn't enough to spark a war between two nations. More importantly, Frost Vine was not only a precious raw material but could also be incorporated into weapons and armor, achieving astonishing results in several experiments. After half a year of war, while the Herald Kingdom maintained an overall advantage, they were utterly helpless against a formidable general from the enemy nation, Nelson Cahill. This man wasn't a devil fruit user, but he wielded a greatsword as large as two grown men. He charged through the battlefield, entering and exiting the fray 7 times, single-handedly defeating countless soldiers of the Herald Kingdom. King Harold Nutt of the Herald Kingdom initially tried to negotiate Cahill's surrender through monetary means, but unexpectedly, the man was as stubborn and unyielding as a rock in a latrine pit, resolutely refusing to surrender to the enemy. Nutt was greatly troubled by his inability to deal with Cahill. Your Majesty Nutt, I have a matter to report. This morning, as King Nutt and his ministers were analyzing the war situation, a patrol captain entered. After bowing to Nutt, he spoke with a solemn expression. What is it? Nutt was getting a headache over the Cahill situation. If only this man could be dealt with, the war would essentially be decided. The problem was, they just couldn't kill him. He had already ordered that he wasn't to be disturbed unless it was a major issue outside of the war. Under such circumstances, for this patrol captain to dare to report something to him, it couldn't be a minor matter. The pirate hunter, Dracula de Alucard, has landed on our kingdom's coast and has now entered the town. What should we do? Or should we leave him be? The patrol captain knelt on one knee, seeking instructions. Dracula. Upon hearing Alucard's full name, Nutt's initial reaction wasn't to Alucard, but rather the surname Dracula, which seemed to jog his memory. After a moment of recollection, Nutt remembered. Decades ago, it was a prominent noble family in the North Blue, later annihilated by the North Blue's dominant family, the Vinsmoke family, the D family of Dracula. Seeing that the king hadn't spoken for a long time, the patrol captain assumed the king didn't know Alucard's name and explained, he's a super strong pirate hunter whose reputation has soared in the North Blue in recent months. He has a track record of killing pirates with bounties over 50 million berries. He's currently known by many as the pirate's nightmare. Pirate hunters. In many people's minds, pirate hunters were individuals who would do anything for money. They could kill pirates for money, but they could also kill marines for money, meaning they could turn into pirates at any given moment. Although the government hadn't specifically targeted pirate hunters as a group, if they ever opposed the government or marines, a bounty would immediately be placed on their heads. Capable of taking down great pirates with bounties over 50 million berries. Nutt and his ministers were stunned. They hadn't expected such a monster to appear in the North Blue during wartime. After some thought, Nutt told the patrol captain, bring him to me. Tell him I have a profitable business deal for him. Many had already guessed Nutt's intentions. The patrol captain immediately responded and then turned to leave. Your Majesty, do you intend for him to deal with Cahill? A grey-bearded minister asked. Most pirate hunters are creatures who act when paid, and besides, I'm rather interested in the name Dracula, Nutt said seriously. If he can truly resolve Cahill, it would make things much more convenient for us. The Herald Kingdom had been at war for over half a year. The living conditions of its residents were predictably harsh. Not to mention the young and able-bodied, anyone who wasn't too old was drafted into the war. Alucard entered a tavern where many vicious-looking pirates were seated. Such war-torn nations were ideal survival locations for them. The Marines didn't intervene in disputes between nations, so they didn't really manage things here, allowing these pirates and mountain bandits to thrive. However, these individuals were mostly weaklings. Alucard sat at the bar, grinning. Red wine. Bring me your local specialty. The bartender, wiping a glass, looked at Alucard and asked, "Got money?" Alucard's smile remained unchanged. The heads of the men sitting behind me should be enough to cover the tab, shouldn't they? Chapter 20, The King's Invitation. Thud, thud, thud. The moment Alucard spoke, the pirates and mountain bandits behind him, who had been leisurely drinking and chatting, instantly rose and glared at his back. The bartender, scared, quickly retreated backstage, knowing a slaughter was about to begin. "I don't think I heard you clearly." A black man over 2.5 meters tall, carrying a colossal axe on his back, walked over. When he was about 2 meters behind Alucard, he suddenly drew his giant axe and swung it down towards Alucard's back. The other pirates smirked, expecting to see the suicidal fool split in half. Splash! It split. His head was cleanly severed, rolling like a ball to the side, spinning several times. "Whoa, well done. Serves him right." The pirates in the tavern cheered. One man walked to the edge of Alucard's severed head, just about to give it a vicious kick, when he suddenly noticed the head was laughing. Ha ha. The bandit who had intended to kick was thoroughly terrified, his scream completely capturing the attention of the still cheering pirates. Everyone watched as the head transformed into countless bats, flying back towards the headless corpse in the seat. The bats, formed from the head, continuously filled the neck, where the head used to be. Dozens, or perhaps hundreds of bats swarmed, and in less than 10 seconds, they reformed into a complete head. Alucard turned his head, laughing maniacally, as if nothing had happened. Monster. His head being cut off and then reattaching scared many. Some immediately screamed. Is he a devil fruit user? Some managed to maintain a semblance of composure, but it was just barely. These weaklings, who only knew how to fish in troubled waters during wartime, were only capable of so much. Click. Alucard pulled out Casual, and then unleashed a flurry of shots. Countless bullets struck the pirates and bandits, pulverizing their bodies into dust, creating a mist of blood. Only their heads were generally left, barely identifiable. Long after the gunshots ceased, the bartender cautiously emerged from backstage. He saw the red-clad young man still sitting there, but the tavern behind him had become a sea of blood, with over a dozen heads lying dead on the floor, their eyes wide open. Hell? This is truly hell. Ability development progress. Mature vampire physique, 70%. Bat shadow, mature 37%. Weapon, casual LV4, 24%. Blacklight virus LV2, 33%. Hidden shadow LV1, 53%. Compared to the previous battles, the development value had barely changed, only casual had evolved by 1%. Alright, these trash still had bounties, right? That should be enough for the drinks and the tavern's cleaning fee. Serve me your most special red wine, Alucard said as if nothing had happened. The bartender, having witnessed many pirate and bandit brawls, didn't throw up immediately. Instead, he quickly turned, grabbed 3 bottles of red wine, and poured one for Alucard. Oh, this is... After taking his first sip, a flicker of surprise crossed Alucard's eyes. The bartender immediately explained, "It's the Herald Kingdom's exclusive red wine, named Herald wine after this country. It's a very rare wine, only found here." "I see. No wonder the taste is completely different from all the other wines I've had before." Alucard lifted his wine glass, observing its color. Normally, he'd just drink it, regardless of the color, but this unique taste made him want to examine its hue more closely. Thud. The tavern door opened. The bartender, seeing this, skillfully greeted, "Patrol Captain Ifman." This was the very patrol captain who had reported Alucard's presence to Nut and received orders. After hearing from his subordinates that Alucard had entered here, he rushed over. When he and his 4 subordinates entered, they were utterly dumbfounded. They frequented this tavern and knew exactly what it should look like. But now, the walls, which should have been brown, were stained entirely red. There were bits of shattered flesh on the floor, and heads were scattered around the tavern. On tables, on the floor, on chairs. And from the wounds on their severed necks, they had been blasted apart. And their target, the only remaining customer in the establishment, was calmly drinking wine amidst the bloody scene behind him. They guessed why, because this man had done all of it? Pirate hunter Alucard. So far, he has completely annihilated every pirate he's encountered, becoming the most famous pirate hunter in the North Blue. Ifman walked step by step behind Alucard, saying, "Our king has a very profitable business opportunity and would like to invite you." He spoke almost pleadingly, for he understood the terror of this man. Ifman pulled a gold bar from his military uniform and placed it on the table next to Alucard. "This is a small token of our initial sincerity." The palm-sized gold bar was worth at least 1,000,000 berries. Just a heads up, this is a translation and this fanfic itself was completed back in 2018, so if Falu's details are correct, prepare for some canon divergences. though that is to be expected since One Piece has been ongoing for years and hasn't been completed yet. But if you're here for the story itself, and won't be bothered by canon divergences, then this is definitely a solid fanfic. Anyway, if you want to read ahead of schedule, head over to my Patreon patreon.com/wanfiction remove the parentheses. There are over 100 advanced chapters available for you. Chapter 21, No Good or Evil, Only Strength. Thud, thud, thud. Alucard, led by Ifman, arrived at the palace of the Herald Kingdom, walking across the red carpet. So you've arrived, Alucard? No, the North Blue noble, Dracula D. Alucard, Nut, seated on the throne, spoke as he saw Alucard. Oh. Alucard looked at the person on the throne with a hint of surprise. It was indeed the first time someone had recognized the origin of his surname. There's no need to elaborate on the surname. Just get to the point. Why did you summon me? Alucard had no interest in what the surname represented, or what Nut intended to convey. Nut, assuming Alucard disliked having his family background mentioned, didn't press the issue and got straight to the point. I am Harold Nut, the one who hired you this time. As you probably know, our nation is currently at war with the Joris Kingdom. There's a particular individual hindering our victory, and I want you to kill him. Saying this, Nut held up 2 fingers. The remuneration, 200 million berries. Alucard's expression flickered slightly. He hadn't expected such a sum. Even in the New World, individuals with bounties exceeding 200 million berries were rare. For Nut to offer such a high price just to kill one person indicated that the target's strength was extraordinary, and they were a significant threat to Nut. The target's name is Nelson Cahill, the primary enemy of our Herald Kingdom's opposing nation, Nut said, grinding his teeth as he uttered the name. Is that guy strong? Alucard's red eyes gleamed with a ferocious light as he asked excitedly. He won't be any weaker than the pirates you've hunted so far, Nut stated firmly. Interesting. I'll take this job. In a world primarily centered around pirates, such mercenary assignments were exceedingly rare for Alucard right now, and he found it quite intriguing. Ifman, you'll be responsible for sailing Alucard to the battlefield in the Joris Kingdom. Wait. Just as Nut was about to instruct Ifman to lead the way, Alucard suddenly stopped him. Under the confused gazes of the ministers in the royal hall, he stated as a matter of course, hiring requires half the payment up front. Didn't you know that rule? Half up front? Indeed, in the underworld, this was a rule for mercenary and assassin organizations, but no one had ever heard of pirate hunters having such a rule. However, if an underworld organization could kill Cahill, why would Nut go to such lengths to find Alucard for the job? According to Alucard's rule, he would demand 100 million berries upfront before even starting work. It was utterly preposterous. Who knew if he would just take the money and run? He was an individual, not an organization. Immediately, a minister stepped forward, angrily exclaiming, "What kind of joke is this? How can we pay such a large sum upfront?" Alucard's lips curved. Nut above him suddenly felt a sense of danger and raised a hand to stop the minister from speaking further. He said in a deep voice, "Someone, fetch 100 million berries. Your Majesty King Nut." Seeing Nut actually preparing the money, the ministers were shocked. Is this necessary? We have so many people here, there's no need to be intimidated by one pirate hunter, is there? Truly worthy of being a king. Having your own unique insight is a good thing, Alucard chuckled, waiting calmly until someone presented a black briefcase, opened it before Alucard, revealing it filled with banknotes. Please be careful. No need to bother. Alucard took the case and tossed it into the shadow behind him. This scene was the first time those present witnessed his ability. All right, let's go. Mercenaries were the type who worked for money, and Alucard didn't dislike that. The war was already ongoing. Both countries were islands, so battles naturally took place at sea. Sailing from the Herald Kingdom to the Joris Kingdom would take only 2 days with favorable winds, otherwise 3 to 4 days. Both nations had previously launched offensives into each other's territory. But last month, the Herald Kingdom gained the upper hand, launching a full-scale invasion of the Joris Kingdom. However, this was not yet a victory. Cahill, a formidable general, stood in their way, forcing all the Herald Kingdom troops to the coast, unable to advance further. And he was Alucard's target. The 20-person squad accompanying Alucard on the same ship was merely to guide him and prevent him from escaping midway. Most of the royal army was already on the island. After landing on the island, Ifman said, "Alucard-san, please follow me to the military camp to speak." Upon reaching the Herald Kingdom military camp, under the astonished gazes of numerous soldiers, Alucard casually found a chair and sat down. Ifman, acting as a commentator, announced to the assembled officers, "Pirate hunter Alucard-san, personally sanctioned by His Majesty the King as reinforcement, is about to cut off the head of that damnable scoundrel, Nelson Cahill, the enemy who deserves 10,000 deaths, for our Herald Kingdom." Alucard smiled without a word. The Herald Kingdom was the invading party, yet they described their opponent as deserving 10,000 deaths. However, he felt no sympathy for the Joris Kingdom. This world was just like that, no good or evil, only strength. Chapter 22, What kind of monster is this? In the world of pirates, truly few nations can genuinely be called countries. As this is a world of island nations, there are naturally large countries and small countries. Some small countries are even no bigger than a city or even a county in Alucard's previous world. The Herald Kingdom is a considerable kingdom, while Joris doesn't reach that scale, it's merely the size of a city. Comparing the total troop numbers, Herald currently has about 5,000 soldiers, while Joris has only 3,000. Logically, this should result in an overwhelming victory. However, most soldiers are just ordinary people with some training. The strength of a chief commander can completely overturn the entire battlefield. Just like Kuzan, whom Alucard encountered right after leaving the island, even a rear admiral like him would be enough to challenge an army of over 8,000 men from both sides combined. Overall, the Herald Kingdom currently holds a slight advantage in the war, primarily because they are fighting on enemy soil, so the opponent's losses are relatively greater. But the difference isn't significant. The key issue is Cahill, who is obstructing their progress. Without dealing with him, the war will struggle to advance. On the afternoon of Alucard's first day after landing, the war horns eagerly sounded. Everyone wanted to see what kind of skill this pirate hunter, hired by the king with a hefty sum, truly possessed. The main distinction between the two armies lay in their armor colors. Herald's was black, and Joris's was red. In a dilapidated city, the two armies finally clashed. Alucard, standing beside the Herald army's commander, Drager, asked, "Who's my target?" Drager, hearing Alucard's question, pointed towards the front. At the center of the Red Army, a figure with a colossal greatsword over 2 meters long strapped to his back, clad in crystalline, shimmering armor, stood out prominently amidst the troops. Bang! Alucard, without wasting another word, pulled out Kajal and fired a shot at Cahill from 500 meters away. Crack! Cahill's body was knocked back dozens of meters. Soldiers who had been standing behind him were sent flying by the sudden impact of Cahill's body hurtling backward. That's utterly unreasonable. Seeing Alucard simply pull out his gun and shoot, not only was he able to hit the target with a pistol from over 500 meters away, but frankly, before a battle officially began, both sides would usually exchange names before engaging. Someone like Alucard, who just opened fire without a word, was an extremely rare type. His face slightly tightened. Alucard noticed that Cahill in the distance hadn't been shot through the heart by his bullet. Instead, he slowly stood up and drew the giant's sword from his back. Not dead. Alucard looked closer and saw that the bullet from Kajal was embedded in the crystal armor Cahill wore, failing to penetrate his body. That's armor made from frostvine, Drager, witnessing the scene, explained to Alucard. It possesses incredibly strong defense. If mass-produced into weapons, it would become a terrifying force. Alucard had been curious about the special qualities of that so-called plant, which warranted a large-scale war between two nations. Now, he had seen it. To be able to withstand a shot from Kajal was indeed an impressive material. If an entire army could be equipped with it, their combat power would multiply. Cahill was entirely covered in this armor, with only his eyes and the lower part of his face below the bridge of his nose exposed. From Alucard's current observation of the Herald army's strength, even breaking through that armor would be impossible, let alone harming the opponent. But Alucard didn't know that while he was shocked, the Joris Kingdom's army, including Cahill himself, were even more stunned that Alucard's single shot could damage the frostvine armor to such an extent. Are there bullets with such power in this world? The invincible armor made from frostvine, coupled with Cahill himself being a great swordsman, if he had a bounty, it would definitely be in the hundreds of millions, Drager added. Alucard smiled faintly and charged forward. Drager, seeing this, waved his hand, ordering his army to advance as well. Seeing the man in a red trench coat, wielding a large white pistol, charging towards him, Cahill's expression hardened. He knew that this man was likely the foreign aide the Herald Kingdom had brought in to deal with him. But in that case, he absolutely couldn't avoid fighting him. He fiercely swung the greatsword behind him, each swing threatening to cleave mountains and split the earth. Bang! Alucard deliberately used his arm as a blade hand to clash with the opponent's sword. He found his arm tingling from the impact, and a slight smirk curved his lips. Indeed, such swordsmanship, combined with that troublesome armor, certainly put him on the level of 100 million berry pirate. What kind of monster is this? Cahill's surprise grew even stronger. First, a bullet nearly penetrated this armor, and now he was blocking a sword strike with his bare hand, and that hand hadn't even been severed. Where did King Nut of the Herald Kingdom find such a monster? Chapter 23, You. Perhaps you can. Come on. Nelson Cahill, use that greatsword of yours and try your best to kill me, Alucard shouted. Suddenly, his tall figure transformed into bats, flying into the sky. To everyone's astonishment, the bats swirled around the battlefield, then coalesced in front of Cahill, forming a hand holding a gun. Bang, 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 a continuous barrage of bullets spewed from Cajal's muzzle. Is he a devil fruit user? Cahill scoffed. He couldn't allow the bullets to strike him directly. He pulled back his great sword, which was large enough to serve as a shield, and blocked the bullets one by one. Haha. The fluttering of bats sounded like mocking laughter. The bats that formed the hand were less than a tenth of the total. The remaining bats flew behind Cahill, coalescing into Alucard's form, but this Alucard was missing his right hand and his large-caliber white pistol. Bat Transformation's new ability allowed him to turn into bats for attack and defense, much like a Logia-type devil fruit user. However, Alucard would still be injured if hit, though this was meaningless for his immortal body. During Bat Transformation, the location of his heart couldn't be determined, and hitting his vital points was purely a matter of luck. More importantly, he could divide his body for attacks. As seen now, his right hand remained in the air, firing shots in front of Cahill, while Alucard himself, without his right hand, appeared behind Cahill. General Cahill, look out! 5 Joris Kingdom soldiers rushed forward, shouting, and prepared to attack Alucard with their spears. It's really inconvenient with only one gun. Because the white gun Kajal couldn't undergo bat transformation, Alucard couldn't instantly recall the gun to his hand. His other black gun, Jackal, hadn't awakened yet, preventing him from fully unleashing Alucard's power. It was truly frustrating to fight like this. Alucard swung his hand like a blade, severing the spears in the hands of the 5 soldiers in one go. He temporarily abandoned his attack on Cahill and focused on these 5 men. In no more than 3 seconds, Alucard's hand blade slashed across their necks. Blood erupted, gushing out, and the 5 men lost their lives. 3 seconds was short, but for an expert like Cahill, it was extremely valuable. Seizing this opportunity, he suddenly spun around, wielding his greatsword like a whirlwind, slicing Alucard's body in half at the waist. Reversal slash. Cahill let out a roar, intensifying the force in his hand, slicing Alucard's body into 2 halves, with his waist as the dividing line. Everyone on the battlefield saw this scene. The Joris Kingdom army immediately erupted in cheers, while the Herald Kingdom fell into a deathly silence. The foreign aide hired by the king, he just died like that? Wasn't he a bit too weak? Idiots. About 50 meters from Cahill and Alucard, Ifman also witnessed this. He scornfully looked at those present who were unaware. He also has the alias Alucard the Immortal, you know? How could he be killed so easily? Bang, 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 bang. 5 continuous gunshots rang out. Cahill suddenly felt excruciating pain in his arm. Looking down, he saw the joint of his elbow was shattered. If it weren't for the Frostvine armor, his arm would have been severed with the very first bullet. His almost broken arm was completely unable to continue holding the greatsword as a weapon. With a loud bang, the greatsword fell to the ground. Cahill endured the intense pain and turned around. He saw the eerie, gun-wielding arm still floating in midair behind him, the gunpowder smoke curling from its muzzle seemingly telling him that it was the one that had just fired. Ha ha! Mocking laughter echoed across the battlefield. Suddenly, everyone watched as the arm floating behind Cahill dropped to the ground. Alucard's upper and lower halves, which had been cleaved in 2 by the previous sword strike, transformed back into bats, reforming 10 meters in the air. He reformed into Alucard's original appearance, standing in the sky like a fiend crawled from hell, slowly descending to the ground. Alucard the Immortal? Everyone had witnessed it with their own eyes. A monster whose body would reattach even after being completely cut in half. If anyone had ever seen the chop fruit, they might instinctively think of it, though Alucard's version was far bloodier. What's wrong, Nelson Cahill? The hand you used to wield your sword is about to break off. Why don't you use your last bit of strength for a proud suicide? Alucard mocked loudly. Indeed, after 5 consecutive shots from Kajal, even with that armor, Cahill couldn't take it anymore. The elbow joint of his right arm was so shattered that only a layer of skin connected it, a truly horrifying sight. He probably couldn't control that right arm anymore. What are you talking about? Cahill said indifferently. He picked up his greatsword with his left hand and abruptly chopped off his own right arm, letting it fall to the ground. With a roar, he rallied his troops. My right arm is gone, but I still have my left, don't I? Joris army, why have you stopped? Advance, advance. Alucard's eyes widened slightly, revealing a look of pleasant surprise. He chuckled, interesting. Perhaps you can. Chapter 24, The First Infected. Heya! Cahill roared, swinging his greatsword with his sole remaining left hand towards Alucard. Though he claimed that losing an arm was nothing, his body's reactions told a completely different story. Alucard, without even using any extra skills, effortlessly dodged Cahill's attacks as if dancing. Humph! Cahill let out another furious roar, raising his greatsword high before smashing it down, splitting the ground into a bottomless chasm. Alucard extended his left hand, which wasn't holding a gun, and suddenly blood streamed forth. In the instant Cahill couldn't react, Alucard's left hand forcefully plunged into his body. Ugh! Cahill's pupils constricted, as if experiencing unimaginable pain. For the first few seconds, Cahill endured, but after 10 seconds, he felt every cell in his body screaming in agony, and he couldn't help but roar in anguish. Alucard pulled his left hand out, leaped back, and landed lightly on the top of a broken tree behind the Herald Kingdom army. He quietly watched Cahill's reaction, then issued a command to the other Herald Kingdom soldiers, no one is to attack him. Alucard's role was merely foreign aid hired by the king to deal with Cahill, so the royal army had no obligation to obey his orders. However, after witnessing Alucard's power, when he uttered those words, surprisingly, no one dared to defy him. The Herald soldiers who had been ready to deliver finishing blows halted their movements. Gah! Cahill's cries of agony continued. Just as someone from the Joris army stepped forward to check on him, Cahill suddenly swung his left hand, sending the ally who had approached him flying into the air. He fell back down a few seconds later, splattering into a bloody mess. Everyone was utterly shocked by Cahill's attack on his own ally, especially those from the Joris army. They couldn't understand why their usually stern but extremely caring general would suddenly attack a comrade. Then, Cahill slowly stood up. His cries of pain had vanished. Gradually, everyone could see the changes in his body. His body swelled, almost bursting his armor. Cahill himself seemed to realize this issue, forcefully tearing off his custom armor. The moment the armor fell, his body's expansion became even more astonishing. His original height of just over 2 meters suddenly swelled to about 4 meters. His entire body turned blood red, his neck and jaw gradually fused, and sharp fangs grew from his mouth. Looking at his overall appearance, his only remaining left hand transformed into long claws, more terrifying than those of any beast. At this point, Cahill could no longer be called a human, nor any kind of animal. Even though this world had various races, giants, dwarves, fishmen, minks, there was absolutely no such race as this. Roar. Though he had lost his original appearance, his combat awareness seemed to remain. The mutated Cahill picked up his previously dropped great sword from the ground. What was once a giant sword now looked tiny in Cahill's hands. Whoosh! A flash of silver. Cahill's horizontal sword strike instantly reaped countless lives, including those of his own men. So fast. This was everyone's instinctive first thought. Roar. After his roar, Cahill didn't target Alucard. Instead, he focused on the densest concentration of troops and charged forward without hesitation, swinging the greatsword in his hand, continuously harvesting the lives of soldiers from both nations on the battlefield. It worked. Alucard roared with laughter. Blacklight's first success? Indeed, only someone with a powerful physique and mental fortitude like you could possibly withstand this. As Alucard spoke, Cahill was already slashing wildly through the army, becoming a monster purely driven by destruction and a thirst for blood. You bastard! What did you do to General Cahill? A follower of Cahill, tears welling in his eyes, swung his sword at Alucard. Anyone with eyes could see that Cahill's transformation was entirely Alucard's doing. For such a minor soldier, Alucard simply sent him to hell with a single bullet, chuckling. His stamina, speed, strength, and physique will all show massive increases, but it seems he loses his sanity and becomes a monster driven only by combat and a thirst for blood. That part's different from me. Alucard shook his head, laughing. He admitted he loved to fight, but he didn't think of himself as a creature that craved blood. When a pikeman seized an opportunity and plunged his spear into Cahill's body, the latter's speed didn't decrease at all as he continued to attack, causing Alucard's expression to change again. Oh, doesn't he feel pain? Or is it that his desire to fight is too strong to care about pain? Alucard-sama? Please deal with that guy quickly. If this continues, we'll lose countless of our own men. Draggr could no longer tolerate Cahill's berserk rampage. While the enemy was suffering losses, their own side was also losing countless lives. He had no choice but to beg Alucard for help, even changing his address. Chapter 25, The Strongest Army. Completely unrecognizable as human, Cahill had mutated into a monster due to the Blacklight virus. Alucard temporarily dubbed him a Blacklight infected. Alucard wanted to test the gap between them and whether Cahill possessed the same abilities as himself. Crack! Just then, Cahill's attention finally shifted to Alucard. He transitioned from running on 2 legs like a human to scurrying on all 4s like a beast. No, he only had 3 limbs left, but his left hand still clutched the greatsword. Finally focusing on me, huh? Then come on. Facing the infected Cahill, Alucard stood his ground, neither dodging nor fleeing, a faint smile playing on his lips. Many in the Joris Kingdom army showed ecstatic expressions. Though the monstrous General Cahill had killed far too many of their own, if he could also kill Alucard, the culprit, they would die in peace even here. However, ideals were beautiful, but reality was harsh. As Cahill lunged, ready to cut Alucard down with the sword in his hand, when the greatsword's blade was a millimeter from Alucard's neck, a loud gunshot rang out, pulverizing Cahill's sword-wielding arm. The greatsword fell to the ground with it. All right, can you regenerate your arm, just like me? Alucard watched the armless monster with interest. Due to the powerful shockwave from Cahill's bullet, Cahill couldn't help but stumble back a few steps. He barely managed to steady himself. After a furious roar, he charged directly with his massive body, but there was no sign of regeneration at the sight of his severed arm. Alucard retreated a distance, raised his pistol, and fired, saying at the same time, "Can't regenerate, huh? It seems you're still not perfect like this." Bang, bang, bang. The continuous firing broke Cahill's massive body into chunks of flesh. A moment later, everyone saw the monster that had been slaughtering countless soldiers from both kingdoms turn into mere chunks of meat. Draggr suddenly reacted, roaring and waving his hand, "Charge, charge." Cahill's mutation had caused everyone else to momentarily halt their actions. Now that Cahill was dead, it was the perfect opportunity for an offensive. How could Draggr let it slip? Immediately, the battlefield erupted in renewed slaughter. Alucard, standing on a rock and gazing at the battle below, spread his hands and muttered to himself, "A battlefield? Huh? After the River of Death awakens, I'll have an army of my own, won't I? How exciting." Ability development progress. Mature vampire physique, 73%. Bat Shadow, mature 39%. Weapon, casual LV4, 26%. Blacklight virus LV2, 44%. Hidden shadow LV1, 53%. Developed additional ability, Blacklight virus infected. Combat abilities of successfully infected individuals increase exponentially, but they lose their sanity and combat techniques, becoming alien creatures driven solely by a thirst for blood. First successful infection, humanoid infected. Additional reward, charm. In the first war Alucard joined, the Herald Kingdom already held a massive advantage. 4 hours later, Joris hastily retreated. Draugr didn't pursue them but instead opted for a steady, gradual advance. He planned to let his soldiers eat a hearty meal before pressing the attack. Prepare a ship. My business here is concluded, Alucard said coldly to Ifman, who had brought him there, upon returning to the military camp. Cahill was dead, and King Nut's assigned task was complete. Alucard had no interest in lingering. Understood. I will arrange a ship for you, but the remaining large sum of commission is with His Majesty the King. Please trouble yourself to return to the kingdom with me, Ifman replied. Before leaving, Draugr, the Herald Kingdom Army's commander, stopped Ifman and whispered in his ear, his ability, we might be able to utilize it. Every time Draugr recalled Cahill's mutated appearance, goosebumps rose on his skin. But at the same time, he couldn't help but be captivated by that immense power. He thought, if they could mass-produce such monsters, wouldn't they be able to assemble an undying army? As a warmonger, the mere thought excited Draugr, and he eagerly hoped to draw Alucard into their ranks. Ifman instantly understood Draugur's meaning. Though he considered Alucard's personality and felt it was likely impossible, there was no doubt he himself was greatly tempted. Creating immortal soldiers was the desire of every warmonger. A few days later, in the Herald Kingdom, Alucard successfully received the remaining 100 million berries in commission. Meanwhile, Ifman relayed everything that happened on the battlefield in detail to King Nut. Nut expressed great interest in building a powerful army. Before Alucard left, he arranged a special banquet in his honor and ordered several beautiful women to serve him. Are there no small-chested women in this world? At the banquet, though the women the king found were undoubtedly of high caliber, the immense size of their chests was something Alucard had never seen in his 20-plus years in his previous life. Empress, Robin, and Nami all seemed to be the type who could burst out of their clothes. Truly, many aspects of this world were unique. Alucard, you, who should have been a noble, now have to struggle for money and livelihood. Do you wish to continue this life? Nut asked with a hidden agenda, ordering a maid to refill Alucard's cup. Chapter 26, Apex of the North Blue. Hehe, what do you want to say? Alucard didn't refuse the service of beautiful women, letting several voluptuous beauties intimately pour his wine. He just drew the line at them feeding him. That would make him feel like he was in a subordinate position. Nut said meaningfully, you should know, the Vinsmoke family was a family that once dominated the North Blue. Although I don't know why they abandoned their rule over the North Blue, I've heard rumors that the 66th Vinsmoke family head is gradually making a name for himself in the underworld of the Grand Line. If you intend to seek revenge alone, you'll undoubtedly be outnumbered and outmatched. After speaking, Nut extended a hand to Alucard. How about it? Become my right hand? Before the Vinsmoke family makes its comeback, let us two rule the North Blue first. I will assist you in your revenge. How does that sound? Alucard crossed his arms over his knees, laughing silently with his head bowed. The more Alucard laughed, the more uncertain Nut felt. After a long while, he finally couldn't help but ask, what's so funny? Don't you want revenge? Of course, Alucard couldn't reveal that he had never truly cared about revenge. He was laughing at the words of the man before him. Although he was one of the 4 kings of the North Blue, Nut's overall power level was simply not up to par. Could he possibly associate with a flock of sheep? If you want to increase your power, it's best to first understand your current level. Nut immediately bristled. He understood perfectly well that Alucard was mocking his country's weakness. No matter how strong you are personally, you won't be able to touch a single finger of Vinsmoke Judge. To get revenge, you need collaborators. Despite the insult, Nut didn't want to give up on recruiting Alucard. This man before him was the foremost strongman in the North Blue and possessed the potential to create powerful soldiers. With his addition, his country's military strength could definitely be further enhanced. Interesting, really, Alucard suddenly said. After a moment of surprise from Nut, Alucard continued, meaningless things hold no reason for me to stay. Rather than dying on a throne, I'd rather die in the belly of a sea king on the open ocean. After speaking, Alucard rose and walked towards the palace exit. As he reached the doorway, Alucard paused, then chuckled again. But you wouldn't understand that feeling, would you? Alucard was the type who lived life as he pleased. Guarding a palace, guarding treasures, guarding a nation for an entire lifetime? How utterly boring? In Alucard's view, drifting on a dilapidated ship was far more enjoyable than sitting on a so-called throne, commanding the world. Ifman, on the side, gave Nut a glance. Nut shook his head. There was nothing he could do. Within the palace, and indeed the entire Herald Kingdom, there was no one who could stand against Alucard. A week later, the war between the Herald Kingdom and the Joris Kingdom concluded successfully. An additional clause was added to the Joris Kingdom's surrender treaty: hand over the body of Nelson Cahill, the criminal who harmed the lives of the Herald Kingdom's soldiers. After the decisive battle in which Alucard participated, Nut had heard from Draugr that although he had been reduced to monstrous chunks of flesh, Cahill's body was still recovered. Even though Alucard had left, they could still investigate the cause of Cahill's mutation. Perhaps they could find a breakthrough that would make their soldiers stronger. Facing Nut's demanding stance, the Joris Kingdom had no choice. Although already buried, they had to retrieve General Cahill's body and hand it over to the enemy nation. The technology in the world of pirates was unique. Aside from the inexplicable inability to create flying devices, most other technologies vastly surpassed modern technology from Alucard's past life. Upon receiving Cahill's body and seeing the chunks of flesh inside the coffin, Nut was startled. Such a monster actually existed in this world. However, he immediately became excited, ordering immediate research into this phenomenon to discover the reason behind Cahill's immense power increase after his mutation. However, Nut's joy lasted only a few days before the Marines issued an arrest warrant, more accurately, a search warrant, demanding that Nut hand over the body of the enemy General Cahill he had obtained and immediately cease all research into the Invincible Army. Unauthorized biochemical research on humans was illegal. However, to prevent this matter from escalating, the Marines minimized Nut's and the Herald Kingdom's crimes. When Nut heard that the Marines had discovered his research only a few days after it began, he inwardly cursed his terrible luck. Nut still didn't fully understand that in this era, before the Great Pirate Era, when powerful and troublesome pirates were generally fewer, the Marines maintained a high level of surveillance on those who were highly likely to cause trouble for powerful pirates. This was especially true for Alucard, a pirate hunter who was rapidly approaching the level of the apex of the North Blue, not to mention that he was someone mentioned by Marine Chief Instructor Zephyr. Chapter 27, Government Attention. Vegapunk, the genius scientist, was arrested by the world government after his research into lineage factor was discovered. However, his immense talent so impressed the government that instead of imprisoning him, they sent him to the Marine Headquarters Scientific Research Team. There, Vegapunk gained everything he desired, any experimental materials, research funds, the government would procure them for him and provide almost limitless funding for his experiments. Today, while he was conducting research, the lab door suddenly burst open. Vegapunk unpleasantly turned his head, surprised to see government agents. But as a genius scientist, Vegapunk didn't grovel before the world government's intimidation. Instead, he spoke with extreme displeasure. What do you want? The results for this research project aren't due for another 2 months, are they? Vegapunk, put your current experiment aside for a moment. Right now, we need you to study this. An agent in a black suit pulled out a sealed bag from within his jacket. Inside was a piece of bloody flesh, unclear whether it belonged to an animal or a human. What is that thing? Vegapunk frowned. At first glance, it resembled neither animal nor human flesh. What it truly was would likely only be fully known after the analysis results came in. Don't concern yourself with that for now. Just focus on researching this thoroughly. The agent placed the item on the table and left with his subordinates. Although Vegapunk was currently the genius scientist of Marine Headquarters, he was still under supervision, and his authority was far from what it would become later, when Luffy set sail. At present, Vegapunk basically did whatever the government ordered him to. Vegapunk carefully extracted the blood clot, taking a tiny sample of blood and placing it under a microscope for observation. What he saw made him freeze. Isn't this human flesh and blood? But from its outward appearance, it was completely unrecognizable as such. How strange. What exactly is this, a living thing? Vegapunk discovered another peculiar detail. Even though these pieces of flesh had clearly been severed, the cells within were still alive, especially a type of red and black cell. Their activity was extremely high, and they possessed powerful aggressive and devouring properties. Where did those government agents get something like this? Vegapunk thought with a frown. Meanwhile, in Admiral Sengoku's office at Marine Headquarters. At this moment, Sengoku held a bag of flesh in his hand, his brow furrowed. So this is what that guy, Alucard, created. Yes, sir. This was obtained from the Marine branch in the North Blue's Herald Kingdom by Lieutenant Commander Florence. It was being used in experiments by King Harold Nut. After extensive investigation, it's confirmed that Dracula D. Alucard used some special method to transform Nelson Cahill, the general of the enemy Joris Kingdom, into this monster. Nut then intended to research this thing to create an undying army. A Marine Rear Admiral stood at Sengoku's desk, providing a detailed report. Transformed into a monster. It reminds me of that project Vegapunk and Vinsmoke Judge researched previously. I didn't expect something like this to appear so soon. Sengoku crossed his hands and rested them on his jaw. Since Alucard hadn't yet done anything against the Marines or the government, a bounty poster hadn't been issued for him yet. However, his level of danger was gradually drawing the government's serious attention. What actions has the government taken? Sengoku asked. Most of the corpse has been preserved and handed over to the genius scientist, Vegapunk, for research. Further actions are pending discussion, the Rear Admiral quickly replied. What about Dracula D. Alucard's latest movements? Sengoku asked again. He has currently entered the Grand Line. Based on his route, it should be this one. The Rear Admiral pointed to one of the 7 routes that branched out from the Grand Line's entrance. The Grand Line's entrance was divided, with a total of 7 routes. Once a route was chosen, it generally wouldn't change until reaching the end of the first half, the Sabayati Archipelago. Distribute his photo. Even if he hasn't been officially wanted, make sure the soldiers are vigilant, Sengoku said gravely. Yes, sir. I'll see to it immediately. The Rear Admiral saluted Sengoku, took the piece of flesh, which he still needed to deliver back to the research department. Thump, thump, thump. A series of hurried footsteps approached. Another Rear Admiral burst into Sengoku's office and reported, Admiral, Golden Lion Shiki has entered the New World. Request immediate deployment of forces for his capture. Sengoku slammed his hand on the desk, roaring in anger, "Those troublesome pirate bastards." At this moment, Alucard had only just begun to attract attention. The world of pirates was still dominated by the headlines of Roger, Whitebeard, and Golden Lion Shiki. Chapter 28, Myres, the City of Sin. Alucard's ship slowly approached the first large main island he encountered after entering the Grand Line from the North Blue entrance. However, as soon as he entered the port, he noticed an unusual scene. In his past experiences, harbors and docks usually hosted fishing boats or merchant ships. Here, however, most of the vessels were pirate ships, with huge skull symbols painted on their sails. In contrast, Alucard's ship, with its plain white sails and no flag, stood out conspicuously. "Welcome, welcome, welcome to Myres." Alucard had just disembarked when a man with medium-length green hair approached, leading several men and women. "My name is Sherry's Nimitz. This is your first time in Myres, isn't it, guest?" The man, who called himself Nimitz, rubbed his hands together as he greeted Alucard. The men and women behind him seemed to be his subordinates, following closely. "Is there something you need?" Alucard asked, his face devoid of any clear expression. "No, this city has its own unspoken rules, and we hope outsiders will understand them, as we don't want any unnecessary bloodshed," Nimitz said with a sly grin, his eyes narrowed into thin slits. Alucard's lips curled slightly. "So, what do you intend to do?" "It's simple. Any foreign ship arriving here needs to pay respects to the city's administrator to prove they mean no harm, nothing more. Since this is the first major trading city from the North Blue into the Grand Line, management is very strict," Nimitz explained, raising his right hand to Alucard and making an okay gesture. "Do you understand?" Alucard's smile remained. "Of course. Lead the way." Nimitz and his group were surprised that Alucard agreed so readily, but they quickly exchanged glances and led him into the city. Less than a minute after Alucard was led away from the port, a large group of people, at least 20 or 30, suddenly emerged from a factory near the dock. "You think that guy in red is crazy? He just followed them so obediently. Probably some rich kid cruising around on his family's boat. Too lazy to even threaten him. Good luck today. Stop talking so much damn nonsense. His ship is made of excellent timber, it wasn't cheap. There must be plenty of treasure inside." The 24 or so people quickly boarded the ship Nat had given Alucard. However, after more than half an hour of searching, they found nothing. Not even basic necessities like fresh water and food for a journey. Several grim-faced leaders cursed, "What the hell? There's nothing inside." "Damn, you think that kid carries all the treasure on him," one person suggested. At that, everyone remembered Alucard's large trench coat and thought it was highly plausible. The blonde-haired leader immediately clapped his hands, exclaiming, "Good. Let's head back to the tavern and rendezvous with Boss Nimitz. We'll rob that kid of everything he's got." In a secluded tavern, Nimitz and his group led Alucard inside. The moment he entered, the smoky air immediately irritated Alucard. Though he enjoyed alcohol, he detested smoke. The tavern was packed, roughly 30 people by a quick count. Yet, Alucard's face maintained its unchanging smile, his hands in his pockets. "The places your city's managers frequent are truly unique." Nimitz and the subordinates who had greeted Alucard quickly walked to the bar. As Alucard stood in the center of the tavern, Nimitz suddenly turned and snapped his fingers. Instantly, everyone in the tavern pulled out guns and aimed them at Alucard, who stood in the open space in the middle. "What an idiot. He was fooled so easily," Nimitz said, his previous smile completely gone. He wrapped an arm around two unusually styled women, one on each side, and laughed wildly. "Take off your clothes, and all the treasures and money hidden inside. Then you can get lost." Alucard's lips curled slightly. "Is this how this entire city operates?" "Huh." Hearing Alucard's question, Nimitz was momentarily taken aback. He waved his hand. "Haven't you heard of Myres, the infamous city of sin in the Grand Line? Hurry up and leave everything you have, then get out." Bang! Suddenly, a loud bang. A powerful impact came from Nimitz's left side. When he turned his head, blood splattered his eye. The woman he had been embracing on his left side was now headless, blood ceaselessly gushing from her severed neck, largely staining his cheek red. The others saw that Alucard, they didn't know when or from where, had pulled out a large white pistol. They hadn't even seen Alucard make the motion to fire, yet the faint smoke curling from the muzzle of the white pistol now proved that Alucard was the one who had just fired. Chapter 29, Corrupt King of Alo Pizarro. In the world of pirates, skilled gun users were rare, though pirate crews did have the position of sniper. Examples included Usopp's father in the Red-Haired Pirates, members of the Blackbeard Pirates, Whitebeard Pirates, and even the Pirate King, Gold Roger, who used firearms. What Alucard remembered most vividly was Zephyr's pistol, crafted from seastone bullets. However, all these individuals used guns as auxiliary weapons, not as their primary means of attack. A city of sin, you say? I like that name. Does that mean anywhere in this city, you're all the same caliber of trash? Alucard cocked Kajal and began to spray bullets throughout the tavern. Watching his subordinates explode one by one, Nimitz finally couldn't suppress his fear and roared, "He's just one man. What are you waiting for? Shoot, shoot." The initial 30 men, by the time they regained their composure, were reduced to just over a dozen. Many prepared to aim again, but before they could even raise their guns, bullets had already pierced their hearts, throats, or even brains. Could anyone wield a gun that quickly? Hua. Alucard exhaled heavily, pressing Kajal against Nimitz's forehead, and chuckled. Perfect. I have a new ability I've been wanting to test. Alucard waved his gun-free left hand in front of Nimitz. In Nimitz's eyes, the hand wearing a white glove glided past, like a form of hypnosis, making his gaze become unfocused, his pupils dilated. He was clearly under control. Charm, Alucard's new ability, possessed powers extremely similar to hypnosis. Alucard had once used it on an 8-million berry pirate when he first entered the Grand Line, but the target broke free after only a few seconds. This suggested that this move was likely effective against those with weaker willpower, in other words, ordinary people. As for Nimitz, he felt like nothing more than the leader of a scam syndicate, without any real power, just an ordinary person who happened to carry a gun. Alucard easily controlled him with charm. Who really runs this city? The controlled Nimitz stammered. The corrupt king. The corrupt king. Avalo Pizarro. He's a 230 million berry, pirate captain of the evil gang pirates. 3 months ago, he secretly took over this country. I see. You've been through a lot. Alucard pulled the trigger, instantly splattering Nimitz's head. Alucard walked to the liquor cabinet behind the bar, examining the types of alcohol inside while pondering Nimitz's words. It wasn't particularly strange for pirates to occupy a city. Crocodile in Alabasta and Don Quixote da Flamingo in Dressrosa both used their warlord privileges to occupy a country. However, this pirate named the Corrupt King didn't have the privileges of a warlord. His actions would undoubtedly attract the Marines. But Nimitz had mentioned that Pizarro secretly controlled this country. Did that mean the Marines didn't know about this yet? Boss Nimitz, did you take care of that kid? There was nothing on that ship. The blonde-haired group who had attempted to rob Alucard entered, intending to loudly question Nimitz, but the moment they stepped into the tavern, their group's base, the scene before them left them utterly speechless. In a blood-soaked hell, only a man in red stood behind the bar, selecting red wine from the liquor cabinet. Alucard slowly turned around, and with him, the muzzle of Kajal also turned. Your liquor here is all low-grade stuff, Alucard chuckled softly, pulling the trigger and instantly blowing a hole through the blonde-haired man's forehead. You. No one expected that the supposed easy target would suddenly transform into a fierce tiger and devour them completely. Bang, 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 bang. Gunshots continuously echoed from inside the tavern. Those who heard the gunshots likely assumed it was another unlucky newcomer to the island being robbed by Nimitz's gang, never imagining that the ones being wiped out were the gang themselves. Several minutes later, Alucard emerged from the tavern, seeing that he hadn't gained much, other than learning that this was a city controlled by a pirate. To control a city, and as a pirate not a warlord, he must be quite capable and worth meeting. But what the hell are the Marines doing here? As Alucard walked through the streets of Myres, he discovered many interesting things. Despite being such a large city, there weren't many pedestrians on the streets. To be precise, most people walking outside looked like unsavory characters. On second thought, it made sense. In a place controlled by pirates, without marine protection, those who could leave would have already fled. Those who couldn't escape were likely confined to their homes, trying to figure out a way out. In such circumstances, only Pizarro's subordinates and other pirates would dare to walk brazenly in the open. Chapter 30, The Pirate Who Rips Off the Most. Avalo Pizarro was a truly unique pirate. It's fair to say that anyone with an exceptionally high bounty, enough to etch their name into history, possessed their own distinctiveness. Pizarro was the captain of the evil gang pirates and enjoyed plundering treasure. However, unlike typical pirates who'd burst into a rich person's home and loot it, Pizarro preferred to first capture the local marine base, severing communication between the local marine branch and headquarters. Then, he'd take control of the entire city and slowly uncover where all the significant wealth in the city was hidden. While this method took more time, it often yielded enormous sums of money, enough to rank him among the most successful robbers on any pirate leaderboard. Of course, there were no impenetrable walls in this world. Even with control over a marine branch, news would inevitably leak out. Marine headquarters regularly received situation reports from its various branches. If there was a prolonged lack of reports, headquarters would dispatch Marines to investigate. Pizarro perfectly exploited this timing, escaping on his ship at the very last moment before headquarters reinforcements arrived, having already thoroughly plundered the city. This practice of dominating local areas earned him the moniker Corrupt King. The city Alucard currently stood in, now known as Myres, the city of sin, was acquired by Pizarro using his most favored method. However, he had controlled this place for several months now, and based on Pizarro's experience, Marine headquarters was likely about to send an investigative force. Given that Myres was a large city, they would probably dispatch a Marine vice admiral or higher. Pizarro had no desire to directly confront the Marines. In fact, apart from the Yonko-level pirates, no pirate crew would foolishly charge forward when encountering Marine forces. They all employed evasion tactics. Pizarro was no exception. He was planning his escape. Pizarro's Corrupt King moniker also stemmed from the structure of his subordinates. With King Pizarro at the very top, his underlings were divided into 5 high-ranking subordinates: Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, and Baron. Similar to the division captains of the Whitebeard pirates, Pizarro had a total of 5 main cadres. In total, the evil gang pirates numbered around 300. In this era, before the Great Pirate Era officially began, only the Whitebeard pirates and the Flying Pirates could boast more members than Pizarro's crew. After occupying the large city of Myres, Pizarro's pirate crew's combat strength expanded once again, bringing their total crew size to 400. Hey, who's that guy? Alucard's presence on the streets of Myres attracted considerable attention from the members of the evil gang pirates. Due to Pizarro's influence, common citizens were too terrified to leave their homes, especially during the day. Those brazen enough to walk freely on the streets, aside from the evil gang pirates themselves and other pirate crews, were mostly the small-time thugs who had dared to extort Alucard earlier. However, since the evil gang pirates were the dominant power in the city, other pirate crews and ordinary thugs alike paid tribute to them, meaning they handed over a portion of their earnings. Thus, they mostly recognized each other. Alucard's strikingly conspicuous attire, by all accounts, should have been unforgettable after a single glance. Yet, the evil gang pirates on the street had never seen Alucard, suggesting he was a new pirate or merchant who had just arrived on the island. Hey, kid, there's a new rule in Myres: when you meet a member of the evil gang pirates, you hand over half of your total cash. Two pirates blocked Alucard's path. Since his aura certainly didn't resemble that of a merchant, they instinctively took Alucard for a pirate. As for pirates, Pizarro tried to avoid fighting them during his control of the city. He didn't want Marine headquarters or other branches to know about his occupation. Generally, if you paid half the sum, they'd let you go. If you didn't, they'd simply teach you the terror of the corrupt king. Interesting pirates. This is my first time encountering such, Alucard said, his lips curling upwards as he reached into his coat. The two pirates initially thought Alucard was reaching for money, unaware that he was actually going for his gun. Just as Alucard's hand, holding Cajal, was about to emerge to give the two boys a bullet, a loud shout suddenly came from an intersection across the street. What are you two bastards doing? We're setting sail? The Marine Headquarters investigation unit is on its way. The two pirates turned their heads upon hearing this. It was a minor leader from their evil gang pirates. They themselves were just the lowest-ranking pirates. But we were just about to get some money, the skinny, gray-haired pirate complained, vexed that he had finally robbed someone. Damn it, I don't care about you two. I'm leaving now. If you want to get caught by the Marines, waste your time there. The evil gang pirates' minor leader cursed and quickly departed. Seeing their leader leave, the two low-ranking pirates also became anxious. After muttering, "You got lucky, bastard," to Alucard, they quickly followed their leader and fled. Chapter 31, The Two Gun-Wielders. Seeing the two minor pirate thugs flee in a hurry, Alucard smiled faintly, not bothering to shoot them in the back of the head. He had a better target, corrupt King Pizarro. This was his first encounter with a pirate boasting a bounty over 100 million, and even one exceeding 200 million. A 200 million berry bounty in this era utterly dwarfed Luffy's 300 million berry bounty after an ice lobby. The direction the small fry pirates fled in was Myres' North Blue Port, while Alucard's ship was docked at the West Pier. They weren't in the same harbor, which was likely why he hadn't seen Pizarro when he first arrived. Pizarro didn't control islands like the Whitebeard pirates. To be precise, occupying an island, or even a city, wasn't so simple. The Great Pirate Era hadn't yet begun, and the Marines held a relatively dominant position. Even Golden Lion Shiki, known for his ruling style, commanded a fleet to conquer the Grand Line. Playing at island rule was something only pirate crews with incredibly exaggerated power could achieve, and it was often a thankless task. In the future, Whitebeard would only allow his flag to be used to deter war. As with Fishman Island, it was merely a deterrent, ultimately not much use. After Whitebeard's death, another Yonko, Big Mom, lent out her flag in exchange for candy. This was more of a transaction than true rule. Crocodile and Doflamingo's actions in Alabasta and Dressrosa, respectively, were true forms of rule. However, they both had clear objectives, Pluton and establishing their bases. More importantly, they had the privilege of being warlords. Without the power of a Yonko or the privileges of a warlord, a pirate's desire to rule a city was almost a pipe dream. Pizarro understood this. He hadn't reached the level of Whitebeard or Golden Lion Shiki. For a city, he would simply drain its value and then flee before the Marines arrived. He was cunning and intelligent. Thanks to this method, he had accumulated enormous wealth along his journey. Captain, news just came in. A Marine Vice Admiral from headquarters is heading this way. At Myres' North Blue Port, a subordinate reported the situation to Pizarro. Then hurry up and move, lads. Prepare for retreat. Once we reach the next city, we'll party hard. Awah. Hearing their captain's words, the many pirates excitedly raised their hands and roared. Pirates of this era were like this. Compared to the multitude who would chase after the One Piece in the future, most pirates simply enjoyed the free life of abusing others and gaining wealth without effort. While not strange, it did lead to the emergence of many idiotic pirates, much to Alucard's displeasure. Bang! Piercing through the air in an instant, Pizarro's innate combat intuition caused him to swiftly raise his hand. The large gauntlet on his left wrist blocked the bullet, but the bullet embedded itself deeply into his gauntlet. Although it didn't hit his flesh, its immense power forced Pizarro back 2 steps. Oh, not many people can block that shot. Alucard slowly emerged from another path on the dock. Who are you, Naya? The moment Pizarro spoke, Alucard couldn't help but laugh. This tall, burly man with a messy beard and long hair spoke with such a strangely effeminate tone. That was one thing, but what made it even harder to hold back laughter was the Naya at the end of his sentence. The strong sense of incongruity made Alucard burst into laughter. Hearing Alucard's laughter, Pizarro's face twisted into a sneer. The subordinates who were busy loading cargo onto the ship shuddered. Pizarro despised anyone mocking his voice. In their hearts, they had already branded Alucard with the label Dead Man Walking. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Pizarro appeared before Alucard, unleashing a heavy punch. Seeing this, Alucard raised his hand to block. Their arms collided, and for a moment, Alucard's trench coat flapped wildly from the powerful burst of wind pressure, and a large crater formed in the ground. Alucard's other hand pulled out casual and pointed it at Pizarro's forehead, while Pizarro also drew a large caliber pistol from within his leather overcoat, pointing it back at Alucard. Bang! Bang! Both fired simultaneously. Alucard aimed for the head, while Pizarro aimed for the throat. Armament. Hacky. Feeling the bullet obstructed, Alucard immediately recalled his fight with Zephyr in Flavance. Back then, Zephyr also blocked his bullets with armament Hacky without a scratch. But upon closer inspection, while Pizarro's forehead was also blackened, the bullet had still embedded itself into his flesh, drawing blood. This was not only because Casual's power had increased since then, but also because Pizarro's armament Hacky couldn't compare to Zephyr's. On the other side, Pizarro was even more astonished, staring in shock at the bloody hole his shot had created in Alucard's throat. Half his neck was gone, and he was still fighting as if nothing had happened. Chapter 32, This is Alucard. Vice Admiral Borsellino, less than 3 hours until we reach Myres. Please issue the prepare for battle order to the troops. On a marine warship in the first half of the Grand Line, a marine captain saluted a man in his 30s, who was lying on a deck chair, eyes closed, resting. How troublesome, any. Borsellino stretched languidly, speaking to the captain with a listless tone. All right, go prepare. The marine captain looked somewhat helpless but said no more, retreating to get ready. Marine Vice Admiral Borsellino, a user of the glint fruit, former Marine Admiral, and Zephyr the chief instructor's first disciple, was renowned for his monster-level strength from the moment he entered the military. The only one who could rival him was another monster, Vice Admiral Sakazuki, a user of the magma fruit. After instructing the captain to have the other Marines prepare for battle, Borsellino lay back in his chair, recalling a conversation he had with Admiral Sengoku a few weeks prior. Borsellino, the major trade city of Myres, located at the entrance to the Grand Line from the North Blue, hasn't sent a military report in over 2 months. We sent other branches to investigate, but they too went silent. There's a high probability something has happened. I'm now ordering you to lead 500 Marine soldiers to investigate. If it's pirates causing trouble, eliminate them. Those were Sengoku's exact words. The fact that he was sending a Marine Vice Admiral, someone likely to become an admiral in the future, indicated the severity of the situation. How troublesome if the enemy escapes. Sengoku-san will tear me to pieces. Borsellino grinned slyly, lighting a cigarette. Borsellino pulled out a bounty poster, Avalo Pizarro, the captain of the evil gang pirates, known as the Corrupt King, with a bounty exceeding 200 million berries. His record showed a pattern of taking control of villages or towns, then using a systematic search to completely loot all the treasures on the island. This unique form of robbery earned him the title Corrupt King. Although a large city like Myres was an unprecedented target for Pizarro, he was the most likely suspect. Meanwhile, at the Myres harbor, amidst the astonished gazes of the surrounding evil gang pirates crew, a single gunshot from Alucard's casual finally brought down the heavily wounded Pizarro, who was clinging to his last breath. The battle had lasted over 2 hours, and a victor had finally been decided. Pizarro turned his head, half dead, his body riddled with bloodied holes. It wouldn't be surprising if he drew his last breath the next second. In contrast, Alucard's wounds were visibly healing at a rapid rate. Through the tears in his clothes, one could see that all the injuries he had sustained from Pizarro were completely healed. Monster? He's truly a monster. Having witnessed the entire battle, the evil gang pirates were completely dumbfounded. Alucard had undoubtedly sustained no fewer injuries than Pizarro during the fight, but the terrifying thing was that Alucard's wounds could heal, even completely recover. Immortal. An immortal monster. Alucard pressed his gun against the throat of Pizarro, who lay sprawled on his back. Pizarro's throat trembled faintly with each difficult breath, but there wasn't a single spot on his body untouched by blood. Guh. Already struggling to breathe from his severe injuries, and with a heavy object pressing against his throat, Pizarro couldn't help but let out a painful gasp. Move, fight, kid, Naya. Pizarro managed to utter a difficult sentence. Though his rough appearance contrasted with his eunuch-like tone and disgusting Naya at the end, Alucard didn't laugh this time. Because Pizarro was someone who, facing death, didn't beg for mercy. So there are still some halfway decent pirates out there. Alucard chuckled softly, and sparks erupted from his gun's muzzle. But the shot didn't hit Pizarro's vital throat, it struck his left cheek. His face was shot through. The pain of a shot-through face was far more agonizing than being hit in the internal organs, simply because the skin was thinner. But amidst his cries of pain, Pizarro felt more profound confusion. My face was shot through. But why? Why didn't he kill me? If he wanted to, he could have easily, couldn't he? A boring era needs a new additive, doesn't it, Avalo Pizarro? Alucard put away casual. It would be a shame for you to die now. Why Naya? Enduring the intense pain in his face, Pizarro looked up and roared, enraged by Alucard's eyes, which seemed to be looking at a toy. Is he pitying me? Is he pitying me? The current era is full of lifeless fish that can't even bite their food, just swimming around listlessly. Alucard's lips curved into a smile. Only by introducing fish that can eat other fish can things truly liven up. Go ahead and swim freely, eating fish in this boring world. This isn't about letting you off, I merely want to nurture this fish for my own amusement, for my own pleasure. As he finished speaking, Alucard threw his head back and laughed uproariously. That's right. Letting Pizarro go? This wasn't letting him go. It was merely to make this world a little more chaotic. It wasn't for the pirates' conquest of the Grand Line, nor for the Marines' justice. It was for the pleasure of battle, for doing what brings joy, nothing more. This is Alucard. The other evil gang pirates crew members watched Alucard standing next to their captain, laughing maniacally towards the sky, and felt goosebumps rise all over their skin. Monster? He's truly a monster. Chapter 33, I'm going to kill Alucard? For Alucard, pirate ships meant nothing. He simply boarded one of the evil gang pirates' vessels and departed directly. The evil gang pirates, originally over 400 strong, had lost more than 200 members during Alucard and Pizarro's battle due to collateral damage. Everyone watched Alucard leave. After a long moment, someone suddenly snapped back to reality and shouted, "Captain! Quick, treat the captain!" The ship's doctor rushed to Pizarro's side and began examining his injuries. When he tore open Pizarro's tattered coat and saw the wounds beneath, even the experienced evil gang pirate's doctor, accustomed to severe injuries, couldn't help but gasp. It's too exaggerated. He's still not dead with wounds like these. Get all the medicine from the ship. We can't move the captain now, I'll operate right here, the doctor yelled, giving orders. As for his own injuries, Pizarro paid them no mind. His eyes were fixed on the distant ship Alucard was sailing away on. I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. Pizarro repeatedly muttered those words in his heart. Alucard had inflicted something more painful than death upon him, pity, treating him like a toy. Such an act, such an insult, even if it was just to inflict one more cut on that bastard, he had to do it. He absolutely had to kill him, kill that man named Alucard. Due to the severity of his injuries, even merely moving him onto the ship could be fatal for Pizarro, so the ship's doctor immediately performed emergency treatment on the spot. Several hours later, all the bullets had been removed, and Pizarro was bandaged like a mummy. All right, quickly get Captain Pizarro back to the ship. Hey, that's a marine warship. Just as the doctor was having Pizarro moved back to the ship, a crewmate suddenly shrieked. Everyone looked out to sea beyond the harbor and indeed saw a massive marine warship approaching. The sheer size of the warship left no doubt, it was a marine headquarters warship. What's there to be scared of? It's not like we haven't dealt with headquarters marines before. Pizarro's first mate roared, drawing his weapon. Consider this an extra boost to my bounty, lads. After we kill the marines, we'll have a grand celebration. While pirates generally avoided fighting the marines, as a large pirate crew, the evil gang pirates had undoubtedly engaged in battles with them before. They had fought marine captains from headquarters at least 5 times, so they felt no fear. Upon hearing their first mate's words, many regained their morale, raising their weapons and shouting enthusiastically. However, a golden flash suddenly shot out from the distant marine warship, instantly sending many pirates standing on the dock crashing into the sea. Oh dear, did I overdo it? The golden light gradually coalesced into a human figure. Borsellino grinned, speaking like a monkey. Excuse me, can anyone tell me where Rear Admiral Clyde is? Rear Admiral Clyde was the highest-ranking commander of the Marine branch responsible for guarding the city of Myres. Of course, he had already been killed by Pizarro during the occupation of the city. No one knows. Borsellino narrowed his eyes, looking around. Under the wary gazes of the other pirates, he calmly stated, since it's all pirates here, I suppose it's all right to kill them all, yes. Borsellino was quite pleased. When he learned that the prime suspect for this incident was corrupt King Avalo Pizarro, he anticipated a tough fight. However, fate had other plans. By the time he arrived, Pizarro had already been turned into a mummy, completely unable to fight. He had, in essence, inherited a ready-made victory. His subsequent investigation confirmed that the corrupt king had indeed taken control of the city. The Marines within the Myres Marine branch base were a mix, some imprisoned, some mind-controlled, and some dead, including the Rear Admiral. Borsellino was deeply curious about who had beaten the corrupt king into such a state and joined the interrogation. I'm going to kill him? Kill that Alucard guy. The moment Borsellino entered the interrogation room, he heard Pizarro's furious roar. The 2 interrogators, seeing Borsellino enter, immediately stood up and saluted him. They then said, Vice Admiral Borsellino, we apologize, he's been saying nothing but that. That bastard Alucard? I'll definitely kill him. Kill him. At this, Pizarro, tied to a chair and wrapped like a mummy, shouted the same words again. Borsellino heard this and stroked his chin, which, despite him being only in his 30s, already showed a hint of wrinkles. Alucard. Borsellino drew out the name, thinking for a moment, then suddenly remembered. Recently, Kuzan and Zephyr Sensei seemed to be mentioning that name quite often. Who was it again? After thinking for a long time, he couldn't recall. He decided it would be better to use a den mushy and ask, "I'm going to kill Alucard." Hearing Pizarro yell again, Borsellino couldn't take it anymore. He quickly pushed himself out of the interrogation room, pulled out his den mushy, and prepared to report the information. Chapter 34, Black Gun Jackal. Ability Development. Mature Vampire Physique, 82%. Bat Transformation Mature Form, 41%. Weapon, Casual LV4, 37%. Blacklight Virus LV2, 49%. Hidden Shadow LV1, 58%. Additional ability awakened, Black Gun Jackal. Overall length, 39 centimeters. Weight, 16 kilograms. Ammunition capacity, 6 rounds. Caliber, 13 millimeters. Casing, pure silver special alloy. Capable of significantly greater damage, but lacks rapid-fire capability. Can be equipped with Seastone special bullets in the same manner, requiring a special manufacturing sample. After seizing one of the evil gang pirates' ships and once again checking his undying, unkillable system, Alucard discovered he had awakened a new power, another gun, the Black Gun Jackal. While excited, what surprised Alucard even more was something else. At the end of the Black Gun Jackal's description, it stated that this gun could be equipped with Seastone bullets. Yes, the Seastone bullets that only Zephyr had barely used once in the original story, the bane of Devil Fruit users. Although the Blacklight virus could attack Logia users like Armament Hacky, it still couldn't achieve the fatal effect of Seastone. Alucard immediately pulled out the Black Gun Jackal. At 39 centimeters and 16 kilograms, this was clearly no ordinary gun. Currently, it was loaded with the system's specially crafted explosive holy water mercury bullets. However, against Logia users, it was similar to the White Gun Casual, immensely powerful but unable to harm them. As for Seastone bullets, as far as he knew from the original story, their first user was Zephyr. If that was the case, he still needed to find a way to acquire these bullets, didn't he? If Zephyr used them, then only the Marines or the world government could be manufacturing them. He had found a starting point, but the specific method remained elusive. Regardless, heading towards the end of the first half of the Grand Line was definitely the right direction. All in all, he would temporarily aim for Seastone bullets as his goal. Well, I guess I have a small objective for now, Alucard muttered to himself with a light chuckle, taking a sip from the wine glass on the small table by the armrest of his chair. From leaving the isolated island until now, Alucard's actions couldn't truly be called an adventure like Roger or Whitebeard's. It was more a journey filled with combat, death, and various unknown, aimless wanderings. But now, it was different. Seastone bullets served as Alucard's small objective for the time being. Click. A moment later, Alucard couldn't resist chambering around in the Black Gun Jackal. Simultaneously, a pirate ship gradually approached his vessel. They're here? Perfect time to test this guy's power. These pirates, who just happened to collide with a gun eager to be tested, were simply out of luck. Usually, even when encountering pirate ships, as long as they didn't actively approach, Alucard wouldn't necessarily initiate an attack. However, pirates were inherently restless, engaging in battle upon encounter was almost inevitable. This proactive attack was a rare occurrence for him. Boom! When the two ships were still about 400 meters apart, Alucard finally pulled the trigger of the Jackal. The moment the shell casing hit the deck, a large hole exploded in the opposing pirate ship's hull. Rumble! The enemy pirate crew felt their ship tremble violently, as if struck by something. A man in a vest urgently asked, "What's going on? Did they fire a cannon so quickly?" In this era, cannon technology wasn't advanced enough to launch laser beams, and a 400-meter cannon range was extremely rare. "No, it's not." A pirate holding binoculars stood by the ship's railing, looking into the distance. He said to the others, it looks like they're using a gun." Huh. Hearing him, the others immediately wore shocked expressions, as if they'd seen a ghost. A gun? A gun that could make a ship shake like that? That wasn't a gun anymore, was it? Another pirate, disbelieving, snatched the binoculars from his hand. He looked towards Alucard again, and in the lens, he saw Alucard raise the white gun Casual in his right hand and fire towards the lens. Bang! The binoculars lens shattered, and simultaneously, so did his forehead. "Let's try again." Alucard chuckled, raising the Black Gun Jackal for a second shot. As he fired, the opposing ship's hull violently shuddered a few times, and seawater gradually began to pour into the ship's interior. "Return fire! Return fire!" The enemy pirates finally reacted, frantically moving cannonballs and returning fire at Alucard. However, while the Black Gun Jackal couldn't fire continuously and required rechambering after each shot, it was still impossible for it to be slower than loading a large cannon. Of course, if it were someone like Garp, who played baseball with cannonballs, that would be a different story. Chapter 35, The Most Grievous Decision. In the Marine Headquarters Scientific Research Laboratory, the moment Vegapunk placed a drop of blood onto the testing platform, the previously quiescent cells on the screen suddenly became incredibly active. The substance Vegapunk had dropped onto the platform was, naturally, something extracted from the blood clot the world government had provided him for experimentation. Vegapunk discovered that the cells within were highly corrosive, destructive, and aggressive. The corrosive nature allowed them to devour and replace the host's original bodily components, while their aggressive and destructive properties could break through the limits of the human body, even greatly reducing pain receptors, thereby transforming the host into a fear-pain immune, blood-crazed monster. It had to be said that Vegapunk truly lived up to his title as a man whose intellect was said to be 500 years ahead of the world. Even without much information from the world government, he had already researched these materials more thoroughly than the world government itself understood. Vegapunk then injected the concentrated extract from the blood clot into a white mouse. Within seconds, the mouse's fur instantly turned from pure white to blood red, and its body swelled to more than double its original size. The little mouse, previously docile in its glass enclosure, became extraordinarily violent after the injection, repeatedly slamming itself against the glass. When Vegapunk placed it with other white mice, it unequivocally went on a killing spree. The infected, mutated white mouse killed all the other mice in the same box, but within seconds, it too died. The reason required no further study. Vegapunk could see it at a glance. It couldn't withstand the power of those cells and died from organ failure. Over the next continuous month, Vegapunk discovered that the more this substance was used, the less power it contained. For example, if the first injection of cells into a white mouse could evolve its combat power to LV5, then the second and third injections would only result in LV4, LV3, or even LV2 and LV1. The more it was used, the less potency the contained power held. Vegapunk had initially been passively undertaking this experiment, but now he had developed a keen interest. He wanted to try he really wanted to try researching this substance. The personality of a mad scientist was clearly emerging. Vegapunk immediately reported his findings to his superiors. The world government had not yet granted full trust to this genius scientist, who had only recently joined them, but they still reviewed the experimental report Vegapunk submitted. It can grant overwhelming destructive power, at the cost of losing one's sanity and turning into a blood-craving monster? The higher UPS in the world government began to understand why the king of the Herald Kingdom wanted to use this substance to mass-produce an invincible army. However, according to Vegapunk's current report, white mice couldn't withstand such power. Vegapunk intended to change the experimental subjects, wild beasts, sea kings, and even humans. Using humans for laboratory experiments was absolutely against human civilization, yet historically, many scientists had done just that. In fact, it was precisely because they did so that technology progressed. Vegapunk received the entire corpse of Cahill. Upon seeing this complete monster's corpse, even Vegapunk couldn't help but show surprise. This is a monster mutated from a human, right? So injecting it into a human turns them into a monster like this. Soon, with Cahill's body in hand, Vegapunk once again immersed himself in relentless research. An invincible army, he had once entertained such an idea himself. Fleet Admiral Kong, after receiving Vice Admiral Borsalino's mission report from Myres, truly took the name Alucard to heart this time. He had continuously defeated powerful pirates, even the corrupt king, with a bounty over 200 million, had fallen to him. Although he wasn't a pirate, he wasn't easy to deal with either. According to Borsalino's submitted report, the pirate hunter Alucard ultimately stole one of the evil gang pirates' ships and sailed off. This meant that the ship now drifting on the sea, bearing the evil gang pirates' flag, was actually carrying Alucard. This was another troublesome matter. If the Marines spotted a pirate ship, they would instinctively attack. However, that Alucard would certainly fight back. At that point, even if he was a pirate hunter, he would still have to issue a bounty for him, wouldn't he? What a reckless guy. Didn't he consider this situation? Kong muttered to himself. However, he didn't know that Alucard had never acknowledged his identity as a pirate hunter to begin with. It didn't matter if he was seen as a pirate hunter or if he had a bounty on his head. If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. Finally, Kong adopted a firm stance on the matter. He didn't care. The honor of the Marines was non-negotiable, regardless of whether the opponent was a pirate or a pirate hunter. He had no intention of issuing an order like "Do not attack ships bearing the evil gang pirates' flag." Issuing such an order would undoubtedly severely diminish the Marines' prestige. Roger, Whitebeard, Golden Lion Shiki, these enemies were already powerful enough. Would it really matter to them to add one more Alucard to the mix? However, Kong didn't know that he had made a terribly wrong decision. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say it was the most grievous decision of his life. Chapter 36, The Most Heinous Female Pirate in History. Starting from Reverse Mountain at the entrance to the Grand Line, there are 7 magnetic routes. The path initially chosen is the one you must follow all the way to the end of the first half of the Grand Line, Sabayati Archipelago. This statement is correct, but it comes with a prerequisite: you must follow in log pose. Without in log pose, one could at any time stray into other magnetic routes and face mortal danger. For instance, Alucard right now. He didn't carry in log pose and simply let his ship wander. As long as it wasn't returning the way it came, he let the ship sail aimlessly. This was one of the reasons the Marines couldn't track Alucard's movements when he entered the Grand Line. The crucial point lay in this bastard not playing by the rules. Once he disappeared, he couldn't be found. No, to be precise, they couldn't predict which island he'd arrive at next. To the Marines who understood Alucard's habits, this madman was practically looking for death. He had no navigational knowledge. Didn't he know how dangerous it was to forcibly break through magnetic routes? Even the Marines didn't dare to casually break through magnetic routes unless they had exceptionally powerful experts on board and only in extremely urgent situations. Yet, Alucard treated such a perilous act as routine, and the Marines' worries were well-founded. Unbeknownst to him, Alucard had already forcibly broken through magnetic routes 3 times. The ship he stole from the evil gang pirates was consequently battered and ruined. It was a miracle that the Marines hadn't yet listed him on a bounty poster. Meanwhile, as Alucard haphazardly navigated the magnetic routes, news of corrupt King Pizarro's imprisonment spread worldwide via newspaper birds. What? Pizarro was defeated? By whom? Whitebeard? Or Roger? Or at least someone on Wolf's level, right? In a certain sea area of the Grand Line, a fashionably dressed but undeniably unattractive female pirate questioned her subordinates. To describe her, she was practically a human female version of Arlong, with a long nose and sinister eyes, and a physique more robust than a man's. This was Katarina Devon, known as the most heinous female pirate in history, currently with a bounty of 180 million berries. Devon had fought Pizarro several times and knew how troublesome that bastard was. She felt that only someone of her caliber or stronger could have defeated him. But to Devon's surprise, her subordinate, after some hesitation, stammered, "Sea Captain, it seems it wasn't any of them. The one who defeated the corrupt king was a pirate hunter from the North Blue." "What did you say?" It was no wonder Devon was surprised. In this era, pirate hunters, in their perception, were essentially individuals who relied on a bit of legwork and martial arts to capture pirates for money, simply a means to make a living. Anyone with true strength or ambition would either become a pirate or a marine. Pirate hunter was practically synonymous with third-rate. The corrupt king was defeated by a third-rate fighter? Devon clearly couldn't believe it. She took the newspaper from her subordinate. Besides the content, Devon also saw a picture of Alucard. He appeared to be less than 20 years old. Could such a young punk really defeat that Pizarro? It seems that Pizarro bastard stole too much money and forgot to train his strength. Devon abruptly crumpled the newspaper and tossed it into the sea. At this moment, the navigator of the Devon pirates stood at the crow's nest, calling down to Devon, "Captain, we're approaching the large city, Spring Queen City." Spring Queen City, St. Poplar, as one of the major cities in the sea region, held the title of a super-large trade city, second only to the super-water trade city, Water 7. Because the two trade cities were not on the same magnetic route, they didn't interfere with each other and rarely communicated. Murun Fufufu, excellent. It's about time I got some new clothes. Devon was not only known as the most heinous female pirate in history, nicknamed Crescent Moon Hunter, but her fashion sense was also outstanding among pirates. She had a high standard for style, though her face wasn't much to compliment. St. Poplar was undoubtedly a good shopping destination for her. About 5 hours after the Devon pirates' ship left this sea area and reached St. Poplar, a dilapidated ship, so broken it could be called scrap, slowly moved towards St. Poplar at an ant's pace. Alucard sat in an equally damaged chair, muttering impatiently to himself, "Wooden ships and wooden chairs just can't take a beating. Must be replaced, replaced." Though slow, Alucard's course was undeniably set towards Spring Queen City, St. Poplar. Chapter 37, Alvia. Generally, wherever there are cities, there are corresponding marine branches. The larger the city, the larger the scale and higher the rank of the marines stationed there. In this current era, where the Great Pirate Era has not yet fully begun and the marine forces are stronger than the pirates, this holds even more true. A large city like St. Poplar, without a doubt, also required a powerful marine presence. Stationed in St. Poplar was Vice Admiral Ernest Joseph Gold. In Luffy's era, a marine vice admiral usually possessed strength capable of defeating pirates with bounties exceeding 100 million. In this current era, it's uncertain. While Alucard had clashed with Zephyr and Cusin, they couldn't be used as benchmarks for general power comparison. If Crescent Moon Hunter Devon had entered the city for clothes, Alucard, without a doubt, was there for alcohol. Fighting, traveling, and alcohol were the 3 most important things for Alucard during his sea voyages. However, the matter of sea stone bullets remained far off, much to Alucard's displeasure. Upon entering a wine shop, Alucard wasted no words. He simply tossed 50 million berries onto the counter and said with a faint smile, "Use all this money to buy wine, the most distinctive local varieties. Pack them all up." Spending 50 million berries on wine made him an extremely rare big spender, even in St. Poplar. The shop owner, realizing a major customer had arrived, quickly ordered other employees to help. Every type of wine with local characteristics and local production in the store was wrapped up. After more than an hour of bustling, the packed wooden crates were almost the size of 2 adult men. "Sir, it's all ready. We've packed all of our special local wines for you. We actually owe you 500 berries. Consider it your tip." Alucard responded offhandedly. He activated Hidden Shadow, causing all the wooden crates filled with wine on the ground to be absorbed into his shadow. Doing business in the Grand Line, especially in a super-large city like this, naturally required some shrewdness. When they saw the crates being absorbed one by one into his shadow, everyone in the shop shared a single thought: a devil fruit user. At the same time, the shop owner was also secretly relieved that he hadn't tried any tricks, otherwise, who knew what might have happened. Not long after Alucard stepped out of the shop, he heard a burst of shouting from another nearby establishment. "Are you kidding me? You mean that size is the last one in stock?" The voice indicated it was a woman, and the slightly rough tone confirmed she was definitely not a beautiful woman. Her overly loud voice caused many passers-by on the street to look in the direction of the sound. Even Alucard specifically glanced through the glass window into the shop. It was a clothing store. Inside, a burly, rugged woman with one hand on her hip was pointing at another remarkably attractive woman beside her, scolding the shop assistant with an irritated expression. Meanwhile, on either side of these two women, whose appearances differed so drastically, stood two different groups of people. The burly woman's group consisted of tall, imposing individuals. Though they were trying to conceal them, their various weapons were still discernible. Pirates? Or perhaps bounty hunters? But to be honest, bounty hunters rarely traveled in such large groups. These individuals were more likely pirates. As a man, if one were to compare the two women at the center of the commotion, one would undoubtedly focus on the pretty one. But Alucard was different. His gaze was fixed on the burly, monstrous-looking woman. Of course, Alucard wasn't looking at her face, he had recognized her identity. Unlike Luffy, who was always carefree, Alucard frequently read newspapers and was very familiar with many famous pirates, especially those with bounties over 100 million. And this woman before him was particularly noteworthy. She was one of the rare powerful female pirates with a bounty exceeding 100 million, Crescent Moon Hunter Devon. A female pirate having such a high bounty was truly remarkable. Then you can have my clothes. The beautiful woman, clad in a tight overcoat, prepared to take off her clothes. She felt that the disruptive woman before her was clearly doing this on purpose. Although she was quite tall herself, over 1.7 meters, she thought, her height is over 2 meters, even if she liked the same style, the size would still be different. The woman's name was Alvia. She traveled the world with her archaeological team from her home country, searching for poneglyphs. Though exquisitely beautiful, she had no interest in things like makeup or fashionable clothes that women often liked. The main reason she was buying new clothes was simply that her old ones were unusable. She had only come to the clothing store to buy a new outfit, and she never expected to encounter such a situation on the rare occasion she bought clothes. Alvia had originally intended to keep a low profile and let the matter go, but unexpectedly, Devon had no intention of letting her off. Instead, Devon argued unreasonably, "Enough? I think you're challenging the limits of my patience." At this moment, Devon's subordinates behind her also started clamoring, "Don't you know who our captain is? Our captain is the Crescent Moon Hunter, with a bounty of 180 million berries." Chapter 38, Battle Against the Female Pirate. It was indeed the most heinous female pirate in history. If Devon had magnanimously let Alvia off, Alucard would have found it highly suspicious. Recalling his own ship, which was in such a dilapidated state that maintaining its progress with hidden shadow was a hassle, he decided to take this opportunity to relax a bit. With that thought, Alucard curved his lips into a smile. Despite the presence of many people on the street, he suddenly drew his white gun casual and, through the glass, fired a shot at Devon inside. Bang! The glass shattered instantly, and the bullet flew straight towards Devon's forehead. At such a close range, it didn't even take a tenth of a second for the bullet to travel from Casual's muzzle to Devon's forehead. Devon's pupils abruptly contracted. She pulled out a long spear from behind her back and swiftly thrust it backward. In an instant, the spearhead and the bullet collided, creating a powerful shockwave that caused Alvia and many other ordinary people to collapse onto the ground. Devon's pirate subordinates also involuntarily staggered backward or were even knocked away. After about 3 seconds of standoff, Devon finally blocked the bullet, though the sharp tip of her spearhead had a slight, barely noticeable twist. Oh, to think you could block that shot. Without using armament haki, that spear doesn't seem to be an ordinary item. Everyone looked up to see a man in a blood-red trench coat walk through the shattered glass. He appeared to be less than 20 years old, very young, yet for some reason, he exuded a chilling aura. Devon's wide mouth curled into a grin, revealing shark-like sharp teeth. She brandished her spear and said, "One of the 21 great grade swords, the famous blade Dansui, Water Breaker. I fitted its blade to my weapon's spearhead." By this point, Alucard had fully entered the main hall of the shop. Hearing Devon's words, he smiled with interest. "Oh, a great grade sword, eh? I've run into quite a character. Truly worthy of the title, most heinous female pirate in history. Pirate hunter Alucard. I just heard about you this morning, and here you are knocking on my door. Do you want my bounty?" Upon hearing their captain, the Devon Pirates crew members stared wide-eyed at Alucard. Such a thing? They'd just read about this person in the newspaper that morning, and he appeared less than a day later? Alucard rested the barrel of Casual against the side of his head and chuckled. "Can you please not call me a pirate hunter? I merely kill pirates occasionally to solve financial problems. I've never acknowledged the title of pirate hunter. That already makes you a pirate hunter, don't you understand?" No sooner had Devon's words fallen than her spearhead suddenly unleashed immense power, carrying a powerful gust of wind as it thrust forward. It condensed into a visible shockwave that slammed directly into Alucard. Alucard raised his hands in a cross formation, blocking the powerful shockwave, and was sent flying straight back through the broken glass window. Boom! With a loud crash, Alucard landed inside a restaurant across the street, overturning several tables. The people dining and the staff inside the restaurant were too terrified to speak. Ignoring the astonished gazes of those around him, Alucard slowly stood up and walked out of the restaurant. By now, Devon had also stepped out onto the street through the hole Alucard had crashed through. Impressive destructive power. The title of most heinous female pirate in history isn't just for show, Alucard said with a laugh, his blood-red trench coat fluttering in the wind behind him. This guy, his wounds are healing. Devon watched in shock as the flesh on Alucard's body, which had just been grazed by her attack, healed. Her eyes narrowed, and she thought to herself, indeed, a troublesome ability. Perfect, let me test my close quarters combat. Alucard let out a wild laugh. Activating his blacklight virus ability, he instantly formed a great sword in his hand within 2 seconds. While it wasn't as large as the massive sword Cahill used during the Herald Kingdom battle, it was still far larger than a typical traditional katana. The original Alucard had also used a great sword, though very rarely. He formed a sword. What kind of ability is that? Seeing a strange black shadow emerge from Alucard's right hand and then form a sword, Devon was quite shocked. However, she was still a super powerful pirate with a bounty close to 200 million. She quickly recovered from her shock at his ability, and the attack began. Facing Devon's direct thrust, Alucard furiously swung the greatsword in his hand, clashing with her spearhead. After a symphony of clanging metal, sparks continuously flew. Clang, 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 clang. In an instant, the two had exchanged dozens of blows, with sparks flashing. Pedestrians on both sides of the road were stunned, then quickly fled, screaming, "Pirates are fighting! Quick, quick! Notify the Marines! Notify the Marines! Run for your lives!" The surrounding commotion didn't affect their battle. The more she clashed with Alucard, the more shocked Devon became. This guy, his swordsmanship has no discernible form, he just attacks wherever he looks. Chapter 39, The Power of the Black Gun. Let's go quickly, Alvia. Inside the clothing store, the other members of the archaeological team urged Alvia, who was still on the ground. Alvia nodded rapidly, then quickly got up and followed her companions, swiftly leaving. Before departing, she cast one last glance at Alucard, who was several hundred meters away, battling Devon. Regardless of his intentions, he had helped her out of a tight spot. At least deep down, Alvia felt a sliver of gratitude towards Alucard. Just then, Devon seized an opportunity and stabbed Alucard through the shoulder. But before she could revel in her triumph, Alucard not only didn't cry out in pain or shriek, but instead let out an excited laugh. Beautiful, female pirate. He swung the great sword in his hand back around. Seeing this, Devon promptly released her spear and sidestepped, avoiding Alucard's strike. The greatsword slammed heavily into the ground, gouging a deep black crack into the earth. Devon seized the moment, stepped her left foot forward, and pulled the spear from Alucard's shoulder. She saw it again. Alucard's shoulder, which had been pierced with a massive bloody hole, was regenerating and reforming. No matter where he was attacked, his wounds would heal, he simply couldn't be killed. Whoosh! A surge of sword energy, a violent gust of wind, swept forth with the force of 1,000 charging soldiers, once again assailing Devon. She held her spear horizontally to block, then retreated a dozen meters, deflecting the sword energy into the clouds, causing a sudden roar in the sky. "I see now. I fully believe you defeated that idiot Pizarro," Devon said, looking up. "Captain, the Marines are heading this way. Let's evacuate, Captain." At this point, the Devon Pirates crew members shouted at Devon. This was a major trade city, and the Marines' deployment efficiency was not something ordinary cities could compare to. The Marines arrived unexpectedly quickly. "I know." Devon grunted in annoyance, then met Alucard's gaze. Looking at the man's ferocious smile, she frowned, then smirked, "But I don't think this guy will let me go. All together. Kill him and let's go. We're almost at Sabayati Archipelago, we can't fall here." All of the Devon pirates swarmed forward. The Devon pirates weren't as numerous as Pizarro's evil gang pirates, there were only about 50 of them, which, while not a small number, paled in comparison to the evil gang pirates. "Roar!" Suddenly, a furious roar echoed. One of the Devon pirates had transformed into a brown giant bear, nearly 5 meters tall. It opened its gaping maw as if to swallow Alucard whole. "A Zoan user, are you?" Alucard chuckled softly. After backing up a few meters, before anyone could clearly see how he had switched weapons, a gun fired. The massive body of the Zoan user stiffened instantly, staring blankly down at his own body. Blood continuously streamed, and looking ahead, he saw Alucard holding a large black handgun in his left hand, white smoke curling from its barrel, and a spent casing hitting the ground with a crisp clang. "No, impossible." The Zoan user roared internally. He had endured countless bullet attacks before, but never had a bullet penetrated his flesh. Forget machine guns, how could a mere handgun possess such power? Bang! The black gun jackal fired again. Unlike the white gun casual, it couldn't fire in rapid succession, each shot had to be fired individually. But the immense impact force continuously pushed the Zoan user's massive bare body backward. Finally, after taking 3 shots, his body could no longer endure, and he collapsed, convulsing uncontrollably. Without immediate medical attention, he would likely die within minutes. A pity. If they were sea-stone bullets, 1 shot would be enough to send you to the next world, Alucard grumbled, his voice audible only to himself. T-Turk was taken down. Just like that. The other members of the Devon pirates shouted in disbelief. Turk Sird, one of the main combatants of the Devon pirates, was one of the strongest members on the ship, second only to Captain Katarina Devon. Yet, he had been defeated so easily. Thump, 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 thump. Suddenly, loud running footsteps reached both sides. Vice Admiral Ernest Joseph Gold, stationed in St. Poplar, arrived with his men. From the sound of the footsteps, there were hundreds, no, 300, or perhaps 500. Before either Alucard or Devon could react, the street ahead and behind them was completely surrounded by Marines. The first row consisted of riflemen, kneeling on one knee, aiming their rifles at everyone in the middle. Behind them stood various Marines with swords, ready for battle, awaiting orders. TCH. Devon spat, then said to Alucard, "Hey, Dracula d. Alucard? I can't deal with you this time. It's too early, and now's not the time to keep fighting. How about we both concede a step? I'm pulling out." Ha ha ha. Alucard lowered his head, his shoulders twitching with laughter for a few moments, then glanced sideways. "Ah, the fighting atmosphere is gone. I'm very sleepy this early in the morning. I suppose I'll go back to sleep for now." Chapter 40, Vegapunk's experimental results. Am I still riding that old junk ship? I should just steal a new one. Alucard muttered to himself, turning to leave. Devon and her crew, meanwhile, headed in the opposite direction and were already clashing with the encircling Marines. There was no other choice, their path was completely blocked, so they had to force their way through. However, the Marine presence in St. Poplar was far superior to that of an ordinary island, and the Devon pirates would likely pay a heavy price this time. Alucard's direction led him towards Vice Admiral Ernest Joseph Gold. When they saw Alucard approaching, many of the Marines swallowed hard. A rifleman closest to Joseph Gold couldn't help but ask, Vice Admiral, should we attack? Vice Admiral Joseph Gold, true to his name, had a golden mohawk haircut. Upon hearing his subordinate's question, he gravely replied, "Wait. He's a pirate hunter, not a criminal. Do not engage unless he makes the first move." Although Joseph Gold said this, many Marines feared Alucard might suddenly attack, their eyes practically bulging from their sockets. As Alucard approached the front of the military formation, the rifleman in front, for some unknown reason, voluntarily parted to create a path, allowing Alucard to leave. Phew. At this, everyone couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. However, Katerina Devon and her pirate crew on the other side were still on a rampage, and there was no room for delay. Joseph Gold roared, "All units, attack! Arrest the Devon pirates!" Since Alucard was willing to leave on his own, Joseph Gold could now focus all his attention on dealing with Devon. The Devon pirates' numbers were far greater than the 50-odd members Alucard had seen here. Many others had split off from Captain Devon to procure water, food, and other supplies. In places like this, pirates tended to act with more discretion, opting for normal transactions and purchases. After all, in smaller, less guarded villages and islands, which pirate didn't simply take what they wanted. Upon hearing the commotion, the other members of the Devon pirates immediately rushed to reinforce them. After suffering losses of roughly a third of their numbers, they finally managed to withdraw from St. Poplar. As for Alucard, he simply snatched a small schooner before departing. The iron chains binding the ship to the dock? That was simple enough, his gun was all he needed. Marine Headquarters. Inside Fleet Admiral Kong's office at Marine Headquarters, Kong held a new wanted poster. The face displayed on it belonged to the future pirate king, Gold Roger, though at the time, he was known as Gold Roger. Staring at the staggering bounty on the newly issued poster, Kong couldn't help but slam his fist heavily on the desk. A major threat? A major threat, Gold Roger. Knock, knock. Hearing the knock at the door, Kong grudgingly suppressed his inner fury. "Come in." 3 government employees in black suits saluted Kong and said, "Fleet Admiral Kong, please come to the scientific research lab. The world government has an important matter to discuss with you." Kong's expression hardened. For the world government to personally summon him, it was no small matter. Without further thought, Kong chose to act immediately, rising and heading towards the scientific research facility. Approximately half an hour later, inside a laboratory constructed entirely of steel, Vegapunk, dressed in a white lab coat, stood beside several high-ranking world government officials. No, they weren't just high-ranking officials, they were direct agents of the world government's highest authority, the 5 elders CP0. Even these guys have been mobilized, it's not a small matter, Kong thought to himself, ignoring the CP0 agents. He had no desire to converse with the world government's lapdogs. Approaching Vegapunk, Kong crossed his arms over his chest and asked, "What's happened?" It's more interesting to see it in person than to simply hear about it. Please, Fleet Admiral, and gentlemen of the world government, come take a look. Led by Vegapunk, Kong and the 3 CP0 agents followed him to a large section of specially reinforced, thick glass panels. Looking inside, they saw a massive pit below, or rather, a combat experimentation arena. When Vegapunk pressed a button, an inner door opened, and what emerged this time caused even the CP0 agents to visibly react. When Vegapunk pressed a button, the inner door opened. The first to emerge was a massive beast, over 7 meters tall, with enormous fangs. "Is that the saber-toothed lion Nemia?" Kong spoke with a focused expression. This fierce beast, with a colossal body and teeth far surpassing the extinct saber-toothed tiger, and impenetrable fur, had recently been captured by Rear Admiral Kusin during a battlefield exercise. It was currently under observation as an impel-down beast. If it were to be given a bounty, it should be in the range of 20 to 30 million berries. Fighting it will be this one. Vegapunk said, pressing another button. From the opposite side of Nemia, another door in the combat room opened. This time, what appeared made even the CP0 agents present stir. What was that thing? Although it wasn't as massive as Nemia, standing between 3 to 4 meters tall, its ferocious features, vivid red body, and sharp claws made it look nothing like a creature from this world. If Alucard or anyone who had witnessed the battle at the Joris Kingdom were to see this scene, they would undoubtedly recognize it, for it bore too striking a resemblance to Cahill after he was successfully infected by the Black Light virus. Chapter 41, World Government and Marines, Alucard, and the Roger Pirates. In the presence of both Marine and World Government high-ranking officials, the two monsters clashed. What followed was a shocking sight. Nemia the saber-toothed lion, whose hide was normally impenetrable to ordinary attacks, was instantly defeated by the grotesque, inhuman creature's sharp claws. The creature's sharp claws pierced Nemia's skin and internal organs. In less than 2 minutes, everyone watched as Nemia's massive body collapsed, clearly dead. After tearing open Nemia's belly, the monster began to feast on its flesh and blood, then roared skyward, as if still unsatisfied. Just as Kong grew increasingly curious about this mutated monster, Vegapunk proactively explained, this creature, which I've temporarily named the Contender, was created from the mutated corpse of a North Blue general that the world government sent me previously. The person infected by pirate hunter Alucard's ability. Kong still had some recollection of the incident and blurted it out. Ah, yes, that's right, Vegapunk said with a helpless expression. Test subjects capable of enduring these attack cells are incredibly rare. Even among the few animals that succeeded, very few survived for more than 30 minutes. Finally, my arduous application was approved by the world government. Only after obtaining several prisoners from Impel Down's level 4, who were deemed suitable test subjects, was I able to complete the experiment. Then, through a series of improvements, I achieved these results. Vegapunk spoke without inhibition. While such experiments severely violated human ethics, the world government's approval was all that mattered. How many of these monsters have you created? Kong asked gravely. There are 6 of this particular grade. If they were to have bounties, I estimate they'd be around 60 million berries. The remaining successful animal experiments are at least on par with that of Nemia the saber-toothed lion, with bounties ranging from 20 to 30 million, totaling 11 specimens. Lastly, 16 sea birds were successfully infected and transformed into similar monsters. In terms of combat strength, they might not even reach the 10 million level, but they are arguably the most difficult to deal with, as they can fly freely at extremely high speeds. Vegapunk excitedly showcased his successful experiments to the assembled group, then added with a hint of regret, but unfortunately, I've found no way to reproduce those experimental cells. Creating this many was already my limit. Vegapunk walked to a nearby table laden with experimental equipment, tapped it, and after a long moment, chuckled. So, would it be possible to bring that pirate hunter Alucard here? Wait, Kong suddenly interjected with a cold tone. I also need to ask you, you cannot freely control these monsters, can you? Vegapunk didn't hide it. That's correct. Once successfully infected, while they won't attack each other, they become monsters with an extreme thirst for blood. They feel no pain, or rather, they are completely indifferent to it. They also possess regenerative abilities that heal wounds by devouring blood, quite similar to that pirate hunter named Alucard. Vegapunk paused, then continued, if we release them in an area where pirates are about to arrive, what do you all think would happen? Observing the solemn faces of those present, Vegapunk directed his gaze primarily at Kong, then sneered, Fleet Admiral Kong, isn't the Roger Pirates a nuisance right now? What do you say? Would you like to conduct an experiment? Kong's eyes narrowed slightly. Are you suggesting Marine Headquarters? Several hours later, Kong received the latest intelligence on the Roger Pirates. According to their current trajectory, the Roger Pirates were about to reach Long Ring Long Land, followed by Water 7, then the Sabayati Archipelago, and further on, the New World. Kong slammed his fist onto the desk and immediately issued an order, implement the plan. Vice Admiral Garp, Vice Admiral Sakazuki, and Rear Admiral Kuzan are to deploy. They will conduct an experimental subjugation operation against the Roger Pirates. Their primary mission is to protect Vegapunk's scientific research team to complete the experiment. The subjugation of the Roger Pirates is secondary. After giving orders regarding the Roger Pirates, Kong turned to the world government representatives. Alucard is a pirate hunter and is not on any wanted list. How to deal with him is a matter for the world government. The Marines will not interfere. Understood. We will report this, the 3 CP0 agents said after receiving Kong's instructions. They then turned and departed for Marijois, the residence of the world government's highest authorities. The next day, Garp received orders to lead Kuzan and Sakazuki to ambush the Roger Pirates at Long Ring Long Land. This time, however, the mission prioritized the scientific research team, and more importantly, safeguarding the genius scientist Vegapunk. Meanwhile, the world government also initiated its own operation. Dracula D. Alucard was to be invited by the world government's secret organization, CP7. Chapter 42, Ambushing the Roger Pirates. CP0 through CP9, even the Marines knew very little about these secret organizations directly under the world government. They were comprised of high-level government agents specializing in espionage, massacres, assassinations, and other unsavory tasks. Regarding Vegapunk's research proposal, it was decided that the monsters created from Cahill's body would first deal with Roger, while Alucard would be handled by the world government. The Marines or the world government interacting with a pirate hunter wasn't something to boast about, so the task was given to CP7, a group of agents specializing in covert operations. Considering Alucard's ability to defeat pirates with bounties exceeding 200 million berries, a considerable force was dispatched. However, with the world government's name backing them, they assumed a mere pirate hunter wouldn't dare cause much trouble. Almost all world government employees wore suits as their uniforms, and many were proficient in the Rokushiki. Of course, those were the elite. Most assassination and killing operations were resolved with manpower, cannons, and guns. According to Marine investigations, Alucard was an unpredictable anomaly, especially concerning his sea routes. He often forcefully broke through log poses, veering into different navigation channels, making it incredibly difficult to predict his course. Fortunately, the world government never lacked talent. Through calculations and predictions, they confirmed Alucard was scheduled to land on an island called Asmodeus. The commanding officer of CP7, Omar Bradley, was tasked with meeting Alucard and inviting him to Marijois. Given the danger of meeting someone like Alucard, the world government naturally wouldn't send a bunch of incompetent agents. Bradley and his subordinates were all considered skilled operatives. More importantly, Asmodeus, where Alucard was set to land, was extremely close to Marine headquarters and the world government. If he had any sense of being a pirate hunter, he wouldn't dare stir up trouble with the Marines or the world government in such a location. As Bradley led over 300 black-suited world government employees to Asmodeus, Garp, along with his main forces, Kuzan and Sakazuki, and a colossal warship, landed at Long Ring Long Land. Here, propelled by the Marines, the blacklight-infected creatures, contained within glass enclosures and created from Cahill's body, were unveiled before everyone. Aside from the infected birds, which still somewhat resembled birds, it was impossible to tell what the other creatures originally were. They were currently in a sedated state due to Vegapunk's specialized tranquilizer. However, through Vegapunk's extensive research, the effects and duration of the anesthetic had been perfectly predicted. The moment the Roger pirates landed on Long Ring Long Land, these creatures would awaken. The scientific research unit has cooked up another batch of bizarre things, Garp grumbled, displeased. These grotesque creatures gave him an unsettling feeling, though they were no match for him. According to intelligence, conceal these creatures in the forest to the east, the Roger pirates will berth there. Vegapunk had already laid out the ambush plan for Roger's crew. More accurately, he simply wanted to acquire valuable data about these monsters. In other words, he didn't care about the Marines or pirates, he was a mad scientist solely focused on his research findings. The specialized glass containers holding the blacklight-infected creatures were remotely controlled by a special device Vegapunk had developed. Hours later, the voice of a scout crackled through a den mushy, "Pirate flag sighted. Pirate flag sighted. It's the Roger pirates. The Roger pirates. Excellent. You are to withdraw from that position immediately," Garp quickly ordered. Vegapunk, seizing the moment, pressed the button on his remote. The special glass containers hidden in the coastal jungle opened. About 5 minutes later, these grotesque beasts began to awaken and crawl out of their containers, just in time to see the Roger pirates mooring their ship and disembarking. Woohoo! This is amazing. Red-haired Shanks, still just a kid at this point, stretched excitedly after disembarking. Only 2 more islands until Sabayati Archipelago, then Fishman Island and the New World, right? I can't wait. Don't get too excited, Shanks. Look out. Rayleigh, who had been smiling and chatting with Shanks, suddenly drew his sword and blocked Shanks, swiftly slashing a half-man-sized bird beast in two. What is this thing? Shanks and the others stared at the monster Rayleigh had killed. It had wings, so it should have been a bird, but its appearance was terrifying, like a reanimated, crimson bird corpse. Everyone, prepare for battle. Enemies incoming, Captain Gold Roger announced. Everyone looked towards the opposite forest and saw a horde of crimson-bodied monsters rapidly approaching, their numbers exceeding that of the Roger pirates. Chapter 43, You disrespect the world government? What kind of monsters are those? This island is terrifying. Buggy stammered, his tongue tripping over itself as he watched the blacklight-infected creatures charge towards them. Unknown enemies were always the most frightening. Shut up, Buggy, Roger said, stepping in front of Buggy. His wide mouth curved upwards at the corners as he let out a soft chuckle. Instantly, Conqueror's haki erupted. The future Pirate King's haki was immeasurably more powerful than that of the likes of Luffy or Doflamingo. Under Roger's Conqueror's haki, no enemy could remain standing. That was the unwavering belief of every member of the Roger pirates. But then, an incredible scene unfolded. The never-before-seen creatures paused for less than 2 seconds, then, as if provoked, charged forward with even greater ferocity. Roger's Conqueror's haki was ineffective? This was the first time they had witnessed such a thing? Was it because these monsters were too high level? But a moment ago, Rayleigh had instantly killed one of the monstrous birds, and the other monstrous birds flying overhead hadn't fainted either. Roger and his crew didn't deeply understand the blacklight infected. Conqueror's haki primarily functions by overwhelming an opponent with a powerful aura of dominance, causing them to submit, fear, and ultimately lose their will to fight. However, these monsters had long forgotten what fear was. Naturally, Conqueror's haki had no effect on them. Roar! A rhino-sized infected creature lunged at the group, followed by a second, then a third. In that case, let's fight, men. Roger roared, drawing his sword directly. The other members of the pirate crew also reacted, drawing their weapons and bracing themselves. In an instant, the future strongest pirate crew, the Roger Pirates, engaged in battle with the infected army forged from Alucard's black light virus and Vegapunk's technology. Asmodeus Island. Meanwhile, on Asmodeus, a small island extremely close to Water 7, CP7 met with Alucard. The encounter took place in a small town on Asmodeus. Inside a small tavern, when a large group of men in suits entered, the other patrons scattered in fright. Bradley, the commanding officer of CP7, immediately spotted the conspicuous red-clad figure seated at the bar. After a sweeping glance at the terrified civilians around him, he spoke imperiously, "We are from the world government. We are here to conduct official business. Uninvolved personnel, you have 2 minutes to leave." This small island wasn't typically a gathering place for pirates, it was mostly inhabited by civilians. Upon hearing the words world government, they were instantly terrified, practically wetting themselves. Without a word, they immediately scrambled out, including the tavern staff who had just been serving Alucard. Alucard swirled the glass in his hand, a round ice cube rotating within the golden liquid, which looked quite unique. "Not my usual preference, but there's no harm in trying something new," Alucard muttered to himself after taking a sip of the special corn liquor. "Pirate Hunter Dracula D. Alucard, a pleasure to meet you. We look forward to working with you." Bradley walked around behind Alucard, spreading his hands. "The world government has a keen interest in you. We originally intended to discreetly invite you out at sea, but since we've met here, allow me to be direct." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Would you mind coming with us?" Haha. Alucard's shoulders twitched a few times before he turned around. He was now wearing a pair of small, round sunglasses that might have looked comical on anyone else, but on his face, they somehow exuded a bizarre intimidation. "This is my first time meeting world government personnel. What do you want with me?" "That is classified. We can only fully explain once you've arrived," Bradley replied, unhurried. The world government's methods truly live up to their domineering reputation. "However, I'm not interested in you." Alucard rose and walked towards the tavern exit. The moment he stepped among the world government's suited agents, they all instantly pulled out guns from their suits, aiming them at Alucard's head. "Oh, so if words don't work, you resort to force." Alucard chuckled, showing no fear despite having over a dozen guns pointed at his head. "I apologize, but I hope you understand that this island is very close to Marine headquarters. If we were to issue an alert, it wouldn't take long for reinforcements to arrive." "The situation is in our favor," Bradley stated, confident in his advantage. Being so close to Marine headquarters, Alucard wouldn't fare well if he caused trouble here. Bang! However, Alucard's response to Bradley was a single gunshot. An agent holding a gun to Alucard's head instantly fell, shot through the heart. Bang! 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 Bullets from the casual fired one after another, and agent after agent dropped. "Damn it! You disrespect the world government!" Bradley roared, "Open fire! Open fire!" Chapter 44, Kill. Heart blasted? Collect revival coins? Before anyone could even fire, no one noticed that Alucard had already seized the nearest world government agent. Countless bullets struck Alucard's body, including his heart. As agents capable of participating in CP organizations, even at the level of a mere pawn, they possessed a certain degree of skill. Even amidst such a chaotic spray of bullets, there were no friendly fire incidents, all the shots accurately hit Alucard himself, including his heart. Ugh, 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 ahh. Suddenly, the agents closest to Alucard let out screams. Everyone stared intently, watching as their bodies were strangely enveloped and pierced by eerie black tendrils of blood, a gruesome sight. In that instant, everyone involuntarily ceased their actions, utterly stunned by the shocking events unfolding before them. As the three agents' bodies were torn to shreds by the blood-formed tendrils, Alucard's body, and even his clothes, began to regenerate, returning him to normal in less than 10 seconds. This was the power of Blacklight Virus LV3, a new ability Alucard had gained after eliminating a pirate with a 40 million berry bounty. If Alucard's greatest weakness before awakening his River of Death power was his heart, the enhanced Blacklight virus could effectively compensate for this flaw. The characteristic of a vampire is immortality. The Blacklight virus, however, is about devouring. Blacklight Virus LV3's awakened ability is precisely devouring. By consuming others' bodies, one can transform into their appearance, gain their memories, and regenerate their own body. A vampire physique cannot regenerate a heart, but the Blacklight virus can. Generally speaking, if a heart is destroyed, there might be about 10 seconds of survival time. But for a monstrosity like Alucard, forget 10 seconds, he might not die even after half a minute, and that half minute could allow him to do so much, consume one, or even several, people, using their life force to regenerate his heart. It compensated for the weakness he had before awakening the River of Death. And no, impossible. Bradley's eyes were practically bulging from their sockets. He had heard the title, Alucard the Immortal, but witnessing it in person was even more monstrous than the rumors. It was no surprise, seeing a body reduced to a mangled mess then perfectly regenerating. How many people could witness such a sight without flinching? Bang, bang, bang. Alucard strafed the world government agents, completely ignoring their retaliatory fire. The moment his heart was hit, Alucard would immediately cease his attack, target a living person, and consume them with the black light virus. If Alucard's ultimate technique, the River of Death, was a place to store revival coins, then the black light virus was what allowed him to convert living people into revival coins. However, the black light viruses devouring generally targeted weaker individuals. Alucard had once attempted to directly consume a 30 million berry bounty pirate, but it proved unexpectedly difficult. He only succeeded after severely weakening them. It seemed that to more perfectly utilize these powers, he needed to advance to the next level. This was Alucard's new method for dealing with cannon fodder. But against powerful opponents, this tactic would be much harder to pull off. For example, in a fight with someone like Whitebeard, would Whitebeard give him the chance to escape and collect revival coins? Half a minute to collect revival coins from an opponent of Whitebeard's caliber would be incredibly difficult. However, the idiotic agents of CP7 before him were merely trash tier. At least CP9 and CP0 level opponents were needed to truly challenge him. Kill, heart pierced, collect revival coin, kill again, heart pierced again, collect another revival coin. This cycle continued for about a minute, turning the small tavern into a hell. Finally, only Bradley, the leader of CP7, remained. Hua. Alucard let out a light exhale. Through the black light virus, even his clothes could regenerate. As Alucard turned and walked towards Bradley, the CP7 commander collapsed to the ground, terrified. Hehe. Alucard's throat rumbled with a deep laugh. Under Bradley's horrified gaze, Alucard's left hand formed a blade-like edge and plunged directly into his heart. Splash! Blood spurted out uncontrollably. Just like with the agents he'd consumed earlier, countless blood-formed tendrils pierced and enveloped Bradley's body, eventually integrating into Alucard. As his physical strength and life force recovered, Bradley's memories flooded into Alucard's mind. Find Alucard? No failures allowed. Immediately? If you can bring him directly, that's best. You're authorized to use any means necessary. This matter has already been approved by the world government. Vegapunk's scientific research team has already departed. If this initiative proves effective, Alucard's importance will be unparalleled. He absolutely cannot be killed. Bradley's memories continuously poured into Alucard's mind. Within these memories, several masked men in white robes were giving orders to Bradley, but their identities and the deeper implications remained unknown. Chapter 45, is he questioning the warlords? Consuming others to restore one's own body, while also acquiring their memories and information. This was the new ability Alucard gained after his black light virus upgraded to LV3. However, this memory absorption was limited to the specific information he desired, and he could choose whether or not to receive the consumed target's entire memory. Otherwise, he'd be overwhelmed with a flood of memories from every consumption, which no one could endure. Alucard tilted his head slightly and muttered to himself, "The world government is looking for me. If it wasn't so early, I'd almost think they were looking to recruit a warlord of the sea." The Warlords of the Sea system was established sometime after the Great Pirate Era began. Due to the Great Treasure, the One Piece, a massive influx of pirates surged into the Grand Line, leaving the Marines unable to effectively counter them. Out of necessity, they resorted to recruiting powerful pirates to suppress their brethren. If this were 10 years later, Alucard would certainly have mistaken these people for wanting to recruit him as a warlord. Although he knew it was impossible, Alucard still had to say impossible. Becoming a warlord would be far too boring. Concealing history, controlling the world, and now they're finally coming for me? Aren't they moving a bit too fast, world government? Alucard's tone was a mix of excitement and exasperation. He then opened the tavern door and walked out. That CP7 leader had mentioned this place was very close to Marine headquarters, right? That meant, it was also quite close to the Sabayati archipelago, the halfway point of the Grand Line, wasn't it? Perhaps it's been a bit too peaceful. Alucard mused with a sigh. He thought about Luffy and his crew, putting aside their East Blue journey. Their adventure through the first half of the Grand Line was simply spectacular. First, the Drum Kingdom, then facing the Warlord of the Sea, Crocodile, followed by Skypiea, Water 7, and Ice Lobby, and the Thriller Bark arc. Compared to them, his own journey seemed rather dull. While Alucard thought this, it wasn't entirely true. Although this era wasn't as chaotic as Luffy's, he had certainly eliminated a considerable number of powerful pirates along the way. It was merely the phenomenon of being too involved to see the bigger picture, much like how time feels different when observing others play a game versus playing it yourself. Ability development progress. Mature Vampire Physique, 89%. Bat Shadow Mature Form, 77%. Weapon, Casual LV4, 59%. Weapon, Jackal LV1, 12%. Blacklight Virus LV3, 9%. Hidden Shadow LV1, 105%. A hint of pleasure flashed across Alucard's face when he saw that Hidden Shadow had leveled up. He quickly returned to his ship to immediately upgrade it, gaining new abilities in the process. Hidden Shadow LV2, 5%. Ability acquired, can materialize shadows for attack. Power increases with level. Ability acquired 2, Wall Phasing. Can merge body with shadow to pass through walls. Materializing shadows for attack reminded Alucard of a special technique from a ninja manga in his past life. It was a versatile technique, useful for both offense and defense. he'd find a chance to test it out next time. Pondering these thoughts, Alucard left Esmeduz Island, continuing his journey further into the first half of the Grand Line. He had merely been drifting aimlessly through the Grand Line, unaware he was nearing its midpoint. Several hours after Alucard's departure, as the commotion in the tavern gradually subsided, some villagers cautiously ventured to peek inside. However, when the tavern owner bravely pushed open the doors, the scene inside, resembling hell itself, made him scream uncontrollably. There were no bodies, but blood stained over 80% of the floor, walls, and even the ceiling. Yet, eerily, there wasn't a single person. Had they all simply left? Though it seemed unbelievable, everyone could only assume so. Otherwise, where had all those people gone? Had they been eaten? In a way, they truly had been eaten. People often choose to believe what they want to believe, and based on the principle that it's better to avoid trouble, the villagers silently kept this incident to themselves. The blood-soaked tavern was naturally unusable, and the owner could only accept his misfortune. However, the world government's capabilities far exceeded what these ordinary civilians could imagine. In less than 2 days, having received no contact from Bradley, the world government knew something was wrong. Hundreds of agents had been dispatched, and for them to collectively vanish without a trace was clearly not simple. In a room within a world government building, the curtains were only partially drawn, allowing a sliver of sunlight to filter in, but not enough to reveal the appearances of the people inside. Only their deep voices could be heard discussing, "This needs a thorough investigation. It's almost certain that CP7 was wiped out. Next, dispatch CP0 to investigate." Whoa, it's just a pirate hunter. Is CP0 really necessary? Another voice questioned. The target doesn't matter. The situation has reached a level that warrants their involvement, the first speaker firmly reiterated. Chapter 46, The Severely Damaged Roger Pirates. On the Roger Pirates ship, sailing the waters from Long Ring Long Land towards Water 7, the atmosphere was heavy with suppression. The Roger Pirates were never large in number, only around 40 members in total, which was incomparable in terms of manpower to the Whitebeard Pirates and Golden Lion Pirates, both said to be on par with Roger. However, they followed an elite path, quite similar to the future Straw Hat Pirates. Yet, in the battle at Long Ring Long Land the day before yesterday, the monsters they encountered, while mere trifles to Roger, were incredibly difficult to kill. A stab to the heart? A pierced throat? Useless? Roger discovered that these monsters felt no pain. Regardless of the attack, as long as it wasn't immediately fatal, they would continue their frenzied assault as if nothing had happened. Moreover, they possessed the ability to regenerate wounds by consuming human blood. While Roger and Rayleigh were more than capable of handling them, not every member of the Roger Pirates was on their level. Because he was entangled with several infected creatures, Roger couldn't rescue his crewmates in time, resulting in 5 of them dying at the hands of the infected. Furthermore, with the subsequent ambush by Garp, Sakazuki, Kuzan, and other elite marine forces, the Roger Pirates, still recovering from their fight with the infected, were pushed to the brink of annihilation, losing a third of their total strength. This was yet another instance where Garp cornered Roger. Roger, whose composure was already shaken from failing to save his subordinates, was steadily pushed back by Garp's relentless assault, almost meeting his end. It was only through the desperate sacrifice of 2 subordinates, who provided cover, that the entire Roger Pirates crew managed to escape Long Ring Long Land. What were those monsters? Shanks winced, touching his injured shoulder, letting out a yelp as he hit a sore spot. Those were probably something new the Marines cooked up. Good thing they weren't poisoned, or our losses would have been even worse, the ship's doctor, Crocus, said as he changed Shanks's bandage. Buggy was fortunate, having already eaten the chop-chop fruit. The predominantly blade-like claws of the infected were ineffective against him. Thus, his injuries were minor, and he was bouncing around within 2 days. He rushed over to Crocus and asked, "Crocus-san, how's the captain doing?" Physically, he's fine. At least his external wounds, those monsters were nothing to Roger on that front. However, this was our crew's most severe loss yet. Roger must be deeply blaming himself right now, Crocus sighed. Rayleigh then walked over and said, "I just checked the ship's condition. In the previous battle with Garp and his forces, our ship sustained extremely heavy damage. We'll likely need to switch ships once we reach the next island. Don't worry about that. Our next destination is Water 7, arguably one of the greatest trade cities in the first half of the Grand Line. Their shipbuilding technology is beyond question," the navigator chimed in. "I'm still most worried about Roger's state of mind," Rayleigh sighed. Meanwhile, at the Marine Headquarters Scientific Research Institute, although the lack of Alucard's blacklight virus samples forced Vegapunk to pursue other research, his innate scientific obsession kept him preoccupied with that power. The battle at Long Ring Long Land against the Roger Pirates yielded unexpectedly excellent results. It was a shame they were just one step away from completely defeating the Roger Pirates. However, even if the battle itself was a tactical failure, the experiment was a resounding success. The insane combat mode, devoid of pain, and the formidable regenerative ability gained by simply drinking blood, made the research-obsessed Vegapunk desperate to know when Alucard could finally be captured. However, Vegapunk currently held little authority. He was merely a genius scientist. The only thing he could do was wait for the world government to provide him with results. Dr. Vegapunk? A strange sea stone has been discovered in a certain sea area of the New World. Devil fruit users instantly lose all their strength upon contact, as if they've touched seawater. Just then, an assistant's words caught Vegapunk's attention. He quickly walked over, seeing an image displayed on the experimental instrument's screen. It was a rock that looked ordinary yet distinctly peculiar. The crucial point was its color. It was black, intensely black. Generally, rocks were a mix of multiple colors, and rarely were they a single, uniform hue like this. As Vegapunk examined the images of these rocks, the assistant continued to explain, because it has the same effect as the sea, stripping devil fruit users of their powers, the Discovery team has provisionally named it Sea Stone. Oh, it has such an effect. Vegapunk's expression sharpened, and his attention instantly shifted to this so-called Sea Stone. Order for this material to be mined and sent to me at once. Chapter 47, Water 7, Alucard, and the Roger Pirates. Water 7, renowned as one of the Grand Line's premier trade cities in its first half, also drew in the world's top shipwrights. However, its prominence often invited animosity from other trade hubs, leading to frequent disputes. So rotten. Shipbreaking workers watched from a distance as a vessel slowly approached. Upon discerning its appearance, they couldn't help but exclaim. Their job was to dismantle unseaworthy ships, effectively turning rotten vessels into recycled timber. Yet, even they were shocked by this ship's state. It was utterly dilapidated. From afar, no two planks seemed intact, and its sails were tattered rags. They wouldn't be surprised if such a ship plunged into the sea the next moment. Many shipwrights put down their tools and headed toward the decrepit vessel. In their professional opinion, this ship absolutely needed to be dismantled. While they wondered what miracle had allowed it to sail this far, the probability of it reaching the next island was definitely zero. Under the curious gazes of several shipwrights, Alucard slowly descended from the ship. Seeing only a young man, seemingly under 20, the shipwrights were taken aback. What was going on? Was he alone? Who's the best shipwright on this island? Before the shipwrights could speak, Alucard posed the question. At the west side of the island, there's Tom's workers. He's the best shipwright on the entire island. A shipwright, for some reason, answered nervously. Usually, in such situations, they would recommend themselves or an acquaintance's shop, rather than speak the truth. But for some reason, Alucard's mere opening words instilled in them an inexplicable sense of awe, prompting them to blurt out the truth. West side, then? I see. Alucard walked in the direction the shipwright indicated. After a long moment, the few shipwrights snapped out of their stupor, all surprised by the strange deterrence they had just felt. Hey, that guy didn't even anchor his ship, one shipwright exclaimed, looking at the dilapidated vessel Alucard had piloted. After a ship docks, it should be anchored to the pier to secure it, otherwise it could easily be stolen or drift far away due to ocean currents. Does that guy not want his ship anymore? The bewildered shipwright who had answered Alucard's question earlier asked. Hey, another ship's coming? It's a wreck too, another shipwright suddenly pointed into the distance. Everyone turned to look. Indeed, a ship was approaching. Upon closer inspection, it bore a skull flag, a pirate ship. Even with the shipwrights' discerning eyes, they could tell this ship was severely damaged. But a pirate ship being damaged wasn't surprising, given their constant battles and skirmishes with the Marines. However, ordinary civilians still held a deep fear of pirates. Seeing the pirate ship, several quickly fled the area, fearing robbery. But those closely following pirate news would immediately recognize it, the flag of the Roger Pirates, the great pirate crew making waves in the Grand Line. About 15 minutes later, the Roger Pirates ship docked. After the gangplank was lowered, Shanks excitedly rushed off first, exclaiming, "Oh, we're finally here. We'll be in the New World soon, won't we?" "Don't get too excited, Shanks," Rayleigh said, stepping off the ship with a light chuckle. "This place is very close to Marine headquarters. We should try to keep a low profile." Another main combatant of the Roger Pirates, Gaban, also disembarked. He laughed, "Our ship's unusable. This trip to Water 7 is a perfect chance to replace it. It's tough to let go, but we have to if we want to keep sailing." "How's Roger doing?" Rayleigh asked. "He's recovered from the loss of our comrades, but he's furious about the Marines using those bizarre monsters. The captain's ready to go full throttle in the next fight," Gaban chuckled. "Anyway, let's go find a shipwright first. The Roger Pirates ship must be built by the best. Water 7, West Coast, Tom's workers." As Alucard arrived, he saw an exceptionally tall, yellow-skinned fishman with bullhorns hefting a pair of massive logs, placing them alongside a ship that appeared nearing completion. "He's very strong," Alucard observed, watching the fishman's back. Fishmen possessed physical constitutions far superior to humans, but the sheer quantity of timber he was hauling wasn't something an ordinary fishman could manage. "You're Tom, the best shipwright on the entire island, correct?" Hearing the voice from behind, Tom, wearing a blue short-sleeved shirt, turned to see a young man in a crimson coat who had appeared behind him without a sound. "That's right. Can I help you?" In an instant, Tom realized the man was no ordinary individual. If he were a pirate, he could easily command a bounty of over 20 million berries with that strength alone. It was impossible for an ordinary person to approach him so silently from behind. "Are you interested in building a unique ship, Tom?" Alucard asked, intrigued. "What kind of ship?" Tom's interest was piqued. "An ironclad," Alucard replied, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Chapter 48, Collision Imminent. An ironclad. Tom stroked his beard. Ships were always built from wood, which made repairs easier. The idea of building a ship from iron had existed long before he was born, but it simply wasn't feasible. Aside from the difficulty of repairs, the more crucial point was that sails couldn't move them, they were too heavy. All ships in this world relied on sails as their primary propulsion. Even the future Thousand Sunny's so-called propulsion system was only for emergencies, the main power for regular sailing still came from sails. Iron was too heavy for sails to move, and this was the main reason why no one, including the world government, used iron ships. Young man, do you know why no iron ships have ever sailed the seas, from ancient times until now? Tom seriously doubted if this kid understood anything about ships, asking him to build one that couldn't even move. Alucard smiled faintly. Of course, he knew this world lacked the propulsion mechanisms for iron ships. While he didn't have one himself, Alucard possessed a unique way of propelling a ship. Hidden Shadow could act as an engine, steering the vessel forward. Therefore, Tom only needed to construct the main body of the warship, no engine required. Alucard could make it move with his own abilities. The reason he was able to sail a dilapidated ship all the way here was precisely by using the power of Hidden Shadow. After explaining his idea to Tom, Tom frowned slightly in surprise. To propel a ship with an ability, did that mean this guy was a devil fruit user? But even an iron ship would require immense power to be driven by an ability. This young man before him was clearly not simple. Since business had been slow recently, and he himself was curious about what ability could propel a sailless iron ship, he took the job. What's your name, young man? Alucard. Tom nodded. Understood, Alucard. According to your idea, an iron ship can be built. Since steel will be used, the time and cost cannot be calculated at market price. Name your price. 200 million berries, a fair price. Tom added the last 3 words specifically so Alucard wouldn't think it was excessive. In truth, he wasn't lying. With large quantities of high-quality steel plates replacing wood, plus labor, 200 million was truly a fair price. Primarily, he was also very interested and wanted to know how a sailless iron ship would sail. Only 200 million. Alucard was quite surprised. He remembered how much Luffy's ship cost. It wasn't inferior to 200 million. He didn't expect his unique custom-built ship to cost no more than theirs. Only 200 million. Tom and the few shipwrights behind him were stunned. Was this kid a super-rich noble? Did 200 million mean nothing to him? Suddenly, Tom and the others saw something float up from the shadow beneath Alucard's feet, a leather briefcase. Alucard handed the briefcase to Tom. See how much is in there. Tom opened the briefcase and quickly counted. There's about 40 million berries here. It's barely enough for a deposit, but given Alucard's hedonistic nature, he usually spent money lavishly, not treating it like actual currency. The fact that he still had 40 million on him was nothing short of a small miracle. Don't worry, I'll pay the remaining amount soon, Alucard said with a confident smile. But, even if you say that, there's still a full 160 million remaining. Are there any pirates on this island with bounties exceeding 160 million berries? Alucard suddenly asked. You don't mean to. Everyone was startled, understanding what method Alucard intended to use to get the money. We're shipwrights, we don't know much about pirates. Tom blinked his small eyes, which seemed entirely mismatched for his large frame, and advised, don't be reckless. 160 million berries is an extremely high bounty. Building a ship like this will take at least a month. Even if you plan to earn money as a bounty hunter, you can slowly accumulate it by killing weaker pirates. Although Alucard had killed many powerful pirates, his reputation hadn't fully reached the ears of people like Tom, who didn't keep up with pirate news. Oh, is this Tom's workers? We need a ship built, boss. Before Alucard could reply, a man's shout suddenly echoed from a distance. Everyone turned to see a dozen or so men walking towards them. The one shouting loudly was a young man with a straw hat and red hair. The others all exuded an extraordinary aura, especially the man in the center with a curved black mustache and a wide, bright grin. He even made Alucard think, this one isn't simple. Quiet down, Shanks. Rayleigh, still with golden hair and quite young, stepped forward and said, apologies. We'd like to commission a ship to continue our journey. We need a large vessel capable of holding around 100 people. As the future Pirate King's first mate, Rayleigh typically handled such matters. Chapter 49, Alucard vs. Rayleigh. Are you, pirates? Tom asked Rayleigh, frowning. A group of over 10 individuals, all armed and reeking of blood, made it clear they were pirates even if Roger wasn't immediately recognized. Though he initially considered concealing their identity, Rayleigh no longer bothered once he realized they'd been seen through. He rubbed the back of his head with a wry smile. Apologies. We won't let it slip. We desperately need a good ship for the arduous journey ahead. Typically, pirates bought ready-made ships. If a shipwright were to custom build a ship for pirates and get caught, it would be a serious crime. Shipwrights naturally wouldn't risk such a grave offense. However, there were ways around it. If the Marines ever questioned them, they could simply pin all the blame on the pirates. Most shipwrights, being ordinary citizens, would simply refuse from the outset. The Roger pirates had previously bought ready-made ships, but with their upcoming journey to the New World, they urgently needed a better vessel. Hearing that Tom was one of the Grand Line's top shipwrights, they sought him out. Are these guys pirates? Alucard asked abruptly. Yeah, what about it? Buggy, seeing Alucard, who seemed to be around the same age as him and Shanks, readily admitted his pirate status even though Alucard currently had no bounty. Oh, so whose bounty reaches 160 million berries? Alucard asked, a subtle, knowing smile playing on his lips. At this point, Shanks already felt something was off, but Buggy, being the idiot he was, proudly blurted out, "Idiot, our captain's pirate crew, forget 100 million, there are plenty of people with over 200 million. Besides Captain Roger and Rayleigh-san, who've long since exceeded 300 million, Gaban-san and Odin-san also have bounties over 200 million, and even Crocus-san has a bounty over 100 million. Buggy jabbered on, listing the names and bounties of prominent members of the Roger Pirates. Suddenly, Alucard's mouth curved upward, revealing his signature sharp vampire fangs. Is that so? Then that's enough. The casual instantly pointed at Gaban, a combatant of the Roger Pirates with a bounty exceeding 200 million. Bang! Before most of the onlookers could react, a gunshot rang out. Alucard's eyes narrowed slightly, seeing a completely black sword blocking his path. Just like his encounter with Zephyr shortly after leaving the island, the bullet was blocked by armament Haki. However, Zephyr used his body, while this man used a sword. He turned to see a spectacled man in a black suit with distinctive golden slicked-back hair, who had blocked his casual with a sword imbued with armament Haki. Oh, is it someone with over 300 million berries? Alucard remembered Buggy's earlier introduction. But unfortunately, I only need 160 million right now. Of course, since you're delivering yourself to me, I don't mind. To dare attack our comrade directly in front of Roger and me, you've got guts. Rayleigh's eyes sharply swept over Alucard. He then turned to Roger, whose face was steadily growing more agitated. Roger, don't get involved. I'm enough. Rayleigh chose to act himself because Roger hadn't fully recovered from the ambush by Garp. At this time, the only thing that could truly shake Roger's resolve was the death of a comrade. This guy's bounty seems to be over 300 million berries. If I take his head, you can build my ship immediately, right, Tom? Alucard asked, glancing back at Tom. That. I guess so, Tom reluctantly nodded. He had just told Alucard to take them one by one, and now a complete pirate crew had conveniently arrived. If what the red-nosed guy said was true, then this pirate crew was definitely a famous top-tier crew in the Grand Line, even the New World. Wait a minute, at this point, Tom paused. The name Roger seemed familiar. Click. The sound of a safety catch disengaging. Alucard was ready, while Rayleigh's face turned grim. My head isn't something so easily taken. Too much talk. Alucard said coldly, pulling the casual's trigger, firing continuously. Get him, Rayleigh-san. Kill him, Vice Captain. Among the Roger pirates who had been moved to the side, Buggy and some other apprentices couldn't help but shout. Ha! Rayleigh let out a light gasp, gripping his sword and charging forward, simultaneously deflecting Alucard's bullets and continuously closing the distance. What in the world are these bullets? Rayleigh gritted his teeth as he deflected the casual's bullets. Due to the resistance on his blade, his movements looked somewhat sluggish. It felt like these weren't just bullets, but fierce wild beasts slamming into his sword. Chapter 50, The Scar on the Right Eye. Bang, bang, bang. Alucard fired continuously. Though his speed wasn't exceptional, Rayleigh still rapidly closed in. In just a single exchange, Rayleigh's keen blade swept out, narrowly missing Alucard's neck. Hee. Alucard chuckled softly, suddenly raising his black pistol, Jackal. He didn't even need to aim, he just fired. As before, Rayleigh used his sword to block. However, this time the bullet was completely different. He was thrown back several meters. What's going on? That gun. A hint of surprise flashed in Rayleigh's eyes as he stared at Jackal's dark muzzle in astonishment. He could guarantee that even blocking a cannon wouldn't make him retreat a single step, yet a single shot from that black gun sent him flying. Click. Alucard tapped Jackal with casual. Rayleigh noted this action, forming a prediction in his mind. Let's test it, Rayleigh thought to himself. He suddenly moved at high speed behind Alucard. However, the instant Rayleigh successfully repositioned, he found that Alucard had already passed his left hand through his right armpit, and the muzzle of Casual was aimed directly at him. Bang bang bang. As expected, he uses observation Haki. Huh? Not simple. Gunshots rang out again, and Rayleigh quickly dodged, thinking to himself that very few people in the first half of the Grand Line knew how to use Haki. Currently, even within the Roger pirates, only a select few had mastered this power. He never expected this kid, who was just an apprentice like Shanks and Buggy, to have also learned Haki. Rayleigh didn't know that Alucard didn't use observation Haki at all. He was using thermal vision, an ability to see through a person's body and pinpoint their location based on the different heat signatures they emitted. Ha! Alucard rapidly closed in, and the two began running along the coastline, sword slashes and bullets clashing repeatedly. Rocks and waves in their path were pulverized. That kid can actually fight Rayleigh to a standstill. Gaban, a combatant of the Roger pirates, said in disbelief. He then blinked as he witnessed another clash of bullets and sword energy. And that pistol's power is a bit too much, isn't it? For strong fighters, pistols were generally auxiliary weapons. Roger was the same, most of the time, he primarily used his sword and Haki for attacks. Got him. After over 100 exchanges, Rayleigh sharply twisted his body, his sword grazing past Casual. The blade's tip pierced Alucard's face, puncturing his entire countenance, a truly gruesome sight. Whoa, he's just a kid, you don't need to be so, Tom muttered, watching the scene. A pierced brain meant he couldn't possibly survive. That's how battles between pirate hunters and pirates go, Shanks sighed. He attacked Gaban-san first. If he had only gone after Rayleigh-san probably wouldn't have taken his life. It's a shame. Shanks felt a touch of camaraderie for this individual who could fight Rayleigh to such an extent and was around his own age. But unfortunately, the first rule of the Roger pirates was that anyone who attacked a comrade could never be forgiven. On the coastline, Rayleigh pulled his sword from Alucard's face. With a slight flick, sending a bit of white, brain-like fluid flying, he sighed, if your target had been me from the start, I would have spared your life. But regrettably, we lost too many comrades in our last battle. Now, that's absolutely impossible. Just as Rayleigh was sheathing his sword and turning to walk back towards the Roger pirates, Roger, who had been silently observing the battle, suddenly roared, "Partner! Behind you!" With his observation hacky and Roger's warning, Rayleigh quickly spun around. He saw that Alucard had, at some unknown point, produced a sharp knife and was bringing it down in a cleaving motion. If it connected, Rayleigh's head would be split in half. Draw his sword to block? No, his sword was in its sheath, there wasn't time to draw and block. He could only dodge. The thought flashed through his mind in an instant. Rayleigh quickly retreated. Though he avoided the fatal blow to his skull, the knife sliced his glasses in half and left a direct, bleeding scar over his right eye. Rayleigh had no time to cry out in pain. The moment he dodged the fatal wound, he immediately drew his weapon. Meanwhile, Alucard, with a hole gaping in his face, tossed the knife aside and once again revealed his two large handguns from within his blood-red greatcoat. To the shock of everyone present, the bloody hole in Alucard's face was rapidly healing. Upon seeing this, Seagull Gans Nosden, the Roger pirate's navigator, his pupils contracting, meticulously observed Alucard's attire and fighting style. He muttered to himself, red greatcoat, black and white twin pistols, and wounds that aren't fatal, powerful self-healing abilities. At this point, Nosden suddenly shouted to Roger, "Captain? That guy is Alucard. Dracula d. Alucard? The pirate hunter who's recently killed countless pirates in the Grand Line."